Hello, everyone. Welcome to NFL Week 10. We are kicking it off today with your NFL First Look. And of course, I'm Chris Spags. I'm not Josh Engelman, as much as I may aspire to be every single day here, but we are changing things up on this fine Sunday, NFL Week 10. Our pal Josh wants to go do some NBA, so we're going to support him on that one. And today is going to be me leading the ship here, but I'm going to be accompanied by a man, the only show, I think, on Stokastic where it's going to be two dads, two sick, exhausted dads here doing the stream. But I'm going to welcome my pal here, Matt Belman. Matt, how are you doing, man?
I am good, bro. Pumped to be on the show with you. It's like a dream come true. Been watching you for years, so excited to finally get on a stream with you and talk this main slate.
And now you can really see how we half-ass it here. First Look show. But no, it'll be a lot of fun today. Of course, lots of players to talk about. I hope you guys like the Bengals. We're going to be talking a lot about them today. And of course, we will hit on the sponsors and all of that. But I guess let's talk about an intro here and kind of an overview on the slate, Matt, because in this spot, you know, I always kind of have an aversion whenever I see on the Sims, of course, the Stokastic Sims that do a great job. The projections, you're really being pushed heavily towards the Bengals in a game that Houston going off last week, had the shootout game. This week, people chasing that one, but we have a banged up Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon, his inefficiencies. Obviously, a lot of guys in the Bengals. Trenton Irwin comes up a lot in the Sims. How are you feeling about the Bengals to start this one off before we go into the position by position?
I think in cash games and small field tournaments, they look like probably the best plays on the slate. Really, really hard to get away from them. You don't usually see a team in the NFL like this, like projecting so much better points per dollar than like pretty much every other spot. We have that here because of the matchup and because Higgins is out, and it just the trickle down effect of Higgins being out opens up a ton for everyone else on the roster. So I understand why Cincy is getting a ton of love. They're first in our top stack tool by a country mile. So I get it. They're getting a lot of love. I don't think like they're must plays in GPPs because there hardly ever are must plays in GPPs. There's certainly ways to get different that we can talk about, but know what you're getting yourself into. Like Cincy projects really well and they're in a great spot.
He won as the highest implied totals this week for Cincinnati in that spot against Houston. And we will talk about these guys. Let's talk about the running backs to start this one off, because obviously going to be a key play there with Joe Mixon projecting currently to be one of the chalkiest plays on the week on Stokastic as well as around the industry. Joe Mixon right now projected for 27% ownership according to Stokastic. Around the industry, seeing him a little bit closer to 26%, but still, obviously, we're seeing about a quarter of the field play Joe Mixon today. And again, we talked about it at the moment, though. The Bengals obviously projecting pretty well today. No T. Higgins. Joe Mixon in the last few games has actually looked pretty competent out there, getting some nice checkdowns for himself that had that PPR value we need. But Matt, with about 25% of the field, maybe 30% of the field playing Joe Mixon, and we have seen these ownership numbers really surge recently, where if a guy's an obvious chalk play, sometimes the field likes to jam him in up to 40, right. 50%. Do you think Mixon gets there today, or is he going to hold steady at around 25?
I don't think Mixon gets to that like concentrated 40 to 50% just because it's Joe Mixon. People don't really want to play him. You know, they will play him because he projects so well, but he's not a guy people are running to jam in. I totally agree with you. Oftentimes, especially recently, when we see these high ownership projections, it does get concentrated, and you see it like guys that are projected to be 25% owned come 35, 40% owned. I think Mixon could see upwards of 30%. I'd be surprised if he was much more than that. But he's in a great spot. Like, there aren't that many bell cows anymore in the NFL. He's not like a full bell cow, but he gets 80, 85% of the work there. He's cheap in a great spot in a game that they're favored. So I understand why he's getting a good amount of love. I will say, though, especially like going back and forth from doing NFL and NBA content, like 25% is just not that high owned. Like, I don't think you don't play Mixon because he's that high owned. I think that, like you said, if you're worried about it getting more concentrated and that ownership picking up, makes sense. And it's more for me like finding a couple low-owned guys that I think are in really good spots as opposed to just like fading the chalk, if you will. Quick question, though. Is that hat like a Twitter paint hat?
No, that is a Splash Play branded hat, my YouTube channel. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to plug here. But of course, Splash Play Monday to Friday at 11 a.m. Really brilliantly on my end, competing with the strategy show. So that's really, you always want to go against one of the flagship shows in the industry. But no, this is our cool little video game logo. So I got to rep the brand wherever we can.
Now that you said it, of course, I know that. And I feel like an idiot for asking. So sorry.
No, I'm a big Elon fan. I'm wearing my Elon
Musk
branded hat.
Yeah.
So Mixon, to kind of cap it off here with Mixon, 20 intended touches per game for him on the year, 3.9 red zone touches per game. Like the workload's there for him in this spot too. If you do expect Cincinnati to dominate, I could certainly imagine being with the field on Mixon. Sims for me pushing me towards about 64% Mixon. I don't think I will be quite there, but Mixon today looks like one of the strongest plays on the slate. And if you want to go a different direction, obviously for the big field tournaments, that's going to be a move. But Matt, I want to ask you about Tony Pollard, because Tony Pollard, a little bit of a higher price here. I do often like to go to these guys that have been big disappointments in the last few weeks. Tony Pollard, I think nobody's been as big of a disappointment for about a month now, in terms of chalk spots, in terms of all different spots where he's not gone off, had the really high red zone usage to start the year. And today, Matt, he's projected to be about 18% owned on Stokastic. So Tony Pollard, are you willing to go back there this week with, again, just a lot of people have been disappointed, and maybe the ownership comes down because of the fact that he hasn't gotten there in about 6 weeks?
I am willing to go back there, but there are certainly some red flags. So first off, he's in a great spot, at home in a game that they're almost 3 touchdown favorites. You don't see that in the NFL that often. So, pretty much, they expect Dallas to win this game. It's just dependent on how much. And I do get that there are some concerns on Pollard, like what happens if Dallas just gets up big? Is he not going to see any snaps in the second half? Well, they're going to have to score to get up big. So I'm not too concerned about that. My biggest concern with Pollard is just his numbers and metrics this year. Last year and the past couple of years, actually, he was one of the best running backs in the NFL, just not really getting enough touches with Ezekiel Elliott there. This year, that's just not the case. All his numbers are down across the board. Now, this spot is certainly a get right spot, so I'm not like overly concerned about it, but I don't think it's like just jam Pollard in and expect his season to turn around today. I think that's a likely outcome, but not like a guaranteed outcome. There are also scenarios here where Dallas throws for a couple touchdowns and then really takes their foot off the gas. So there are red flags with Pollard here. But again, I just talked about it with Mixon. There aren't many of these bell cows in the NFL that you can count on. Pollard is definitely one of them.
Yeah, some local reports as well from the beat guys around Dallas that maybe Rico Dowdle get in the mix more. I don't know this is the spot where you'd want to do that against the Giants team where you are, as Matt mentioned, a gigantic favorite. Matt, can you remember a line ever being as low as the implied total for the Giants for 10.5 points? Because I've been doing this now for about 5 years since I started with Stokastic many moons ago, and I can't remember a line that's been under 13, let alone being, we're almost at single digit territory with poor Tommy DeVito and his mom making chicken cutlets.
I know the Browns have had some really low totals in the past few years, not like recently, but in the past 5 to 10 years. But I cannot remember anything under 13, like you're saying. This is just absurd.
So the question I have too, because I think this ties in with Tony Pollard, and we have seen the last few weeks, and my pet thesis about Dallas is that, they passed a lot the last 2 weeks, obviously matchups against the Rams, matchups against the Eagles, spots where the teams going against Dallas could really put up a lot of points. I know we're talking about running backs here, but I think the CeeDee Lamb part of this equation is kind of an important one because CeeDee Lamb's gone off the last 2 weeks. I think people will chase that one again. But do you think game script wise that Dallas will actually be pushing the pedal to the metal here like they have? Because obviously the Giants, not a risk to put up a lot of points here. And Dallas, we know, a very risk averse team, one where Mike McCarthy has been pretty clear about, recently said he didn't want to feed CeeDee Lamb as much as they have been, but also they just want to run the ball. They want to let the defense do the work. And against the Giants, best case to do that. So how do you feel about the Cowboys approach here, Matt? Because it does feel to me like I think people will chase the CeeDee Lamb stuff. And if that's the case, I think the Tony Pollard part of the equation might be actually more appealing.
I totally agree with that. So the answer to your question is clearly concerned about this game getting out of hand and Dallas taking their foot off the gas here. The Giants, this is just not only a not great spot for them, but they're awful. They've shown with DeVito, they have a really hard time moving the ball, let alone scoring. So unlikely they do much on the offensive end here. And that could really hurt CeeDee Lamb. Now, the counterpoint is like what I mentioned with Pollard. If Dallas has the ball, the entire first half, because the Giants are just going 3 and out, they're going to score somehow. Maybe it's Lamb who catches the 2 touchdowns. For me, though, there are a lot of good players on this slate. Can't just talk about everyone and say I want to play them. So I'm with you in potentially fading Lamb. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. I thought there was a little bit of cutout there. Other running backs we should talk about. Again, Dallas going to be a key one. Of course, we'll hit on them in a moment when we talk about the receivers too. Rachaad White, Travis Etienne, Bijan Robinson, the other guys rounding out the top 5 highest owned running backs today. Do any of these guys do anything for you, Matt? Where Etienne, I know, has gotten there the last few times out. Feels to me like Etienne's been running a little bit hot in terms of the usage there. He's not getting a lot of red zone work. Has been breaking some big plays, had like a 40-yard receiving touchdown recently. Did Etienne. Rachaad White, we know, got all the checkdowns last week, had an outlier day. And Bijan, I mean, Bijan, there's nothing good that you could say at this point with how he's been used. I guess the only hope would be that, at a certain point, they just have to use him. But they've clearly shown with the Arthur Smith coaching that they don't want to do that. With White, Etienne, and Bijan, do any of these guys stand out as being worth the ownership, Matt?
I don't think so. I like Bijan in tournaments, but I hate that the ownership's there. Gotta like that he's Hartitz's copter play today, so that should go well for him. I don't know. Bijan's a tricky one for me. Like, he's not getting the work, but at the beginning of the year, he was really productive from a fantasy perspective. So not sure really like what quite the difference is. I haven't been playing too much of him at all. I do think this is a good spot. I could see both offenses in this game moving the ball really well, especially if Kyler is 85% of his normal self. So I think offenses in that game are interesting. I understand like the ETN play just because for fantasy purposes, he's been the second or third best running back all season. So, he's priced at an affordable price point. I completely get it. Don't love the spot against the San Francisco team off the bye. And then the other one you said was
Rachaad White.
I'm fine with White, but he doesn't really stand out to me. Tennessee's been really good against the run for years. Like, he'll probably catch some drop offs, but not a guy that I think I'm worried about not playing. Don't mind if I get some of him, in the Sims or in lineup generators and stuff, but not a guy I'm like looking to just lock in and move on at all. How about you?
Yeah, Tampa Bay, I think, good against the run, also pretty good defending running back targets as well, negative 0.07 EPA per target there. So anytime you're seeing a slightly negative target there, not something that I'm expecting to really want to target heavily. Rachaad White, the usage has been there. Certainly, I think people might get a little bit thrown off by him being in the Millie Maker winning lineup last week with that big Houston stack. For Rachaad White in the spot, I actually do think that Tampa Bay, Tennessee is kind of an interesting game environment. Not the highest total on that one, but two teams that don't defend deep balls that well, don't defend passes overall that well. I think it could be an interesting spot, but I really don't think Rachaad White's the guy that does that. I think it's more of a Mike Evans, maybe a Chris Godwin spot for them. Other running backs to touch on real fast: James Conner, Christian McCaffrey, Devin Singletary, another week with no Dameon Pierce. Matt, any of these guys could be a big part of your portfolio? And anybody you want to mention here, we could throw in. I know there's been some social media love for Najee Harris too this week of him getting in the box a couple times at $4,900 salary. Do you want any of these guys that we haven't talked about yet?
I do want a couple guys we haven't talked about, but you didn't even mention them. So first off, talking about Singletary, I like Singletary here. I think he's a solid fill-in play. I know he wasn't good last week, but mentioned it a couple times now. Like, there aren't many spots in the NFL where you've got one guy really concentrated on the work and the carries in the backfield. You're seeing that here with Dameon Pierce out. Singletary is going to be the guy in that backfield. I think Houston stays in this game, and I think Singletary has a chance to have a much better game than he had last week. Again, certainly not a guy I'm like afraid to not play, but a definite solid filler piece for a guy that is going to get, a good amount of touches today. Two guys I like a lot in tournaments that you didn't mention that I'd like to get your take on. First off is Kenneth Walker III. So he has been really, really good in fantasy when his team is like a 4.5 point favorite or higher. They're 6-point favorites here. The game script is perfect for him. No one is on him. We're just a couple weeks past from him being like really, really big chalk. I can't remember the spot, but now people are off him at that $6,800 price tag. And that at a similar pricing tier, Aaron Jones, $6,500. I'm really not buying this Steelers team. Neither of these guys are getting a lot of love. They unleashed Jones last week, and I could see a similar story here today. Do you have any takes on those guys?
So with Walker, the big concern to me is that, Charbonnet outsnapped him last week, and Charbonnet, I do think is, I would say, more talented back. Like, Walker clearly does some different things. Charbonnet, more of a well-rounded back guy who can actually pass protect, guy get out there and run some routes and actually add some value. And I think he's a better goal line back than people probably realize because Walker's been getting all that work. So that would spook me of Walker, but I agree that it's a good matchup against Washington. Like, Washington has been one of the worst teams, really one of the best teams to go against, but one of the worst teams defensively in the NFL. And in this spot, it does feel like Seattle, maybe can just lean on Kenneth Walker more. Obviously, we'll see if Washington puts up production. Maybe the pass game gets more involved. But I get it with Walker, and he's under 10% owned. So I think it's an interesting play. But would you have any concerns about the Charbonnet part of it? Because Charbonnet doesn't take production away. But clearly, if you're going to have half the snaps going to another guy, it's not the best sign for Kenneth Walker.
It's definitely not the best sign for Kenneth Walker. And that's a big reason why people aren't getting there is because of the emergence of Charbonnet. I do think Charbonnet is good. He was really good at Michigan, really good at UCLA. He can do a lot of different things. I still think that Walker is the better back right now. I'm not sure if you said you thought Charbonnet or Walker was. I personally think Walker is right now, but I agree with you. Charbonnet can do a lot of different things. I just think this is a really good spot for Seattle. I could see them scoring, a few different touchdowns here with the majority of the masses on the passing game. And I get it. Washington's been atrocious against the pass all year. But now after dealing Montez Sweat, Chase Young, they're pretty crappy all over. So I could see this as a game that Seattle just pounds it on the ground. Some concerns with Charbonnet for sure. And I think that it certainly doesn't make me like Walker anymore, for sure. No doubt about that.
And you mentioned Aaron Jones as well. Aaron Jones certainly has had the governor taken off recently in terms of his usage with the hamstring issues he's had. A low implied total for the Green Bay side of things here, 17.5 implied points in that game. But Aaron Jones, the usage has been there. He's been clearly a better back than A.J. Dillon on the year. And I guess at a certain point, I don't know if you feel how you feel about Green Bay. As I'm somebody who's been deeply burned by Jordan Love and Christian Watson in terms of the best ball season, and then chasing that, martingaling that into the regular season as well as not gone well for me. But Aaron Jones is like the one guy who can actually produce here. So Pittsburgh, certainly a team that can blitz at a high rate, that can open up some underneath routes as well for a guy like Aaron Jones. So I'm with you on Jones being an interesting tournament play. If I had to choose between Walker and Jones, I'd probably go Jones, but I imagine you'd go Walker based on what you said.
I think I like Jones more because you spooked me on Walker a little bit. I will say, though, like the only thing about last week that it's hard for me to really take much out of, they got steamrolled by Baltimore. So the game got weird. They didn't have the football much at all. They only gained like 85 yards in the first three quarters, and 50 of that was on a pass to DK Metcalf. So just a really, really weird game script. Like I said, I don't like Walker anymore because Charbonnet's there, obviously. But I still think Walker has big upside at that price point, and no one's getting there. And I just don't see him as that much different than the guys that are getting love, albeit I do think the guys that are getting love project a little bit better.
Yeah, you just need to hit that 2-touchdown day, and Kenneth Walker has shown that he absolutely can do that, even though he couldn't do it, as Matt mentioned. Couldn't do that a couple weeks ago against Carolina, but the usage was there from in that spot, and the situation against Washington. Maybe a similar game script could be there. Guys, we're going to talk about wide receivers here in a moment, but please make sure to hit that like button right now. Without Josh here, I don't know what to do to pander for likes. So all I could do is appeal to you earnestly here. I'll tell you guys, I'm fighting off a flu right now, but you can't tell because I'm a professional motherfucking broadcaster here. So please, as you can tell by dropping an MF, but please hit that like button down below. Matt and I up bright and early here as two exhausted dads, and we are doing the best we can to give you guys good takes. So please smash the like and help us out, and don't embarrass us as we head into Loughy and Ben coming up on the deeper dive in a moment here. Wide receivers, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Matt, projected to be the chalkiest play. It is Amon-Ra and Jamar Chase as pretty much a tier all to their own. Two guys projected for over 20% ownership, similar price tags as well. Amon-Ra at 8,300, Jamar Chase at 8,600 on owner's box as well. We are seeing some decent ownership going to Amon-Ra as well, though not quite as much, about 19% ownership projected for Amon-Ra on our sponsored owner's box. We'll talk about in a moment. But if you had to choose one, Matt, we got Jamar Chase with a banged up back. Amon-Ra, nice game script potentially for him going against a Chargers D that does not defend the pass very well at all, but also should be able to keep the competitive scoring on their side to keep Amon-Ra active. Who would you prefer, Chase or Amon-Ra?
All week, this question was Amon-Ra for me. It was the sun god at what I expected to be significantly lower ownership. That's not the case. So the answer for me is Chase. Chase without Higgins is like the best wide receiver in football by a lot, averaging something like 15 plus targets a game in games that Higgins has either missed or played less than 50% of the snaps on. Like, he's a cheat code in those spots. I love St. Brown here. I think he's a great play. If you're worried about the Chase injury, I completely get going to St. Brown. I think projection wise, though, like for me, with them getting the same ownership, it's Chase, and that's flipped from what I thought all week. How about you?
So I do like Amon-Ra. I agree with Chase. Obviously, we did see the ceiling day a couple of weeks ago with no T. Higgins out there. I believe that was against Arizona, where Chase absolutely went off. The back injury, though, when he got hit in that game, Chris Collinsworth said during the game, like, well, that's the kind of one. I mean, I'm going to do my Chris Collinsworth words. That's the kind of one where he's going to immediately injure himself. He's going to get up tomorrow. He's not going to be able to get out of bed. Like, that's so, like, I certainly think that the back injury for him is not the best spot to be in. And you certainly can see, Mixon, we talked about being chalk. Trenton Irwin going to be a guy that comes up a lot in the Sims. Tyler Boyd, maybe you can get there. The tight ends were heavily involved last time. There are some ways that they can have an outlier performance in terms of that offense, or at least a competent performance, and not really feel the need to feed Jamar Chase. Whereas for Amon-Ra, like, the Chargers are going to get points. Like, I do think the Lions D is pretty good, but I think the Chargers hang in that game. And as a result, Amon-Ra getting, 10 to 15 targets in this game would not be crazy to me either. So I think I would prefer Amon-Ra, but Chase, I guess the one question I have with Chase, do you think the field actually will own him at about 20% we're projecting?
No.
The field hates injuries. Absolutely.
So That's a good question. I will say, though, just to kind of pick apart your answer a little bit, I think that we actually see this really similarly, because I agree with you. If you ask me which one of these guys had 18 to 20 drafting points, I would say St. Brown. I think he's in a better spot for that. I agree with you. I think Cincy just has a better quarterback in Burrow that can just, pick apart whatever defense he's facing, especially Houston. So I'm with that point. But if one of these guys drops 40, I think it's Chase, just because he's shown much higher upside than St. Brown, like throughout his entire career. As good as St. Brown is, and he's on the upper tier of wide receivers, like he's a top 10 guy for sure. Chase is a top 3 guy. Like they're different in my eyes. So that doesn't matter for this slate. But just when I think of high end upside, like I think of Chase. Do I think the field will own him at that rate? Yeah, I do actually. I think it could even be higher just because of the numbers without Higgins. You've got an elite quarterback throwing him the rock. This is a game where, since he's favored and expected to score points, everyone just saw what Tampa did to this Houston offense last week. I think he's undoubtedly at least 20% owned. You don't?
No, I think so. I would think he would be. It's just sometimes with the field and an injury, like, they're going to see the Q tag on. I don't know if DraftKings is taking that off at this point, but that's something that does spook people sometimes. And I think could scare people from playing him relative to, like if he were full health, I would think he'd probably be 33% owned-ish. But because he's not full health, I think that he might come in a little bit under. But, like I agree with you. Chase has the higher upside. One thing that bothers me about Amon-Ra is just that, basically a 7 air yards per target kind of thing where he's just not getting, like, you're basically leaving about half the yards on the table because Jamar Chase is targeted about 13 air yards per target. So that's the kind of thing for Amon-Ra where he basically has to get there with, again, 15 catches, 150 yards and a touchdown or two, whereas Chase could get there on like just 200 yards and 1 touchdown and have that kind of day. But, the back is a concern and we'll see what the field has there. Ownership for Marquise Brown is pretty high, Matt. I'm surprised to see this one. We are seeing about 17% projected ownership there. We have Marquise Brown, number 3 overall, owned at wide receiver. DeAndre Hopkins at number 4. Tyler Boyd at number 5. Are you buying in on Marquise Brown taking a big jump upwards with Kyler Murray back in and on Call of Duty release week, nonetheless?
Definitely buying that he could take a big jump up with Kyler now back in the fold. Certainly an upgrade from what he's had this year, and he's been pretty productive. I did not expect him to be that high owned. He's like right now projected to be the 3rd highest wide receiver on the slate, 3rd highest owned, excuse me. And I get it at that price point. I'm a little bit concerned. He could easily get shadowed here by AJ Terrell, and he's a really, really good corner. I know Scott mentioned him on the show he did with Neil yesterday. So I think that's worth at least noting. That said, like, not sure what Kyler we see here. I think that's the big question. We saw Deshaun Watson come back last year and look awful for weeks. Now, different situation here. Murray's is just an injury. Watson was dealing with a ton of other stuff, as we know. I expect like Kyler to be pretty damn good if they're going to put him out here in a season that like they're really not going anywhere. So I like the Cardinals offense a little bit. The 2 pieces I like are Marquise Brown and Trey McBride, who we'll get to.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it. And with the Cardinals, certainly, like my thesis has always been this entire season that they need to get Kyler Murray out there to either show that he could be healthy if they keep him heading into next year, or they need to show he's healthy to trade him. And I think that's probably the more likely outcome, where I would think they would like to kick the tires because they have 2 high draft picks potentially that they could replace with a Caleb Williams or a Drake May if they want to go that way. But for this week, like a matchup against Atlanta, who we have seen occasionally struggle downfield, I guess the issue for me is just, with what Kyler put on tape last year is what he did last year. I kind of felt like he became a much worse player last year. And now we're talking about, a year out of action, learning a new offense. I think the biggest fear for me is that, and I think for Cardinals fans and for like the entire ecosystem they're trying to build, is what if Kyler is just not as good as Josh Dobbs at this point? Like, what if that's the case? And you don't want to hear that one?
I don't think that's I know, actually, it's funny you say that, and I remember watching this show a couple weeks ago, and I think you said something similar about Deshaun Watson and PJ Walker, and that might not have been you, but I'm not buying that. Like, I was actually going to say the other way. I think Kyler is massively underrated right now. Now, you're right. He wasn't good last year, so you got to take it with a grain of salt. But you look at the quarterback play around the league right now, it's awful. And this is a guy that's shown he can be a top 5 guy when healthy. I see you have a point you want to make, so go ahead.
Oh, no, I mean, I'm with you on that one. I think you're right about him overall. The lack of rushing enthusiasm he's had lately, like Josh Dobbs, for whatever it's worth. And again, I agree, like Josh Dobbs is a journeyman for a reason, even though obviously we've seen some of the upside lately. Like, Kyler, to me, I think just the issue is I don't think he's the same player. Like, I just don't think he has been. And now coming off an ACL injury as well. In an offense that has been pretty good, like better than it certainly should have been this year. I just worry that, he shows enough to be healthy, but isn't actually good. And that
That's fair.
Yeah. Creates
if you're right there, I think it's a big knock on Marquise Brown. And that concern would have me off of him personally. I'm not sure I feel similarly to you, but I do think that there are a bunch of question marks that I don't know the answer to. Sounds to me like I'm probably just in general a bigger Kyler Murray fan than you are. I think I am a bigger Kyler fan than most people. But that said, that doesn't really matter. And you're right. He wasn't good last year, even when he was healthy. So like, he's not a guy I'm super interested in playing today. I think you're seeing the Brown ownership just because of that price point. And I get it. I do like a guy in tournaments as a pivot at basically the same price point, who we'll get to in a little bit, and that's George Pickens.
Oh, okay, Pickens. It's a squeaky wheel narrative for sure for Pickens.
Yes.
And yeah, for Marquise Brown, for what it's worth, if you do want to play Kyler, and it seems like the chat is mostly on the same page as us as well. If you guys want to play Kyler, like, it's a good week to do it because you have Marquise Brown, who has a good projection and ownership coming his way. Trey McBride, good projection, ownership coming his way. But people aren't playing Kyler. So that's something I know Osmo, of course, great Alex Baker, mentioned many moons ago that I always stuck out with me is that when you see ownership going to two skill position guys and not the QB, that's just a good opportunity to seize on. So if you are a Kyler Murray believer, certainly a week that you can go there and feel that bad about it. A guy that I like, Matt, which I'm curious your thoughts on, DeAndre Hopkins. So there are two things, and it's something if you've been a long-time Stokastic viewer, you might remember a few years ago where I did tout a young Josh Allen against the Patriots. That was back in the days where a lot of you guys watching the stream were not actually here, unfortunately. But I was one of the first people on Josh Allen because he does two things well, or did two things well as a rookie. He ran at a high volume. He threw the ball deep at a high volume. Will Levis, Matt, I think is not very good. But I still think that he does show a propensity to throw it deep, 7 deep throws per game so far this year. They clearly schemed up a lot more the last week. Obviously didn't go so well against Pittsburgh last time out. Hopkins, though, I think can be a slate breaker at 6K, and I think he can actually get those kind of same plays that he got a few weeks ago when Will Levis looked like a world beater. Are you with me on DeAndre Hopkins, or do you not want to be part of a Tennessee offense here going against a Tampa Bay team that does struggle a lot against passes downfield?
We saw it last week with this Tampa Bay team just getting cooked by Houston. It's hard not to be on Hopkins with you there. That price point is really fair. It's almost like he's found the fountain of youth with Will Levis now at quarterback. Just the huge upgrade for Hopkins. Hopkins' numbers and target share, et cetera, have been really, really good since Levis took over. 10 days off here now after the Thursday night game. I got nothing bad to say about Hopkins here. He looks really, really good.
Yeah, it is a great matchup against Tampa Bay. And I will say, again, I wish the totals were a little bit higher here, but I'll be doing some Will Levis stacks, and I'll certainly be playing Hopkins without Levis as well. But I think it's worth a shot today just because Levis, again, you don't see a lot of guys throwing deep that often. And against Tampa Bay, if he does throw it deep 5 to 10 times in this game, he can absolutely have a lot of production that comes there just from the willingness to get it downfield. And as Matt mentioned, that's a lot of what had success last week for CJ Stroud. Will Levis is not CJ Stroud, to be perfectly clear about that one, but he does have some tendencies that I think can bode well for fantasy. And for me, Hopkins, I think, should be benefiting from that quite a bit today. Tyler Boyd is one guy we haven't hit on in the top 5, and then we have a lot of guys we could talk about quickly after that. But Boyd, obviously, people want to go there with no T. Higgins this week. Boyd could theoretically fill in. Historically, Jamar Chase has been a bigger beneficiary when Higgins isn't on the field. But are you going to Tyler Boyd at all, or Trenton Irwin? I guess any of the secondary, tertiary Bengals pieces, Matt, are you willing to go to any of them?
I am. I don't love him. Give me Irwin over Boyd, though. Boyd's dust. Like, he stinks. Doesn't mean he can't find the box today. No Higgins. They're going to be spreading the ball around. But we've read this story time and time again when guys have been out for Cincy and everyone just wants to go to Boyd. It's always that third guy that steps up. We saw in Arizona a couple weeks ago, Irwin was the guy that got a bunch of targets. I like going right back to him. He's cheaper. And that difference between 3,100, I believe Irwin is, and the 4,600 Boyd is a big, big difference when you think about like the percentages of salary. So give me Irwin here.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, Irwin came up a lot for me in the Sims to the point where I certainly felt a little bit uncomfortable seeing the number. But actually, let me make sure I'm quoting this accurately. But I got, let's see. Yeah, I got 35% Trenton Irwin on the Sims. And we'll see if I roll in with that number. That is a pretty steep number. But clearly, as Matt mentioned, the salary there, it's a little more of an NBA DFS thing than an NFL DFS thing where a 3K guy is not going to kill you. If a guy's very chalky, though, he can kill you in NFL. But it doesn't seem like Irwin's going to be that highly owned, right?
So it's a good point you brought up. Like, it's just different from NBA. Like in NBA, if you get just a median score off 3K here, you're probably fine just because of everyone else you're able to build around him. And that's kind of the case here too, because Irwin at 3K, you don't really need him to break the slate if it allows you to roster, let's say, a Chase and an Amon-Ra, and they both go off. So it is really similar to that. And I talked about it with Singletary at 4,700. Like, that's a great price point for a guy that's going to get a lot of carries. Now, he's not great. They're underdogs, et cetera, et cetera. Irwin's 1,700 cheaper than that. Now, not guaranteed the touches, but, in PPR settings, obviously the catches are worth a lot more. He looks like probably the best, like, just pure value play on the slate to me in terms of, cheap value, if you will.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the one, risk point is just the opportunity cost, where if you do have
for sure
a Marquise Brown putting up 30 and then Irwin puts up 10, like, you're probably dusted at that point. But I think in terms of what he can open up, if you hit the nuts with your other positions, if you cram in, like Matt mentioned, cram in the top receivers, cram in Christian McCaffrey, do something else to make usage of that money that can give you a real ceiling. I think that's how Irwin gets there. But 3K salary, definitely hard to ignore. You mentioned Pickens, and I'm always in the bag for Pickens. He's one of the guys that I really liked a lot coming into this year. Again, the squeaky wheel narrative that we talked about earlier, where he unfollowed everybody on social media, groused about it. Mike Tomlin had to give quotes to the media and said it was like a pebble in his shoe, the issue of George Pickens wanting more touches, and he expects George Pickens to want more touches. That said, Matt, I think if you're Kenny Pickett, I think you feed George Pickens here. I think you kind of have to, because he's the guy that long-term probably more tied to Kenny Pickett's success than Deontay Johnson. But Deontay Johnson, I hate Deontay Johnson heading into the year, because he was the least efficient receiver in every metric I look at last year. And he's been a different man. He's getting targeted downfield more. I think he's looked a little better than Pickens, at least when both of them are on the field. But Pickens, you mentioned him, so I'm curious your thoughts and why this is the week that you might want to go to him.
So a couple things here. I think that just his ultimate week by week upside hasn't changed. We saw it earlier in the year against Cleveland when he had that monster game. He's got really, really high upside because he's a guy that can break a long play on any given play. I love the double leverage for him here. You not only get leverage off of Deontay, who you mentioned, who's getting over double the ownership. You also get leverage off Marquise Brown, who's the same price point. You can certainly play those guys together, or play Johnson and Pickens together. When you get that double leverage of a guy who's on the same team with another receiver getting a lot of love, and the same price as another receiver getting a lot of love, it won't cost you any upside at all. Actually might have higher upside than either of these other two guys. That really speaks to me in tournaments.
No, I think that's fair. And Pickens, we know, has the explosive upside. Obviously, people want a nickel and dime and being a go route guy, even though I think he showed a little bit more when Deontay was out. But the go route guy can put up 2 touchdowns, and not have that be too much of a pull on him. And especially with Deontay putting up some good games recently, like, you could definitely see things open up more for Pickens. But we'll see. And I hope you're right. I really do hope that Pickens has a resurgence here, because it certainly would be nice for me to see. And I think he's frankly more talented than Deontay, but just the way they get used is not quite the same. 2 guys we haven't hit on that are pretty important. Again, similar price tags to Amon-Ra, Jamar Chase, who we talked about. Keenan Allen and CeeDee Lamb. We talked about CeeDee Lamb a little bit. I've not talked about Keenan Allen. And Keenan Allen is one of those players that he's priced up again. He's not had a ceiling in basically a month and a half. Obviously has not benefited the way people might think, with no Mike Williams out there, no Josh Palmer out there. But I think, Matt, I'd prefer Lamb to Keenan Allen. But the game theory for Keenan Allen to me feels pretty strong, just because I really don't think he gets even 14% owned, which is what we're projecting right now. Yeah. So how do you feel about Keenan Allen and CeeDee Lamb?
I think all that ownership that we talked about potentially going to Amon-Ra and Chase, as opposed to them being 20%, they're 25 to 30%, comes off guys like Keenan Allen, the guys right below them. Not positive of that, just because he's in such a good game environment and people want to play this game, but he's so expensive that people just don't. He's more than Chase, so people just aren't really going to want to pay that tag. I'm with you. From a game theory perspective, he looks really, really good there. From a medium perspective, he doesn't. I think I prefer him over Lamb, though, just because of everything you said. Worried about Lamb here in this game script. Like, Lamb should be good, but worried about his ultimate upside in a game. The Giants just really won't be able to move the ball. So give me Allen there, knowing that, like, he's probably got a lower floor, but I still like his upside more in GPPs today.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page with you. I mean, I see the price tag for Keenan Allen being 8,800, so he's higher priced than Amon-Ra, higher priced than Jamar Chase, higher priced than CeeDee Lamb. You have the box score games for CeeDee Lamb being there. You have Chase without Higgins. You have Amon-Ra. The people I think are just always willing to go to if he does seem like a solid play in a high total game. So I think Keenan Allen could be something of a forgotten man. Like Matt mentioned, it is an appealing game environment overall, so maybe not. But I do think Keenan Allen, I find it hard to believe that people are going to get there as much as they should, just because he's a little bit higher price than he probably should be. And again, you have so many guys around him that people are going to want to chase. The CeeDee Lamb thing we talked about enough, I think, but my bet on CeeDee Lamb is just that I don't think he has the outlier day here because they don't have to push as much as we talked about earlier. Anybody else we should hit on here? Tank Dell, I feel like obviously no Nico Collins this week. So Robert Woods, Tank Dell, two guys that project decently. Noah Brown. Do you want to chase any Houston stuff? I mean, CJ Stroud, I love. Highest pass rate over expectation that team has had the entire year is what they put up last week. But do you think they do it again? Can they get there without Nico Collins?
I don't think they do it again, but I don't think they're bad plays either. Like Tank Dell's still very affordable, 5,500. You mentioned no Nico. Tank and Stroud have a really good rapport, so expect that to continue. Noah Brown looks like a nice value play, 3,700 still, under 4K. That works. They've probably been, I don't know if they were at Ohio State together. It doesn't really matter, but they've got some familiarity there anyways. I don't know. Two guys that just kind of spark my interest in GPPs that aren't getting love that I wanted to mention. One is getting a little bit, 8.5% DK Metcalf. I know that there have been reports that he's not fully healthy. He has no injury designation today. Last week was an awful performance from Seattle. Really hard to take much out of that. They just couldn't get anything going against Baltimore. Metcalf did have that 50-yard reception. And I just think he's a guy like, if you don't start giving him, like feeding him the rock, you're going to start hearing some frustrations out of him. Don't really want that. This is a great spot for him to get going. I like DK here, but then a guy I like at even less ownership, and then you could talk on them. Deebo Samuel. San Fran was missing Deebo in a big way while he was out. They lost all 3 games he missed. He got hurt in the beginning of the Cleveland game. They lost that game and then the 2 games after that. I mean, we've seen time and time again, Deebo breaking slates, destroying his price tag. I don't really understand why he's getting no love. I understand why he's not chalk, but I don't understand why, less than 4% of the field is getting there.
Yeah, I don't love the matchup against Jacksonville's defense. Like, that's the one thing that I would say on the year. I haven't really gone against Jacksonville's D too often because they've been, them and the Chiefs, I think, are two where it's like you want them to be in these shootout environments. But the defense is just good enough that it doesn't happen. So I could see what you're talking about with Deebo. The price tag, obviously not that bad. I tend to be more of an Ayuk guy, but Ayuk's price tag is pretty gross. So I get the logic. Metcalf, though, I do like a lot more. I agree with you. Like, I think the usage has been there for him. Tyler Lockett's probably gotten a little more work than he should this year, just what DK Metcalf has been. And Metcalf, too, has been very efficient this year. The EPA metrics for him have been very high. Expected points added stuff for him where he's been 0.11 EPA per target. Lockett's been 0.27 EPA per target, so adding more value. But Metcalf, I think, just getting downfield, getting open against, again, a Commanders D that has gotten a lot worse, traded away 2 of their best players, and they were already bad with those 2 players. So I think Metcalf can get there. Anybody else a receiver that we should touch base on, or are we good?
2 other GPP calls, just going to call him out. At one point, this guy's going to go off, Quentin Johnston, still a believer. And then a guy that I just seem to can't get off all year, Elijah Moore, is a good spot for him this week. So I like Elijah Moore here to potentially have a breakout game.
And also a spot that you could play all these guys would be over at our sponsor, Owner's Box. Make sure to check that out. Of course, Owner's Box doing a lot of great things over there, approaching the DFS format differently, where you can play with super flex. You don't have to worry about your defenses and all that nonsense. And of course, they put on this show every week, so you should go support them right now. On your first deposit with a minimum of $10, you'll be eligible to earn a bonus amount equal to the amount deposited, such as a $250 bonus for a $250 deposit. Your maximum bonus on Owner's Box is going to be $500, but they'll release it via site credit in the form of Owner's Bucks. So Owner's Box, Owner's Bucks. There we go. But of course, check it out. And if you do check it out, you'll also get one $5 Lightning Lineups entry, which is a lot of fun. The Lightning Lineups thing is one thing that jumps out where there's been a lot of conversation recently in the DFS industry and perhaps some of the big players trying to limit innovation from some of the other players. Owner's Box is a thing where you can just pick out lineups out of a pool, basically, and you can then that's your team. You're just picking out players off of that. So different stuff to do in Owner's Box. And of course, the discount there or the deal you're getting to match up to $500. It's about as good as you're going to get. So play on Owner's Box. If you are playing on Owner's Box as well, some of the highly owned players on there today Guys like Joe Mixon, going to be 39% projected owned on Owner's Box. And of course, Stokastic does have data and Sims for Owner's Box as well. So you can play on there, get some good entries in. Trey McBride going to be chalky in Owner's Box. Evan Ingram going to be chalky. Tony Pollard, Joe Burrow. Of course, it is super flex. So QBs get a little bit higher owned on Owner's Box. But check it out. Again, our old pal Rinpack is one thing that always stuck to me is he would play on some of these sites before because he found it a lot easier to win money when you're just not playing with all the sharps, not playing against all the guys who are crushing it on DraftKings and FanDuel. If you go to Owner's Box, you're just competing against a softer pool. So that with a deposit match, you'd be doing yourself a disservice if you didn't play on Owner's Box. So check it out right now and check the link in the description. And of course, you must be 18 years of age or older, or the minimum age for permissible use in your jurisdiction. What an ad read! The minimum age for permissible use in your jurisdiction. That Matt, does that sell you? If you're
say that 10 times fast, right?
Jesus Christ. Either way, check out Owner's Box and appreciate them helping us put on this show here. Next positions that we have to hit on here, of course, we'll try to get it in fast down the home stretch. Tight ends. Tight end this week going to be a little bit of an uglier scenario than we've had recently. Earlier in the week, it did look like TJ Hockenson was going to be the chalk play of the week across every position. Now he's the chalkiest tight end and still projected for about 18% ownership on DraftKings. Matt, you also mentioned Trey McBride. Who are your priority tight ends this week based on what you're seeing so far?
If Jeff Swain is out for Arizona, I think McBride is the best overall play on the entire slate. There's no limit to the amount of snaps he could play today. Now, Swain is not a guy that's going to take away like routes or targets or anything like that, but he's a guy they used a lot last week for blocking. So love McBride no matter what, but he's a must play for me if Swain is out. There are some other really good tight end plays on this slate. Not really the high end guys. You know, there's no Kelsey. I think Andrews is interesting in tournaments because no one's going to get there, and he has destroyed Cleveland throughout his career. Earlier this year, he had his best game of the season. So I'm not playing because of that, but it's worth noting that like no one's playing the best tight end on the slate. Hawkinson's too cheap. I understand why he's getting all the love. You know, Dobbs really looked his way last week. That makes sense at 5K. Dalton Schultz is in a great match against Cincinnati. And then Laporta looks good. The guys that are getting ownership are the guys that look good to me. I don't really have any sneaky plays here.
Yeah, Laporta, one thing that jumped out to me was his prop markets out there. I think he's heading towards a positive EV on the over of 5.5 catches for him. And that's a lot for Laporta, given that his biggest fantasy days have come with like a 50-yard touchdown or just getting in the box. For him to get actual reliable usage, and he's been, had a pretty good floor, but also had a pretty good ceiling too. I think that Laporta, pretty interesting as well. But
I think he was dealing with an injury of some sort that they just had to buy. I'm not positive, but just wanted to point that out into what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the bag for Laporta anyway. He was one of the rookies that jumped out to me for sure. But this spot with him about 10% owned, I'll have some Laporta for sure in that game environment that we talked about a lot of Detroit and the Chargers. And Trey McBride, I guess the question I would have for you, he's 3,500. And I did see with some of the lineups that you build out there using projections, you're getting a lot of tight end in the flex. Are you going, tight end plus tight end in the flex? Because it does feel like you're going to get a lot of Hockenson, McBride lineups. Evan Ingram, who's been looking better recently, finally got a red zone target a couple weeks ago. So that's a positive sign for him. Do you foresee yourself playing a lot of two tight ends, or is that something you might try to take out of your pool?
Neither. I think that I'm fine with it. I don't perceive myself getting to a ton of it, but it makes sense to me today because the tight ends are just, seems like they didn't really price the tight ends up here when every other position has been. So talked about like Trent Irwin at 3K. I'd rather play McBride at 3,500. I think he's got a higher floor and probably a higher ceiling. And then you've got guys like, I mean, I get it. Like just because they're in such affordable price points, Laporta under 6K. I mean, I think the big reason there is Hockenson is so cheap. I think Hockenson McBride might be a not popular duo, but those are going to be the two tight ends that a lot of people are getting.
Do we think that Hockenson is worth like the chalky ownership? Like I know you mentioned he was fed pretty well by Josh Dobbs in that first game. I like Hockenson, but I do feel like his ceiling might not be the highest overall in this spot. Obviously no Jefferson again, so that does offer some opportunity. But Hockenson, is he worth being the chalkiest tight end by a wide margin?
I think we see this eye to eye. Not for me. Like I don't mind him here. He looks certainly to be in a good spot. But I think if you saw that price tag just like a couple $100 more, he wouldn't be as popular, nearly as popular. And like, I get it. Like he's a really good points per dollar play, but I don't view him that much different than the other guys we talked about. My favorite tight end on the slate, like if I can get there, would be Laporta. He's just like, you kind of have to go out of your way to make him happen as opposed to McBride, who you can just easily fit in. So yeah, I'm on the outside looking in on Hockenson today. I'd rather spend down on McBride or spend a little bit higher on Laporta.
And also, I will highlight quickly Jake Ferguson as well, $4,600 salary. He's been getting great red zone work on the year, about 2 red zone targets per game for him. And in a spot where Dallas has, again, one of the highest implied totals on the slate and really no risk of that game getting weird. There's a way where Tony Pollard doesn't get there and CeeDee Lamb doesn't get there. And that's probably a 2-touchdown day for Jake Ferguson. So not a play that I'm like betting my life on or anything, but I do think Ferguson a little bit under-owned for a game environment that people are going to be going pretty heavily, presumably, to CeeDee Lamb and also to Tony Pollard. Any other tight ends that are worth highlighting? Chig, I talked about liking Levis a little bit. I don't know that I like Chig that much, but he's a player. Logan Thomas, Cade Otton, Kittle, pretty low owned, really bad salary on him at 6,100, but we know the ceiling is there. Any of these guys seem worth even a minor flag plant for you, Matt?
I think Chig is worth a look as like the second piece if you're playing Levis and Hopkins. Like, I think he's the second guy you'd probably want there at that price point. No one really stands out. The guy that just the obligatory, call out of the week, Kyle Pitts. Like, I do think Heineke being there helps him just because like he's not a good quarterback, but he's shown that there's difference between these like really, really shitty quarterbacks like DeVito that can't do anything and not good quarterbacks like Taylor Heineke that can move the ball down the field, just make stupid mistakes. So I think Heineke's one of those guys that can really move the ball. I think that could be a beneficiary for Pitts. So at 4,100, I think he's worth talking about, if nothing else.
And also the fact, too, that Jonnu had the big touchdown, big box
Right.
score game last week, and he's cheaper. Like, I think people are going to start to maybe move a little bit more towards Jonnu. And if that's the case, Pitts buying while there's a little bit of blood in the streets relative to Pitts' recent outputs, I think would be a pretty good spot to go to. We are going to hit defenses here, guys. And as you know, there's nothing a DFS host hates more than talking defenses. So please smash that like button down below, guys. We have over 200, but it would be nice to get to like 300-ish if we could, I think. So please hit that like button here. And of course, deeper dive coming up next with Loughy and Ben doing the great job they always do here. So hit the like for us, not for them. They have enough kudos. They do enough of a good job. We need the like. So please smash that like button right now here. Help a brother out. And of course, subscribe to Stokastic as we are on the march here to 100K subs on Stokastic as well. Defenses, Matt. So we have the Cowboys D, 4,400. They're going to be the chalk defense of the week, it looks like. 12% projected ownership. Ravens D, Bucs D, Seahawks D. Are you willing to play the Cowboys D? Because we talked about a couple guys, Trenton Irwin, Trey McBride. You can afford the Cowboys D if you go to those guys. Are you willing to play the Cowboys against, I think, the worst QB we've seen in the league besides maybe a Nathan Peterman within the last few years? Are you willing to go to the Cowboys given that price tag?
Willing, yes. Priority, no. Like, I agree with you about DeVito. I just don't think they're going to put him in a position to throw a ton of picks and get sacked a lot. They're more likely to concede this game than anything if they get down big, which is no good for your defense. Now, the Giants aren't going to be able to score, and they're going to have to throw. So you have the opportunity for that stuff and sacks and, the no score bonus. They look good. I just rarely spend up for like the chalk D, and I don't see myself wanting to do that here. D is pretty weird this week. There is no D like at least under 3K that looks really good, which is where the field usually likes to go. So that's why Dallas is getting ownership, and I get it. I prefer Seattle, a couple hundred cheaper. I think they have just as much upside, and they're not getting nearly the ownership in GPPs. But yeah, I think it makes sense why Dallas is getting so much love. They're not a priority for me personally, though.
Yeah, I think it's a fair way to look at it. I think they're a distinct tournament play. I mean, we did see again, Utica last week play the highest dollar defense, and that was part of his approach. I think this week there is some logic there. You look at Tommy DeVito's numbers, and I'll just quickly read them off because I do think
the difference is though, like last week he played the Browns, right, and they were low owned. This week Dallas is really, really high owned. So yeah, it doesn't really matter in terms of how they're going to score, but just worth noting. And then also wanted to ask you real quick, did we do quarterbacks?
We do quarterbacks at the last part because I feel like that's But yeah, we'll hit quarterbacks in a moment here. But just real fast for Tommy DeVito's sake. I just have to point out he's been one of the worst QBs that I've seen in all the metrics I look at. Negative 0.7 EPA per drop back. Of course, expected points added. If it's positive, that means you're adding value. If it's negative, that means you are actively removing value. So he's basically costing them negative 0.7 points every time he drops back. Also negative 0.92 EPA per pass. Negative 1.1 EPA per deep throw. Negative 1.7 EPA per pressure play. Negative 2.4 EPA per play action play. Tommy DeVito is objectively, and again, I like the bit of him living with his mom. His mom makes his bed, makes him chicken cutlets. That is a good Italian boy and living in Jersey. But besides that, though, this is like legit one of the worst QBs you'll ever find. So I don't hate playing the Dallas D just because DeVito is legit that bad.
I'm glad we didn't do quarterbacks yet, because I was going to ask you if you thought that taking a shot on a $4,700 DeVito was worth a gamble in tournaments. I still don't think it's the craziest thing in the world. we've seen crazier things happen.
I agree. I think that we have seen some really, I mean, the Gardner Minshew versus the Browns D game is one where that one wasn't even played at all. And Minshew's, a competent professional QB, whereas Tommy DeVito is a rookie who probably is his best lot in life is being like a third string QB. But I agree, like for tournaments, if somebody out there thinks that, and with these numbers being that bad, he's probably due for positive regression. It's like you can't be this bad forever. So if you want to play him, you can. But I'll never begrudge anybody. Like if you do a stack, like stack up any QB. I don't care.
I will say though, like I don't have strong. Obviously, I'm not like playing DeVito and have no strong takes on it. But my take on not prioritizing Dallas D could look really stupid, at 1:30 Eastern, because like you said, DeVito is awful, and Dallas has shown time and time again this year they're a team that takes the ball away and scores on D. So I could be looking silly for not prioritizing them. I get it.
Yeah, I want to have some for sure, but I'll also play some Giants D at 2,100 just in the hopes that they're the one touchdown. Like
at 2,100, if they get a return for a touchdown and give up 30 points, they're still going to be optimal.
I agree. I look, in the Giants, like offensively, I'm not expecting much, but they're going to put up 10 points in this game. Could easily be a defensive takeaway. We got a few minutes left here. Of course, deeper dive coming up in a moment. We're going to talk about QBs here, but real fast, let's talk about our friends over at Sleeper because they're offering a great deal for you guys today. Sleeper, of course, you get up to a $100 first deposit match. You can win up to 100x payouts on there, which is the highest payouts on the DFS market. You can also place in-game contests. There's a lot of things you can do on Sleeper to make it worth your time. Dynamic payouts. Each player projection now has a multiplier attached to it. So some other similar sites out there have done things. Sleeper trying their best to get your money. And even better for you guys, there's actually a free square on Sleeper today. Josh Jacobs over 0.5 rushing yards is going to be your free square. So check it out. More info, of course, going to be in the link in the description down below. And you could even do some group chats on Sleeper. So if you have your season-long teams on there, play on Sleeper. Of course, they're trying to get into the picks game as well and offered some great deals. And really that free square for Josh Jacobs are probably worth your time. So go play on Sleeper right now. QBs. Joe Burrow, the chalk here, Matt. We've talked a lot about the Bengals already today. 16% ownership on Joe Burrow. Is that right to you? A little bit too high? Where does it land?
I think he's going to be higher, personally. Like, I know quarterback ownership doesn't usually get too high. He stands out. People want to play all those receivers. He's been really good. He looks like the best quarterback on the slate. I mean, our top stack tool, like this is where it's tough for me. Love Cincinnati here. They have a 20% chance of being the top stack on the board. That's crazy high for NFL purposes. Burrow's only getting 16% ownership. They have a 40 rating, which is like the next highest is 25. That said, I look at a team like the Chargers. Herbert's more expensive than Burrow. They don't have nearly as similar rating as them, but they have an 8% chance to be in the top stack. Only 2% ownership on Herbert. Like, I'm real interested in that type of play in tournaments, but on a projection basis, I think you just plug in Burrow and move on. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially with the ownership we're getting, where you are getting a lot of QB +2, QB +3 with Mixon, Chase, and then maybe a Trent Irwin. It makes a lot of sense to go to Burrow. I think that for tournaments, I wouldn't hate the approach of you could play 2 Bengals, but maybe don't play Burrow and try to get a different stack that can help vault you over the top of the Burrow stacks. But obviously, if you are playing, 3 Bengals, then it just makes the most sense to put in Burrow. So I have no issue with Burrow, but anytime a QB is going to be that highly owned, I kind of tend to think you're going to do better going a different direction and trying to get another stack put on top of that. But hard to argue Burrow for all the reasons Matt mentioned. And, one of the highest totals of the week. Houston should be able to put up some points on there and to keep the game lively. So for Burrow, I think there's a lot of logic. Geno, though, at number 2, it's to round out the top 5. It's Geno, Dak, Brock Purdy, Jared Goff. Matt, I think based on what you said, I would presume you're probably the most in the bag for Geno here out of the rest of the top 5 with Dak, Brock, and Jared Goff.
I would say it's actually Jared Goff for me. I like Geno. I just hate that the ownership's here. Like, I get it because he's so cheap and such a great matchup, but he has not been good all year. And I hate playing guys like that just have not been good. And the ownership's getting funneled there just because of the spot, because people want to play the receivers. I don't love Goff on the road, but he's been much better than Geno this year. I like the game environment a lot more for Detroit than I do Seattle. So this is another one. I think Geno probably projects a little bit better at a cheaper salary, but Goff is a guy that gets higher upside here. So I'm on the Goff train there. I do like Geno more than I like Dak. I think that the case for Dak would be like if he was going to come in really low owned, but that's not the case here. So I'm going to skip Dallas for the most part. I think Pollard's my favorite play there, which I think you see it similarly.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say for Brock Purdy, one thing that I'll point out, and this is obviously, more of a me thesis than it is something that's has any real data backing it out. But the Niners, to me, like they've been approaching every game this year like it's last year, where that defense was a world beater. They didn't have to push things to the limit quite as much. And it could be what Matt mentioned, not having Debo the last few weeks as well. But I do think for the Niners coming off a bye, like they should really be trying to put Brock Purdy in action a little bit more. The guy's got 30 dropbacks a game, which is about 10 less than other QBs. And I think this offense for the Niners should be one where they try to actually put up more points because they just can't get there the same way they did last year. Maybe they'll feel differently after the trade moves they made and all of that. But for Brock Purdy, I think being under 10% owned, I'm kind of intrigued by him, even though Jacksonville's defense, as we mentioned, is pretty good. I feel like for Purdy, like if he's ever going to get pushed to the limit a little bit more, it's after they're on a losing streak coming off the bye. Maybe Purdy finally gets back to throwing it deep a little bit more. So for Purdy, I do find him pretty interesting. And Matt, I'll throw the floor to you, of course, if you want to give anybody else out there. But Will Levis going to be completely unknown, and I'm going to get some shares there. 2% Will Levis ownership, and I'm going to die on the Will Levis train. Anybody you want to plant a flag for here, Matt?
I don't want to plant a flag on him, but I'm really interested in seeing Kyler. We discussed him at length a little bit ago, so don't really need to get into it again. I think he's worth taking a shot at in tournaments if you're not of the opinion that you have. Like if you think that, last year was just kind of a down year for him and, he's fully recovered now, maybe even a little bit healthier after the injury, you're never going to see him this cheap again. And we know he's got he's got Lamar type upside because of his ability to run. So don't know if we're going to see that. A lot of red flags, a lot of question marks, but that's why the ownership isn't really there. And again, I'm not like planting my flag there, but there aren't quarterbacks on this slate that I look at and I'm like, damn, I'm scared not to play him. Even a guy like Burrow, like he's not running. You need him to throw for a bunch of touchdowns, which could easily happen. Kyler is a guy that if he's healthy, he could be the highest scoring quarterback on the slate and no one would blink an eye.
Yeah, 5% ownership for Kyler. And again, we do have the chalky ownership going to Trey McBride and Marquise Brown. So get different by playing Kyler there. That's one thing you can absolutely do. All right, guys, so that's about it for us here. Again, hit that like button down below. Matt, any final words for you? Of course, you should be following Matt at Fantasy Tips Matt. You can follow me at Chris Spags. And of course, you should be hitting that like button before we go as well. But any final salvos here before we call it quits and hand it over to the deeper dive, Matt?
No, I hear the baby crying in the background. So perfect timing.
Yeah, my baby's out of the house, so I'm going to go die in my fluey state on the couch. Check me out on my YouTube channel, Splash Play, of course, Monday to Friday at 11 a.m. And, of course, appreciate all you guys being here. And stay tuned. The main event coming up next. Loughy and Ben doing a great job going game by game on the deeper dive. Stay tuned here. A lot of stuff coming up on the Live Before Lock stream as well in a little bit. So hang out. Stokastic, always here for you guys. We appreciate you hanging out with us. See you guys soon. Enjoy your days. Good luck.
Well, we had to take a couple weeks off, but we are back, and we are back bigger than ever. It's the Stokastic Hall of Fame, and we've got some absolute bangers for you. I may lose my voice after doing this, reading off all the massive Stokastic wins we've seen from the past week or two. Welcome back to all of us. All you got to do to get involved, get a free month of any package you want, up to $200 value, is download the Stokastic avatar, the profile picture. It's stokastic.com/avatar. Tweet your wins to us at StokasticHOF with the screenshot and get that free month. Any package you want, up to $200, whether it's NBA Sims, NFL Sims, you name it, it's yours. Finish top 3 in a field of 5,000 or more. Tweet your wins, rocking that Stokastic avatar, and you're in. We'll kick this one off. And of course, you get featured and inducted into the Stokastic Hall of Fame. What's better than that? Kick it off with our own Greg Ehrenberg. He's been on a heater. Another win to start the season. Couldn't be more appreciative to our team. Stokastic made amazing tools this year. Thanks to everyone who's been doing it, DMing me and messaging me to sweat this slate. It was a great night. 110K for our friend Greg. Make sure to shout him out if you haven't done so yet. And how about Jalperto? Thanks, Jazzraz and Laffy, for the Foreman over 4 call. Also, Eric and Matt for the JSN call. We took some real heat early on for that Ford call, Cohen Foreman over him, but it ended up working out, especially for you, man. $10,000 first place. Congrats. Tom Kennedy, our own Tom Kennedy. Big night with the Stokastic avatars all over the leaderboard on DraftKings and FanDuel. Loving the new Stokastic Sims tool, including NBA late swap sim. Can leave my desk at night. Again, cut late swapping time by 75%. No more shitty spreadsheets that take 5 minutes to load. Just monster wins from Stokastic across the board the other night. You follow it up with Robert Understall. Shout out to Stokastic for the amazing tools. So close to 25K, but can't be mad about 6K and a top 3 finish. And then Brett Shoup. Shout out to the fellas on Live Before Lock. Heavy on that San Francisco-Cincinnati game. Bang. Can't wait to use the Sims package. Yeah, you got it for free, brother. And you got $10,000. So I'd consider that a win. LA, I'm going to run through these quick because LA fan was on a heater. Appreciate all the guys at Stokastic. Watch the shows every week. So he takes down the $3 single entry on DraftKings. Says hopefully can keep it going. Well, he does, because the very next day almost took down another one, 750 in the CFB showdown. And then the next day with the triple option, $1,500. Been on a roll. Yeah, to say the least. Thanks for all you guys do. Let's keep it rolling. Shout out to LA fan, because that's huge. 3 days in a row. Short Gamer TV. Nice little third place finish. $20,000 for Short Gamer TV. Rocking the avatar. Mike Denny Jr., $3,000 in the 75K huddle. Sean Geezy, we see him up here a lot. $2,000 and a $1,500 for Sean, first and fourth place. Monster night in the NBA. We've been crushing NBA to start the season. Stokastic, best tools in the game for Tanner, $1,000, second place out of a lot on FanDuel. CryptoGates.eth, $6,000. Keep it rolling. So many. CJB's finally took one down, all thanks to Matt and his CFB. I'll read this one because it's very nice. There's not a kinder or brighter CFB analyst in the industry. Let's keep it rolling. $4,000 for our boy Connor. Chuck Fowler, $1,500. Not a tournament with 5K or more. 3,567 to be exact, but it's a $5 single entry using the lineup generator. Thanks to Josh and Adam for the daily work you guys put in on YouTube. Shout out to Chuck, rocking the lineup generator, getting the big win. Josh Blond, another night, another takedown. Now won the 5 max 2 of the last 3 nights. Wemby stole the 3 max from me. Keep it rolling, man. Drew, another nice showing for Drew. Simple at Stokastic Hall of Fame. And we wrap it up with Cleandre Hood. Shout out to Stokastic for the great tools. There it is. 1,000 up, 1,000 down. Huge week to start off the NBA season, and some NFL mixed in there as well. Remember, guys, all you got to do, download the Stokastic profile picture at stokastic.com/avatar. Use it wherever it is you play. DK, FanDuel, Owner's Box. Finish top 3 in a field of 5,000 or more. Tweet us your wins at Stokastic HOF and get that free month. Any package of your choosing up to $200. Welcome to anyone who's been inducted. Welcome back. If you've been here before, we'll see you back here next week for another edition of the Stokastic Hall of Fame. Why you smile?
You're not talking to me, obviously.
No, I'm never. No. With you, I feel like I have to fucking rally the troops.
Yeah, that's what you want you to think.
Hey, what's going on? It's Sunday, week 10. I don't know what to do with myself. Will Eagles bye week today? But that's okay. We got 10 games to talk about on the main slate, and it's time to make it happen right here on the NFL Deeper Dive on the Stokastic's YouTube channel. Dave Lockren at Loughy_D on the Twitters, joined by Ben Rasa at JazzRaz DFS, the always jubilant, never not optimistic Ben Rasa at JazzRaz DFS. What's up, brother?
What's up, dude? Yeah, ready to go.
Look at you. That's a
give all my energy right at the beginning. Now it's a huge drop in the middle of the show. No, listen, this is a good slate. 10 games, perfect amount. Got a little action right now as well, and we'll see what we get. I will say right off the top, we do a show on Tuesday. A lot has changed. Maybe more than any other week, I feel differently than I did on Tuesday.
Give me the top 3 things since Tuesday that have changed for you.
Number 1, I think, is the Bengals situation. It seems like there's a real chance they're going to be missing both of their top alpha wide receivers. That has caused a domino effect. And then there was just a couple guys that we talked about, and we'll get into it in depth, that I thought were really interesting tournament pivots. And it's not that I don't But the domino effect of some of these now value options has rendered it even more difficult for like the Kenneth Walkers to factor into my lineup. That was someone thought might be sneaky for Seattle. I'm softening on some of those stances.
Yeah.
Tricky.
Also, it's a weather game. Looks like you could get some like steady rain in Seattle.
Another factor.
Help. That doesn't help.
Doesn't help, no.
But you mentioned Cincinnati with some potential absences there. They're saying Jamar Chase is a legitimate 50-50, right, to play. T. Higgins is already out. On the other side, though, Dameon Pierce to a lesser extent, but Nico Collins is out too. So it's not just the Bengals side of that game that's going to have, send shockwaves through this DFS slate.
No doubt about it. And, even more so coming off of an outrageous performance last week with Houston. So it's not like they weren't going to get not noticed anyway, but coming off that, everybody's going to be looking to Houston. And that's a game. I mean, it's our first game, which is kind of cool because it might be the most important game on the slate.
Yeah. I bet the Bengals at -6.5 before I knew that all of the receivers might be out.
That's unfortunate.
Sometimes it doesn't work, right? But that line actually hasn't moved that much.
It's held. Yeah, it's held.
Like
so.
it's still at 6, right? I think it's not like a disaster, but we'll see. Anyway, happy to have you guys with us. As always, take one single second. It is Sunday morning, Ben.
That's true. A true time to atone for your sins. That's what people do on Sunday mornings, apparently.
So I've heard. If you're here, or you maybe should be other places, take a second out of your day, atone for your sins, and hit that thumbs up. That's all we ask. 1K thumbs up today. We're at 302. One of them is mine. You think it's doable? We still got plenty of time to go.
Yeah, I mean, this is like betting games like weeks in advance. Who knows what's gonna there's a lot of time left in this show. So I'm not gonna rule anything out, but we may get closing line value, we may not on the like button today. We'll say.
Well, I'll place faith in you guys to get this done.
We can do.
Your sins on a Sunday morning. Atone. You do whatever you have to do.
There's a game on. That doesn't help.
It's okay. I think we can do it.
Just saying.
Anyway, appreciate you guys in advance. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. And never forget, all of our stuff with any bit of shelf life and our podcast exclusive content like the one Ben and I do every Tuesday, which I promise you will change the way you look at every slate. That is out there. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is you listen. We got you covered. All right. You ready to talk some pigskin?
Get into it.
Live before lock coming up after this as well. You've got, is Eric on the show since is he doing it? He is.
That's crazy. Okay.
Right. Eric, Matt Gajewski, they got you covered all the way up until lock. We will answer all of your questions, all of your super chats, as many as we can. We'll also hit you with some of our favorite bets along the way. For those of you that are only playing DFS and not betting, I mean, what the hell are you doing with yourselves? We will convert you eventually. I have faith. Well, they will be born again, one might say, Ben.
Oh, wow. You're just hitting everything on the bingo card this morning.
Yeah, I got to stop.
Yeah.
All right. Houston and Cincinnati. What better way to kick this one off than with the Houston Texans and the Cincinnati Bengals? 6 points. So like you said, it held, it held.
Yeah.
But we'll start with the Houston side. I know last week it was the Tank Dell week. Tank Dell's been an awesome rookie receiver, which pleases me very much for a multitude of reasons. But you also had Noah Brown go off. You had Dalton Schultz have a good game. And for what it's worth, Dalton Schultz has quietly scored in 4 of his last 5 games. It's not really talked about all that often. He's had a phenomenal last, 1.5+ months. Robert Woods was out for that game, but, at the same time, I'm not necessarily sure how much of a difference he's going to make at this point. This has been a guy that they target frequently, and yet somehow every week, despite the production of everyone else on this team, he finds ways to underproduce. But I want to start with the Tank Dell spot and Noah Brown. We've seen, as you know, Nico Collins and Tank Dell have kind of traded blows almost every week this season, it feels, right? Like one week is a huge Nico Collins week, then Tank Dell, depending on who's healthy. With Nico Collins out, that makes a big difference, but you're not facing some pushover, wildly underperforming expectations defense like Tampa Bay, as we saw last week either.
Yeah, the Texans are a real interesting team in a lot of different ways. First off, you mentioned, it's it's coincided naturally with passing attempts too. Like Stroud threw the ball 42 times last week. Previous games before that, 24 and 27. So naturally the targets for those guys was in flux. And Tank Dell, he's got a little like, I mean, I'm not saying he plays like this, but the Gabe Davis stat line, he's got 3 games with 20 or more fantasy points and 4 games under 10. There's been no middle ground with him at all. Boom or bust completely. Now, the target share should be solidified here because you mentioned with all, the Nico Collins production out the window, but it has not been a steady, reliable target share for any of these guys. It's been more touchdown variance and pure volume at times.
Yeah, that's a good point. But you know what? You might just see more volume today. That now the problem, the issue that we run into is Jamar Chase going to play? I mean, listen, T. Higgins, it's not a non-factor by any stretch. T. Higgins is one of the better wide receiver 2s in this league, despite, not having huge production this season. So much of that, though, is the injury to Joe Burrow early in the year. I mean, there's not a single person out there, I don't care if you love the Bengals or hate the Bengals, that's going to deny the difference in caliber of play from Joe Burrow from the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season to the last few weeks. There's just a massive, massive difference for him. If Jamar Chase is out there, I still have faith that this offense is going to get things done. If he's not out there, I know they got Derek Stingley back and some reinforcements on defense for Houston, but still, assuming that Jamar Chase is out there, and I'm hoping he is, this could be another spot where you have to throw for CJ Stroud. But I'll throw another wrinkle into the mix for you. I don't think you're going to disagree with me. Even though at times this season, the Bengals run defense has been their weakness. And I think, again, a lot of that is because their offense couldn't stay on the field, but they can now. What semblance of a run game do you have for Houston anyway? So even if this game does stay close, and even if Joe Burrow is kind of hampered by the fact that maybe Chase and Higgins are out, it's not like Houston has a viable run game. You know what I mean? They might just have to throw regardless.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that. And I Singletary was someone I was fortunate. I didn't really consider him that much last week. And he really ballooned, particularly in single entry and smaller fields, which helped a little bit for sure. So I get it. Not to mention, again, I'm just taking a peek across the board at Odd Shopper. You're talking about 6 and 5.5s out there. Even if Chase sits, it's not like suddenly the Texans will be the favorite or anything. The spread might come down a bit, but
for sure,
more likely than not, Houston will be playing catch up, not trying to burn the clock with a run game.
All right, so then let's come full circle. First of all, are you playing the ground attack here
for Houston?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, so Singletary just not in the mix for you, despite Dameon Pierce being out.
Correct.
I'm with you. There's too many other cheap running backs is the thing on this slate. If last week, I could understand why people had some exposure to Singletary. Must have felt terrible if you were overweight on him and underweight to the passing game. But I get it. This week feels different. There are some cheap options out there that might not feel great, but better than Singletary. And they're also not, touchdown dogs. But with Tank Dell's price, with Noah Brown, Dalton Schultz, how are you playing the passing game for Houston then?
Yeah, that's where it gets a little tricky. I mean, you can go I'm not going to say generic stack, but I people are going to just do kind of what worked last week. And I get it with give me Stroud, Dell, and Schultz. I'll use Mixon on the bring back. That's going to be a popular build. I'm not really there, to be honest. It's not to knock anything. I think it's a fine play. Looking at our tools, our top stack, our ownership, you're not going to be alone there. It's going to be a popular game stack. But I still think that Houston, there's a lot of ways this game does not go well for them. Volume may help, but I'm not overly sold on the matchup, and I'm not overly sold on the spot for these guys. I'd rather have one-offs than the stack.
Yeah, I've been talking about it all week, whether it's on the Odd Shopper channel from a betting perspective. Shout out to you guys who do subscribe to that for getting us north of 100K subs. That was a fun day. In 2 years, that's pretty impressive.
Not bad.
Not bad, yeah. I've said it feels like a letdown spot for Houston. It's also a Houston team, though, that has defied all of the odds all season long, right? But I don't want to just completely ignore the fact that, look, Houston Texans, that last game was phenomenal, but they did lose to Carolina. That Carolina team is fucking terrible, man. Bryce Young stinks. And on the road, they still lost that game, mustered 13 points. Against Atlanta, they lost in Atlanta. You know what I'm saying? It's not like it's not a Houston team that just every week, because CJ Stroud has performed so well as a rookie, it's just going to come out there and throw up, an astronomical total, and you can triple stack. So maybe the recency bias is pushing people there. I have no problems getting pieces, especially if I think they're playing from behind. But this to me is more of, so I'll just tell you, this is where I'm at. I'm going to be playing Houston players, especially with Nico Collins out. I'm one-offing these pass catchers. I'm one-offing Schultz, Brown. If Robert Woods is out, then I obviously Noah Brown and Tank Dell both become more appealing, because you're missing Tank Dell, or you're missing Nico Collins and Robert Woods. I know that Robert Woods is expected to play, but this is a one-off spot for me. Some Tank Dell, some Brown, some Schultz. Also a run back spot, because I do assume that I'll still have some Joe Burrow stacks as well.
Yeah, I have no issues with any of that. Again, it's a good game environment. I also agree, though, Chad just pointed this out, Bengals D is an excellent leverage spot. I have no problem with that, particularly for tournament builds, if you want to be different and hope that passing volume leads to some mistakes. Stroud's been excellent at taking care of the ball so far, but it's football. Weird stuff happens all the time. It's a good game. Everybody knows it's a good game. The chase piece is, of course, really important, because if he sits, you can stack up Burrow and you're spending like no money.
720 Red Dog said Houston just won someone $1 million on a stack, bro. Are you serious? Laffy, come on. I be honest with you, brother. I don't have any idea what you mean by that.
It means because they just won someone $1 million, they just win someone $1 million this week and next week forever. Houston's the only someone.
Yeah, you know who won someone $1 million week 7? Desmond Ridder. He's not even a starting quarterback anymore.
But he'll be low owned today. Very, very low owned.
No, what I'm saying is I don't get the connection. Like, yes, it happened. You can definitely stack Houston again. People are going to do it. Like I said, I like them as one-off pieces, but I don't see why I'm not going back to Darren saying LMAO. Come on, guys. He's saying of course it's possible. It's always possible. Daniel Jones has won people millies. I could name you a lot of bad quarterbacks who have won people millies. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're not a sneaky, let's be clear. They're not a sneaky stack today. It's not even that it's possible. I mean, they grade out very well. They're just going to be very, very popular. And to me, they might be a little over-owned. So good pieces. I prefer the one-offs. If you want to stack them up, more power to you. We just saw it win $1 million, as everyone just pointed out.
Yeah. I just prefer them more as one-offs and run.
So do I.
Yeah. No one's saying they can't do it.
No, I'm saying they can't do it.
Also,
can't do it. Can't happen.
Also wildly different matchup than last week. The Bengals, first of all, I was just flat out wrong on Houston last week. Last week was the worst week I've had all year. I've been having a pretty good season. Last week was the worst week I had all year, because I just didn't have the Houston doubles and triples. I just didn't have them. And it ended up coming back to bite me, But yeah, it's a different matchup. They're on the road. Cincy's a buzzsaw right now. We'll see.
They're playing great.
Yeah, could eat my words here. Maybe CJ Stroud comes and wins this game in Cincy. That'll be one of the most impressive wins all season by anybody.
Yeah, that would be incredibly impressive, whether Burrow has his weapons or not.
What are you doing first of all, if Jamar Chase plays and it's like, hey, he won't be limited, he's good to go. What are you doing with the Joe Burrow, cheaper than CJ Stroud, by the way? What are you doing with that?
Yeah, this is where, again, this is a tricky situation just because we have a lot more unknowns than I anticipated. Clearly, I think you can make a case that you could play Burrow with or without any of his weapons. He's playing great. They'll have someone out there catching the ball. We know Boyd will be out there. They've got other dudes, cheap options. And then you've got Mixon, who he may not be the most efficient back, but I don't know how he doesn't touch the ball upwards of 20 times. He seems to do that in every game, and some of them are targets. So Cincinnati's still a really good team to get to. They grade out number 1 in the top stack tool. that's an indication right there. So we'll have to wait and see on how much salary you're allocating, but it's hard to really push back if you want to play Cincinnati.
Man, Dylan, man after Ben's heart. Browns will take down the Ravens.
Ooh, I like that, but I don't know. I'm a big Baltimore guy too, though.
I do. I like the Browns at +6.5, though, if I'm betting this game. What, you think Baltimore just runs over them?
Baltimore is.
They're very good, but they've also played.
So good.
They've also faced 3 straight NFC teams, and Lamar just apparently cannot lose to NFC teams.
I mean, it's going to be a great game. Great game.
I'm looking forward to this for sure. Yeah, but I don't mind the Browns at +6.5, to be honest with you. I think that defense
we'll
is there. Very good. Yeah, we will. Anyway, if Jamar Chase plays and he's not limited, I love him this week. I absolutely love him this week. You know what? Just from a volume perspective alone, I know we're spending a lot of time on this game, but Ben mentioned it at the beginning of the like, this is one of the most critical pieces of the entire slate, without question. I like that a lot. You know what? I'm going to be playing Joe Mixon. It's gross. It's been gross. You've got D'Amico Ryans that got fine-tuned machine, that defense for Houston in a lot of games. Last game, not so much, but still significantly better than they were last year. I'm going to be going back to Mixon. I'll be going back to Chase. Honestly, Ben, I'll put it to you very simply. There aren't many spots in Cincinnati that I have an issue getting to. I think you could kind of close your eyes here and land on somebody based on their salary that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's honestly a pretty fair way to categorize it. So we'll have to see with Chase, but regardless, it's a good team to target. Everything kind of checks out.
Favorite way to play this game before we move on?
It's changed. Originally, it was stack up Cincinnati and run it back with Houston. Now, I still like that, but I would rather just kind of have pieces, like have Mixon and Dell around a Geno Smith stack or something, like just pieces.
Okay. Trenton Irwin, Irv Smith, Tanner Hudson. These guys are all going to get a little bit of ownership too, and it could be one of them to get the job done. We saw Trenton Irwin when the Bengals were missing a top receiver earlier in the year, actually had a pretty decent game. So minimum salary Trenton Irwin is not out of the question for me either at around 7%. I mean,
he's someone, again, when I get into situations like this, I always look to the odds, and I just searched him this morning on Odd Shopper. You got like a 33.5 receiving yards total, which again, doesn't seem like a lot, but that's not the most unhealthy. Anytime touchdown score, clicking around, you're talking about 3 to 4 to 1, depending on where you're shopping it. FanDuel's +380. If you are going to bet something like that, that's where you want to go. But to me, those are data points that I always like to see. So Irwin's clearly in play just based off what Odd Shopper's showing me.
For sure. Let's talk San Francisco and Jacksonville. The Jags here, 3-point dogs. So one thing that we have to point out, Trent Williams is going to play, even though he's not at 100%. We'll see. These offensive linemen are kind of just warriors, right? I mean, they're going to get out there. A lot of them. Lane Johnson, Trent Williams, some of these guys will play through, an amputation. But the fact that Trent Williams is playing, we've seen Brock Purdy over his last 3 games, 0-3 with 5 interceptions. Now, a lot of people go, oh, whatever. Through his first 10 regular season games, he was 10-0 with 2 interceptions. So huge difference. And the funny thing about these 5 picks, 3 of them were when he was under pressure. 2 of them were a clean pocket. He just made some bad throws. We saw a couple against the Minnesota Vikings on that primetime game. But the problem also is that with San Francisco, they're all healthy on the offense from a talent, from a skill player perspective, from Debo to Kittle to Ayuk to, just go down the line. Christian McCaffrey. And none of them are super cheap either. My favorite player is Christian McCaffrey. I just, hands down, that is my top option from here. I don't really feel like trying to pick which one of the pass catchers, none of whom are at a significant discount, is going to get the job done for me against the Jacksonville D that has played well. They are at home. It would be Christian McCaffrey for me. He's very expensive, but he's my number 1 from the San Francisco side.
Me as well. I mean, what's there to say? We don't need to justify that play. If you have the money and some of the value we're talking about opens it up, he's a walking touchdown. He's amazing. A competitive game. Jacksonville's no joke. So I have nothing to say about McCaffrey that's bad, and I really don't have much else to say about the Niners. I don't have Purdy in the pool. If you want to try to, pick one of these other non-McCaffrey guys, I get it, but I just don't really see it on this slate.
What do you think playing McCaffrey, in tournaments? What does that make the rest of your lineup look like?
Well, I mean, again, I think
because there aren't really good high-priced running backs outside of McCaffrey this week for the most part.
No, but I don't think it's going to put tremendous strain on your lineup either, to be honest, just because of, we already talked about, I mean, we only did one game and we talked about like 3 or 4 reasonable pay down options already.
True.
So I think you're going to be fine, unless you're telling me you want like a premium quarterback and a Keenan Allen and McCaffrey. Yeah, you might get or Dallas defense, something where you're spending a lot more than normal. I don't think it's a big deal.
Just looking at our Sims tool exposure, Jordan ran the sim. We've got pretty little exposure to San Francisco. It's not shocking to me. Again, the only spot that would worry me a little bit when you're looking at the projected ownership there compared to our exposure when Jordan favorited 150 lineups after running these sims was that just getting underweight on Christian McCaffrey. I also understand why. Jordan, do me a favor. Go to exposures and sort by running backs for a second. You're already there. So just clear that and sort by running backs. My guess, Ben, is it's a lot of cheaper running backs, probably a lot of Tony Pollard as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's multiple backs that are a couple $1,000s cheaper that it's not that hard to get them in there. So McCaffrey's just someone I don't really worry about, where you can force him in and make it work because he's just Christian McCaffrey.
A lot of Mixon, a lot of Pollard, Rashad White, Najee Harris, Bijan, those type of guys.
Yeah.
That's what you would expect if you're not getting the McCaffrey. Who do you think, though, is like the biggest, who do you think takes the biggest hit at running back if you're playing a lot of McCaffrey? I mean, because it's going to be tough to get the McCaffrey Pollard lineups in there. I think it's going to be, but the problem is once you get past Tony Pollard on a slate like this, and this is kind of what I was alluding to a second ago, once you get past Pollard, I know you have Eckler and Kamara, but they're not that popular today. Then you just get into this range of, Jones and Mixon and Bijan and Madison without Cam Akers and Rashad White and those type of guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see, that's what you're going to see would be my guess, is McCaffrey with insert anyone from Mixon down to White, Mixon, Bijan, White. Those are easy pairings. It doesn't do crazy stuff. Like if you're telling me McCaffrey Eckler or McCaffrey Pollard, that'll be the trickier of the two. But again, I still think on this slate, all those options are pretty open.
Just going off script here for a second. Do you have a clear preference if you were to rank the 3 between McCaffrey, Eckler, and Kamara?
Yeah, it would be in that order.
It would?
Yeah.
Okay. So Kamara 3rd.
Yeah, I mean, again, you don't need to justify these guys up top. The Saints, it's getting more and more complicated with what they're doing with Taysom Hill, with this game. Minnesota, it's a pretty good environment. I just prefer Olave, I think, on the outside more than paying still a really premium tag for Kamara.
Let's talk about the Jags. So I just went to our ownership projections, and Jordan can pull up the exposure in the Sims. My guess is it's not going to be a ton, but it is, as far as ownership projections go, it is more than I thought. We also have them as our 6th highest rating in the top stacks tool, 5% top stack probability, average salary less of $6K here, with obviously Lawrence and ETN bringing that up. But look at the ownership projections on these guys. ETN at 7,100, 16% on DraftKings. Evan Ingram, 15%. Christian Kirk, 11. Calvin Ridley, 11. So the vaunted 49ers defense, which is, taking some step backs in recent weeks, but coming off a bye, doesn't seem to be getting the same respect that we've seen in recent weeks and even going back to last season.
No, it doesn't. And I kind of think it's warranted. We've seen teams find ways, and Jacksonville is now good enough where you can play them in tough matchups, to me. It's not ideal, but they know what they're doing. They're a real team. Starting with Trevor Lawrence, you see right on the screen. Evan Ingram. I mean, look at the leverage. Really, really interesting play there. Again, I'm not going to be fooling anyone with it, but I do have him in the pool, and I have a little Lawrence. I think you can stack him up. You have ample options with Ridley on the outside, Ingram on the outside, ETN in the backfield, Jags defense. It's a good team to target, and one that I think still will be, some people will be deterred because of the Niners, rightfully so.
So are you stacking this Jacksonville side?
I do have some of that. Again, I think you have numerous ways you can do it. You can go skinny, you could loop in ETN if you want to, or you could just go, QB +2 like a traditional way.
Because it seems like there's going to be more one-off exposure than stacks. We only have Lawrence we have projected for sub 5% ownership still.
Yeah, that's why I like it. I think it's a different way to get exposure to a game that I wouldn't be stunned if it gets up and down.
Double stacks with maybe an Ingram Ridley, both of them cheap. Double stacks with Ingram Kirk. I would assume for you that Ingram would be one of the staples in these stacks.
It's hard to imagine he wouldn't be, yeah.
Right, at 4,500. I know he hasn't been targeted frequently in the red zone, which you don't love to see that. I'm still not sure he has a single red zone target, if we're being completely honest here. But he's coming off a 10-target game. Like, he's still very involved in this offense, which gives me some hope that could turn around. Like, go back to week 2. Since week 2, listen to these targets: 8, 8, 8, 8, 7, 7, 10. That's pretty good at 4,500 with Trevor Lawrence throwing you the football. Yeah,
I mean, in some ways, of course, I would like to see some of that, but you're almost saying, okay, it can't get worse. He has nothing. He's not finding the end zone whatsoever, and he's been fine. So what happens if he scores? What happens if he randomly gets in the end zone?
The more we talk through this, the more I'm kind of leaning towards liking some of these QB +2 Jacksonville stacks.
Come on in. Water's warm.
All right. Are we getting any exposure to Jacksonville stacks in the sim, Jordan? What? Go to exposure.
When I ran mine this morning, I wasn't getting a ton, but again, you don't need a ton.
No, I don't think they're going to be a popular stack. I think some of these one-offs will be popular. I don't think they're going to be a particularly popular stack. So go to stack exposures. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I can come back to that one, of course. But, okay, hold on. Here we go. Yeah, not a ton of Trevor Lawrence. Jordan, next time, just go to stack exposures and scroll down to find Trevor Lawrence. All right. Anything else for this game? Specific ways that you want to attack this, I think, would be the best way to close it out.
No, nothing else really. It's McCaffrey. It's basically McCaffrey or pass for the Niners, and then Jacksonville. I think you can do anything. I also have some Jags defense in the pool.
You do?
Yeah.
I don't hate that at all. I mean, you would think that Trent Williams makes a difference coming back, but let's just say he's not fully healthy. He doesn't stay out there. That makes a huge difference. And Brock Purdy has looked very mortal over the past few weeks. I guess that's what you're playing for here.
Yeah, I'm playing that when they're in competitive games, and teams have found a way right now to not let San Francisco just coast, and they're making Purdy have to make plays, and there'll be opportunities. It's still a great Niners team, but that doesn't deter me. It's a cheap defense.
Let's talk Cleveland, Baltimore. 6.5-point spread, 38-point total. This, to me, just feels like a much better game to watch than it is to target from a DFS perspective. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's some things I'm missing. But we don't have a single player projected for north of 9%. That is Ravens defense, by the way, at 9%. Very little ownership going to guys like Jerome Ford, some going to the Browns, 5% just because they're really good, a little bit to David Njoku. Could you make an argument that Amari Cooper is good enough on his own to play here at around 6K? Probably. But the backfield situation, now that Keaton Mitchell's expected to play, Gus Edwards getting the goal line work, has become disgusting to try and figure out. I know you have been more than frustrated with the lack of production from Lamar Jackson, not because they're not putting up 30+ points every week, but because they're just getting down to the goal line and Gus Edwards is punching everything in.
Yeah, it's just been a rotten run for Lamar. He's just getting the floor out of just absolutely dynamic overall offensive outputs. But the problem here is this is just, you have 10 games to choose from, and maybe there can be some things to like in this game, but overall, it's a terrible game. Both these defenses are fantastic.
So you're off of this game?
I'm not gonna say I'm off the game. I just think that you want to be careful. To me, the only thing that I have real interest in is I still think you can always, Lamar supersedes everything for me. You can always play him. I don't think it really matters. There are better matchups, and look what happens. Gus Edwards wins, but has like 8 touchdowns. Lamar and Mark Andrews is always a skinny stack that you can get to. It's scary, but Lamar's seen Cleveland's defense many a times, including this year. He can do it against anybody. A different way to build this way. Not my favorite build, but yeah, I think you could play Lamar. Doesn't matter to me.
Defense has seen him a lot too.
Yeah. But you can't really stop. Like, he's so unique. Lamar always has upside because if he ever gets loose, he can get you a 100-yard bonus. And there's just not that many quarterbacks that can do that.
No question. It just feels gross paying $15K for Lamar and Mark Andrews against the Browns in a 38 total game.
Because it is gross. That's where it's always that delicate balance. Because it's like, if you don't want to do it, who exactly is like, you know what? That's what I want to do with my lineup. Probably nobody. So you don't have to get it right that many times.
So you're going to dip your toes into these waters a little bit?
I'll wait into the Lamar waters a little bit, just because I still believe he can go for 35 any week, any single week. It's a tough matchup. I don't want a lot of exposure to this game, but I'm fine with that if you want to go skinny stack with Lamar.
All right. Anything for Cleveland?
No.
Our top ROI bet, our best plus EV spot is Rashad Bateman under 20.5 receiving yards on FanDuel. That's an interesting one. Penny has it under 19.5 minus 136. FanDuel's got it minus 110 under 20.5. So yeah, some decent spots out there. I'm always just going through these and sniping them off and taking them when they're there. Preferably, I prefer the ones where you can see that they just came up and you try and get it before it's gone. That one's been there for a while, though.
Some of them will do that, particularly with inefficient. I'm not saying this is why I have some Lamar in the pool, but Lamar Jackson over 1.5 passing touchdowns has been grading out really positive all week, and the price has come down. It's still plus money, no doubt about it. But it was in like the mid 230s, 240s. Now Pinnacle has it at plus 165, and books are starting to really come down. So I think there is some noise that this could be not an impossible spot for Baltimore to have some production.
Okay.
It's just a reference point. That's what, again, I say a lot with OddsShopper. It's just another data point that you can incorporate into your DFS.
For sure. And you can bet it too.
Well, that's a whole separate.
New Orleans and Minnesota. All right, here we go. Now, no notable injuries outside of Kendra Miller being out for New Orleans, but that doesn't do much. Minnesota. Are you ready to get in the weeds with me right now? Because this gets weird. Justin Jefferson not activated from the IR. I don't think any of us really assumed that was going to be the case, even though there was some discussion about it. KJ Osborne's unlikely to play. Cam Akers is on the IR. Now, granted, they won a game last week after Jaron Hall went down. They won a game with a guy in Josh Dobbs who didn't know the names of his teammates. The biggest thing, though, outside of Akers and the likely absence of KJ Osborne, TJ Hawkinson is expected to play, but is still dealing with an injury, and they anticipate him being limited. What a mess this team is right now. And they're going up against the New Orleans defense that they've seen some chinks in the armor at times, but they're still a above average defense. What are we doing with Alexander Madison? Then we can work our way through this, but the Alexander Madison spot to me is going to be very, very interesting.
It's definitely interesting. I don't really have a great answer for you, to be honest. We know that it's a playable spot. I think you're more like anything. You're weighing opportunity cost, and I just can't get away from Rachaad White in a lot of those type of lineups. The volume's there for both of them. Just trust that spot a little more. You want to go to Madison? You mentioned this game is filled with all sorts of stuff on both sides of the ball. Honestly, I'm just kind of indifferent to Minnesota. The Hawkinson thing muddies the waters even further. You've got Addison and you've got Madison. So I'm going to kind of just say I'm indifferent to the game, not ruling it out, not jamming it. Olave would be my favorite play from either side.
Are you going to have any Dobbs?
No.
All right. Well, I feel like I still have to ask you about Jordan Addison, just because what happens if TJ Hawkinson is, severely limited. And that's the problem, is when it comes to something like this, you have to inject your own thoughts. Like you can't always just rely on projections when it comes to somebody like TJ Hawkinson today. Because if you're out there going, well, I don't think that Hawkinson is going to be 100%. He's saying he isn't. Everyone's saying he isn't. Kevin O'Connell saying he isn't. The report was that he's listed as questionable. And while he's expected to be active, he's not expected to handle his typical snap share. But here's the problem with all of that. Again, the problem on top of the problem. We have seen guys play a 50% snap share, but then they're targeted on like 50% of routes on their 50% snap share. So it doesn't always mean anything.
Definitely doesn't always mean anything. It's just you're playing with more the way I treat all that stuff. You have to infer how much risk tolerance, what's the best case scenario, what's the perception. This is why the tools are so important. If everyone in the world told me, well, I can't play Hawkinson because I'm worried he's going to be limited, I would probably play him blindly. Doesn't mean I think he's going to succeed. It's just the leverage you get if he's okay is huge. On the flip side, if everyone says, not really worried about this, I still like the spot, I probably look to short him just because I think there's a lot of scenarios where he is limited and maybe he actually is more of a decoy in the situation. So for me, I'm more on the saying I'm not going to mess around with the situation. There's too many other tight ends that I have interest in.
Saints have also been notoriously good against tight ends.
Yeah, we got to do it at least once a show. Me. It's a situation where, first off, he has to be okay. Say he's fine. Then he has to succeed against not the easiest matchup. So you have to get it right twice.
Nobody likes Josh Dobbs as much as I do, but it's still Josh Dobbs throwing him the football. It's not
a tough spot. Yeah,
it's tough. We haven't projected for a lot of ownership right now. I'm with you. I probably short him here. Probably short most of this team. I think it's likely that I will be above the field on Alexander Madison at 5,500 though, without Cam Akers. This might just be a sheer volume play for me and hope that he's more involved in the passing game.
I'm not ruling that out for me either. Again, the price point allows really inefficient volume to still have a chance to get there.
Okay. He would be my favorite play from Minnesota, I think. On the New Orleans side, the biggest thing here is you got Taysom Hill. By the way, guys, if you take a second, hit that thumbs. We're at 482 thumbs up. We got 2,400 people watching with us.
Told you.
I know. I try and place faith in the people at times. I still have some faith. People, it's a Sunday morning. People are still pulling the goo out of their eyes. They forget.
How are they going to hit the like button if they can't even see?
Well, I'm reminding them not only to hit the like, but to pull the goo out of their eyes.
Sense it.
We'll get there. I have some faith. Mason, $5 super chat. Let me hit this first. Am I stupid for thanks, Mason, for having Burrow with 2 pass catchers and Joe Mixon and DK Cash? That's a good question. It might be a little bit overkill. Might be a little overkill having 2 with Mixon. Personally, I'm an advocate of receiver running back without the quarterback if you wanted to play something that way. That's the one way I prefer to play this, and I actually don't mind going like a Chase Mixon no quarterback spot. I probably am not going to be getting to the 2 running back or two pass catchers with running back, but I bet our Sims are. I bet the Sims tool is, because it's one of those really high simulated ROI spots that people never do.
I don't mind that build. I'm not sure I would do it in cash though.
Did he say cash?
Yeah.
Oh, in cash. Yeah, I wouldn't do that in cash.
Yeah.
I don't think you need to.
No, that's a little much. I'd rather have like Mixon and Boyd, or just like, I don't think you want to go full onslaught like that in cash. The opportunity cost is too big.
On the Saints side, you're talking about a team now that is producing points. Derek Carr, I saw a report that's like, Derek Carr throwing downfield. Yeah, what are you talking about? He's been throwing downfield more than any other quarterback all season long. I guess they neglected they should have been like Derek Carr completing some passes downfield. That report would have at least been somewhat relevant, because all season long, outside of Rashid Shaheed, he'd been completing nothing downfield whatsoever. You still have Taysom Hill in the mix, and that is going to throw a wrench into the works week after week. We'll see. Like you said, he can be a legitimate, sub 1 fantasy point guy, or he goes for 20 plus again, and he basically nukes anything else you wanted in this lineup or on the Saints team, because he's producing. And okay, you have Derek Carr, great. Oh, never mind. Taysom Hill just threw that touchdown to Jawan Johnson. Like, it's just, week after week, as you like to call it, the bizarro freak show. That's what we're talking about with the Saints. But they're facing a Minnesota team. They're favorites on the road. What are you doing with the Saints?
Again, you're just incurring a lot, because, you get to the goal line and you're like, all right, I may have, 2 chances for my guy. And nope, you probably only have 1, because Taysom Hill is going to get 1. And that's just really difficult. Olave, I still believe, can get, a healthy amount, double-digit targets, and he can do a lot with that. I don't like the Saints, though. I just think there's a really, really difficult priority list. Then you just have an unquantifiable thing with Taysom Hill, and he is playable. Clearly he's playable, but he's also could just cannibalize everyone and not actually help you. I don't think it's really binary with how they're constructed right now, and that just makes it really difficult to target this team or stack for Carr, because you mentioned it, your quarterback, if he gets pulled off the field in the most crucial points, that's just a killer for his ceiling.
Mark Borman asks, are you fading Michael Thomas because of his arrest? No, I'd be fading Michael Thomas because we've seen nothing. And I've kind of held on to that for a while, trying to get the Thomas game. Maybe it comes. 1 target last game was rough, but prior to that, he'd been between 9 and 13 fantasy points in every single game he played. So, okay, that's not bad, but it's not good either. I don't really know what to do with him at this point. I don't know what to do with Jawan Johnson at this point. Problem is, you look at this team and they still have so many different there's so many different guys that can get opportunities in this offense. It sucks, man.
It's brutal. But that is the reality of the situation. It sucks, but it doesn't mean that we can do much about it. Like, that's just how this team is constructed. And the most crucial point to me is it's working. That's what's scary. They don't have a ton of incentive to change yet.
Are you stacking this game on either side?
No.
You're not?
No.
Olave is your favorite one-off?
Yeah, Olave and Madison.
Okay. I think it's still a good spot for Kamara.
Yeah. He's just expensive.
He is. You know what, though? Were we singing that same song last week when he was the same price, and they come out and they just run like the whole drive without him, and then people sour on him a little bit? I mean, are we? I don't know. I feel like last week is forcing his ownership down a little bit. We haven't projected it sub 10%. This is a guy that week 8, 22 total looks. Week 7, 31 looks. 27 in week 6. 39 in week 5. Or I'm sorry, not 39. I'm sorry. 25 wow. I was looking at yards, not reception, or not targets. Still 25. So 25, 25, 27, 31, 22. Last week was 14. Last week was the real outlier among all of these other games. And he's the same price as he was in week 9.
Again, it's Alvin Kamara. Like, we know it's there. It's just, God, it's hard to feel secure about anything, from volume to efficiency to target. There's just so many ways. For tournaments, you always can play a guy like that. I still think, for me, I would rather get up to McCaffrey or save money and get into like the 7s.
All right. I think he's an interesting pivot. Not apples to apples, not the same price point. I get it. But off of a guy like Tony Pollard. I mean, Pollard's just been bad, and everyone's going back to him this week, despite his price coming up like was it $500, $600 or something like that, because they're massive 17.5 point. We'll get to that game.
Oh yeah.
I'm just saying 8% Alvin Kamara, given the workload that he's seen outside of literally one game since he's been back from that suspension. I'm willing to get a little bit more than the field there.
Sure.
Anything else on this one?
No.
All right. Tennessee and Tampa Bay. Before we do, Ben, we got another tweet yesterday from someone talking about, hey, it was Braden. I think I'm finally figuring out how to get the word out. Stokastic. I finished second in the mini max last Sunday at Owner's Box. The tools, especially the Sims, are making a big difference for me this year. Another Owner's Box win from our viewers for guys that never heard of it. You know, Drew said it the other week. If I didn't watch the Stokastic, I never would have heard of Owner's Box. Then he went and took down 20K in their main contest. Seeing this happen a lot lately, and look, if we're going to talk and we're going to partner with a site, and we're going to tell you, hey, you should be playing here, you want to see our guys winning over there. That's the biggest thing. Like, you don't want to be like, hey, check this place out, because, by the way, it does have $500 first match deposit bonus. They've had absurd overlay. Nothing like you're ever going to, nothing like you're, yeah, that's the biggest point. I mean, that
really is.
The deposit bonus is huge. But the overlay has been bigger than anything else, because you're not getting that at DraftKings and FanDuel. And no one's saying stop playing there. Make this a complementary piece to what you're doing each week. Right now, the 100K kickoff, 20K up top, is 34% filled. We have about 2 hours until lock, and it's 34% filled. So you want to see our guys doing well over there. They have been. You want to see the Sims tools, which have Owner's Box, the ownership projections, player projections. You want to see that helping people. They have been. You want to see people get the $500 first match deposit bonus, but when they click that link in the description or the one that's in chat, the biggest thing is you want to see them winning. And we've been seeing a lot more of that. And maybe it's to your point that it's an unsolved platform, like it's super flex. So you don't have to play a D. You can flex in a quarterback. Hell, you can do full out game stacks, like full game stacks. Maybe it's the people, and even us on our end with projections and the Sims and everything. Maybe we're finally starting to solve this here.
I mean, that's the recipe for things at the beginning. When you have overlay, when you have an unsolved format and everyone is trying to find edges on the fly, I think everyone is learning in some degree, including us, but there's no doubt leaning on tools can really help you there. So as you just said, it's awesome to see the winners, of course, but the lobby tells the story. There's serious money up for grabs, and there's serious dead money in those pools. It's just simply easier for every entry that is entered to win than when the tournament is full, because it's just math. So an opportunity over there to take some shots. And I'm just a sucker. I love super flex. I love the ability to stack two quarterbacks in the same lineup. It's such a fun format. Same format as college sports on DraftKings.
Yeah, can't wait to see your Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson lineups.
No, but in theory, that's the move.
Anyway, if you guys want to, links in the description and chat. I think if you have an ad blocker, it's weird. So just turn that off for the 5 seconds that you click if you wanted to jump in. $500, up to $500 first match deposit bonus, and 34% filled in the 100K kickoff, 20K up top today. Even if you're just firing a few bullets in there, the overlay is worth taking advantage of. Tampa Bay hosting the Tennessee Titans, 39-point total. Tennessee's a 2.5-point road dog. Treylon Burks is out. All right, so the biggest thing, Jordan, go to the Sims, sort by team here, and then also go to after you do that, clear the filter, just so the people watching, they might not have the Sims, can look at this and see what our exposure looks like. I want to see if we're getting Will Levis stacks. I want to see what DeAndre Hopkins looks like, because my guess is that we're going to have a decent amount of Hopkins. And we talked about it earlier in the week, where I know we were both a little bit not even down on Hopkins at all, because I pointed this out on last primetime game. I think Hopkins is going to, when you've got a rookie quarterback in there, naturally you should be peppering this guy with targets, because your alternatives are Nick Westbrook-Akina and Kyle Phillips and Chig Okonkwo. I like Chig, but you get the point. Mm-hmm. DeAndre Hopkins is in one of these spots where this may just be a get there through volume spot against the Tampa Bay team that coughed up 470 yards passing and 39 points to a rookie quarterback in week. Granted, a better rookie quarterback, but the point remains, this secondary has been, a lot of people were sold a bill of goods on what this secondary could look like this year.
Definitely. And this is another, I said at the top of the show, a couple of things have changed. I think that I'm more apt to say, okay, I want some pieces of maybe Tennessee in this spot. You mentioned Levin, he's not stupid. He's throwing to the guy that can make plays for him, and he's done a really good job. I actually thought, I didn't know what to expect. This is a guy from college. I'm not going to get into, I was a big fan of him at Kentucky, and I didn't know how it would translate. He comes out and he's just on fire, but it's Atlanta. And I think less of Atlanta than basically any team in the league. I thought it was
just perpetual goblins of the week on our Tuesday show.
Yeah, because they don't know what they're doing. They're not a serious franchise. He goes into Pittsburgh. He didn't have the best game in the world. I actually thought he was more impressive there. I know he didn't do much, but he wasn't overmatched either. And now he gets a much more reasonable matchup here. The price is right. I think you do have to consider him. You have Hopkins, you have Chig. It's not a bad stack, and it's one that's not going to break the bank for you.
Funny you say that. I thought the same thing. I thought despite, first of all, you're going up against a good opportunistic Pittsburgh defense. They may have had some injuries, but in Pittsburgh, that's not an easy place. At night, it's not an easy place to win. I mean, I bet Pittsburgh, and also, but was watching this game thinking, man, like Will Levis is keeping them competitive. I thought he played better in week 9 than he did in week 10 too. Maybe all the stats wouldn't represent that, but I didn't think he had a bad game. For me, it is going to be probably less Will Levis and more DeAndre Hopkins. We're not getting to a ton of him. The ownership on that scares me a little bit. The exposure in the Sims isn't high. We're getting a little bit of him, a little bit of Chigakonkwo. This it could end up being a 13 target DeAndre Hopkins game. And DeAndre Hopkins, look, he may not be DeAndre Hopkins of Houston. We can agree on that. Yeah. He's still one of the best, purest route runners in the league. Like, he can get open and he can make big plays. And this Tampa defense right now isn't scaring anybody.
No, and he's not priced like the Houston DeAndre Hopkins. So it's
that's a good point. Yeah, he's not 8,500.
So he doesn't need to be that guy.
He's not even priced close to the Arizona DeAndre Hopkins.
No, he's the Tennessee DeAndre Hopkins.
Hey, what are you doing with Derrick Henry? What are you doing with Chig? I did want to point out, and Jordan can pull this up. I already hit this one earlier. It's still there. Now, this has been up for a little while, but I'm betting it anyway. Over 18.5 receiving yards for Nick Westbrook-Akina is a spot. This is FanDuel specific. Obviously, with Odd Shopper, you're taking a market-based approach. You're trying to pick off the inefficient lines compared to the sharp sports books. Pinnacle has the over 21.5 at -116. Now, I know this isn't the same as like 8.5 and 10.5 rebounds, Ben. I get that, right? It's yardage totals, but still over 21.5 at -116 compared to over 18.5 at -110. No surprise, that's our highest EV spot on the entire slate for Sunday football.
Yeah, that's always something that's kind of a double, not red flag, the opposite of a red flag. When you're getting a better price in terms of the line, like -110 versus -120, and you're getting more yards to play with, that's always a pretty good indicator that something is not right. And that's really the story behind it. I've talked about this a lot, whether it's DFS or if you're getting the same product, the same line, the same anything, why would you pay more for it? In what world, in what place in life do you do that? Literally never.
No.
So yeah, I get it. He's not playable in DFS.
I don't like him for DFS. No, this is just a straight, but could have one for 19 and I'm good.
That's the beauty of it though. There's so many guys where I'm like, I have an actionable take on this guy, but he doesn't really factor into my DFS lineups and I can't monetize it. But with these angles, you can. And that I love. That's one of my favorite things about being able to bet props is you can take a take on someone like this and monetize it. Whereas if you don't play him in DFS, what does that do? Nothing.
100%. And it doesn't matter if he goes for 60 or if he goes for 19.
Yeah.
You
get it. And it doesn't matter on the flip side if he goes for -16, you lose,
exactly.
You lose the same amount. There's no like mega punish.
Same thing when people talk about parlays, like, oh man, I hit 4 of 5. I was so close. I'd rather hit 0 of 5 than go 4 of 5.
Me too. Even though I'm testing that theory lately, and I'm not sure I actually believe that, because I've been experimenting with that strategy. It doesn't feel good.
Well, it's because it's mentally agonizing when that happens.
It's quite draining.
Yeah,
it's quite draining.
Right. You can't be like, oh, I'm right there.
No, I'm not. I'm burning something, but not the edges. Not the edges.
What are you doing with Chig and the backfield? And then, by the way, just segue straight into Tampa Bay, because I know you've got some Rachaad White takes as well.
Yeah, I think Chig is fine. He's just in that conversation of, if you're not paying up at tight end, if you want to punt, I think, again, with no Burks, reasonable output to get some targets. More interested on the Tampa side, though. It's always very difficult to project. We know that Mike Evans can win slates, and I think that always keeps him in the tournament bucket. It's hard to really project him confidently for how much volume he'll get. That's the opposite of what I could say about Rachaad White, who checks all the boxes volume-wise. If they're trailing, he seems to get targets. If they're winning, he seems to get carries. His price is reasonable. They're at home. Rachaad White's going to be popular, but he should be. I really like him this week once again.
Are you going to the pass? You know what's funny about Tennessee? I forget who I mentioned this to the other day, and they were as surprised as I was when I looked it up myself. Tennessee has somehow allowed the third fewest passing touchdowns on the season, tied with the Browns, Jets, Packers. Pretty crazy. I will say, though, I don't put a ton of stock into that, because there's always nuance to some of these stats. And when you look at the matchups, you faced Kenny Pickett, you faced a combination of Taylor Heineke and Desmond Ridder. Lamar Jackson, fine. That was the London game. Then you face Garner Minshew, or who, even if it was Anthony Richardson, Deshaun Watson when he was completely messed up, Derek Carr. They faced Joe Burrow when he was not right. So they haven't exactly faced anything dominant. Now, I'm not saying that Baker Mayfield by any stretch of the imagination is either, but what are you doing with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin against what should be a pass funnel defense? That's what I'm getting at.
And it should be. And I think, again, that keeps them in the conversation. What I do with them, if I'm not going to an outright stack, is I just feel fine if I land there. If I'm, I can't get to St. Brown. There's an $1,100 gap between St. Brown and Evans in the pricing. So if you fall in the dead zone, you might have to go get Mike Evans, and I'm fine with that. Godwin is mixed in with Olave and Metcalf. Nico and Higgins, of course, are hurt, so his price point's a little depleted as well. I think it's, for me, if I land there, I do, and I'm fine. If I don't, I can live with it. You can't play everybody. Rachaad White's the priority for me anyway.
I actually like Mike Evans quite a bit today.
Coming around. I really liked him on Tuesday. I've softened that a little bit, but again, tournaments, Mike Evans has 30-point upside every time he takes the field.
Yeah, he does. And Baker Mayfield likes to look his way. Do you prefer him or Godwin?
I prefer Evans.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on this one? Fun game. Weird game, but a fun one. And I think I'll probably have more Hopkins than I should.
No, I'm going to end up falling into this trap. Tampa is straight 2.5 across the board right now. I like them inside 3 at home. I think they're going to find a way to get this done.
You like Tampa at home?
I do.
All right. I'm fine with it. They've been a tough team for me to bet. I'm kind of staying away from them at this point. I don't know what the hell to do with this team.
Yeah, they are an enigma, but still, I don't know. I like that spot.
I'm with you. I just probably stay away. Anyway, let's talk about the next spot here. We've got Green Bay, but four games on the 4 o'clock window, by the way. So it should be a fun afternoon slate. Green Bay and Pittsburgh. I think I'll probably have trace amounts of Aaron Jones here just because he's coming off. We talked about it last week. We're like, hey, if he isn't efficient, but the volume's there, then we know that we're right about this. Even if he's efficient, but the volume isn't there, we're kind of wrong, but we got lucky. It was somewhere in the middle. Well, we were definitely right about the volume, hands down. 20 attempts, 6 targets. That was huge. From a production standpoint, it's kind of like take it or leave it. What did he have, 18 or 19 or something? Nothing crazy. But he did score. He was the clear bell cow there. You just did it. He wasn't efficient. He clearly wasn't, it took him a little while to get back. But Jordan Love, man, Jordan Love, I'll say it once, I'll say it a million times. He's not particularly good. I'm not going to the passing game here. I haven't been. I've been fading the passing game. If it bites me in the ass, fine, because it's done me pretty well for most of the year. I'll have a little bit of Aaron Jones. And on the other side, the question now is, do you go to Najee Harris? Do you go to Jaylen Warren? These are two very cheap running backs against what has been kind of a run funnel defense for the Green Bay Packers. But the run game for Pittsburgh is so bad, man. It's so bad. Kenny Pickett's thrown more than one touchdown, by the way, in one start in his career. I could just go on and on about how you play these guys, some of whom are getting ownership, and at the end of the day, you go, man, what went wrong? And then the light bulb goes on and you go, oh, wait, I played the Pittsburgh Steelers offense.
Yeah, that sums it up pretty nicely. This is one where it's always, again, a delicate balance. Do I think that they're super efficient? No, not really. But volume for the price point, now we're like Najee in particular. You don't see that many running backs priced. I mean, I could say the 4K range and it makes it sound really nice. He's 4,900. So he's basically 5,000. But he could have 20 touches. Like that is just, it's really difficult to find that as a favorite at home. And we have that here. So although I don't think he's, or going to have some type of like crazy resurgence and be a 7K running back, I think he fits the price point that I'm looking for in some instances. And I'm with you. I can't go back to Green Bay's passing. I tried that for a while. It's not really working. And I respect Pittsburgh's defense. So pieces of this game, not stacks of this game.
It's been an exercise in futility.
It's not working.
And maybe it does today, but I feel like I don't feel like the upside is high enough against the Steelers D in Pittsburgh. You know what I mean? If this was Green Bay going up against Arizona, I go, yeah, okay, I'll do it. Fine, it's gross, but I'll do it. Against Pittsburgh, I just don't have a ton of confidence there at all. At all.
No.
And by the way, John William asked, is there a stochastic code for Owner's Box to get them? I should have mentioned that. No, it asks for a code. As long as you use the link for Owner's Box, you don't need a code, even if it asks you. The link will take you there. That's all you need. All right. Anything else from this game? And I'm going to ask you to do this. I know you're not going to feel great about it, but I'm going to ask you, how do you prioritize the players from this one? And you can say very low priority. That's fine.
Yeah, very low priority. It's going to be mostly on the Pittsburgh side. And I think, again, you have to categorize what you're trying to accomplish. I think that Najee is going to have volume that gives him real chances. And I'd be, not stunned because it's still Najee, but I think he's going to have a pretty good game. If he falls in the end zone, he's probably useful. Then on the other side of that, you have a guy like Pickens on the outside, who is he could have a crazy game, in my opinion, where he legitimately could get 0. Not the same type of play whatsoever. Totally boom bust versus what I think is a pretty reasonable floor for a guy like Najee. So it's just a risk tolerance issue. That's what I'm debating. And those are the type of players I'm taking pieces of, little pieces of the Steelers offense.
Okay. I'd put Deontay Johnson number 1 in this game still.
That's fine. He probably checks kind of the middle ground between both volume and
yeah, exactly. But he finally got off the schneid. I mentioned last week that the last touchdown that he had was thrown to him by Ben Roethlisberger in December of 2021. Think about that before last week. That's nuts. Absolutely mind-boggling. No matter who's throwing you the football, the fact that he had not scored in essentially 2 calendar years, Ben, is outrageous. Finally got off the schneid. I bet that too. And that was just a gut bet. There's nothing that should suggest anywhere the bet outside of the fact that books were still listing at some of them at like plus 160 for him to score. Guy hadn't scored in 47 years, and he's still plus 165 to score, which is, granted, they don't give you a no on that, but you know what I'm saying. Usually a guy that hasn't scored in that long is not getting plus 160, plus 170 odds to score.
It just shows that it's like almost all the variance on touchdowns is ridiculous. Nuts. Now, granted, Kenny Pickett isn't good, but I like Deontay Johnson at 5,400. I still think that I feel good about that price point. I do. Anyway, what do we have next? Let's get into some fun stuff here. Yeah, Detroit and the LA Chargers. All right. 48.5 point total. It's the highest on the slate. David Montgomery's going to play. Practiced all week. He's good to go. He has no injury designation. So it's both him and Jahmyr Gibbs who are priced,
similarly to each other. I think, what are they, like $100 apart? Yeah, $100 separated in a spot like this. With that in mind, I know the other day we were doing a show and people were like, how are you not talking about Montgomery and Gibbs? Only because I don't really feel like trying to figure out what it's going to be at both, upper mid-range price points.
Yeah, I mean, the Lions, I think partly because of injury and just partly because they're really good, they just have so many skill position players that are priced to the premium. Like, you're just talking about expensive options at every position. Running back, you have St. Brown, you've got Laporta. Like, you're not getting a break. So it's really hard for them all to coexist. You can obviously look to this team, but I also think there's a chance that the Lions play just fine today and no one is a have to have it on their team.
Oh, okay. So are you largely underweight to the Lions, including the passing game?
Yeah, I think that's
Amon-Ra St. Brown and Laporta are both getting significant ownership.
St. Brown is someone that I forced in. He's just so good, and I had the money. Feels like double-digit targets in almost every game script. Outside of him, though, I don't have a lot to talk about. I think Laporta is totally fine. I think that Goff is totally fine. But I also could live without them. They're in the bucket with a lot of other stacks.
Okay. All right. Seeing in chat, people saying that Jamar Chase is expected to play. I thought he would, but not as confident as I usually would be. Let's see here. Jamar Chase did what was necessary in his warm-ups and will go. Time will tell how effective he is, but expected to be active. You know what? I'll tell you what. Again, this is going to be subjective to anybody who's making these decisions. I'll take my chances on Jamar Chase.
Yeah. It just is what it is. It's also like anything else. Jamar Chase could be completely fine, and on the third play of the game, he could tweak his back, and you're done. Like,
yeah,
it's just added variance. That's really all it is.
Well, the only reason I mention that now, outside of seeing it in chat and now seeing it on Twitter,
St. Brown, yeah,
exactly. So St. Brown. Well, on the other side, Keenan Allen, right? So you've got Keenan Allen, you have St. Brown, you have a lot of these. We haven't really talked about the expensive receivers yet because most of them are in the late window, including CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Chase is early window, but Keenan Allen. Do you have a priority order here? I think probably be helpful to everybody watching. Just your thoughts on this. I'll give you mine as well.
St. Brown would be one. I'm hoping that, I mean, it can't hurt. No one in their right mind is like, oh, Chase is ruled in, let me pivot to St. Brown. It's only going to deplete maybe some minor St. Brown interest of people who said, I want a Bengal stacks. I was unsure. Now I can go get Chase. So it just solidifies him at 1. The other guys is kind of a coin toss. I'd go Chase 2 and then Keenan Allen 3. Just a price thing though.
Okay. Wait, is Lamb 4?
Yeah, Lamb is 4. Lamb is whatever. We'll get there.
No, go ahead. Oh, yeah, we'll get to that. Because I have some interesting thoughts. I have some thoughts on that Dallas game. And Jordan, get prepared I want to pull the Sims up because when Greg and I did the Sims strategy show on Friday, we were getting a lot of Dak stacks. And well, you can look at that multiple ways. You and I talked about it on Tuesday. I'm straying off course here, but bear with me. I think it'll be helpful. This is one of those games where it's like, okay, you just needed the Dallas defense. Like in week 1, remember that primetime game where they beat them, 700-0 or whatever it was? Tony Pollard had his best game of the year. I believe it was his only 20 fantasy point game, but it wasn't a game that you would necessarily need on a main slate. It's like 21 points or something, right? 22 points. CeeDee Lamb and everybody else were largely ineffective, not because they couldn't have been good, but because it wasn't necessary. It was the defense. They had 2 interceptions, 1 fumble recovery, 7 sacks, and 2 defensive touchdowns and 37 fantasy points. All right. They won 40-0. They had 37 fantasy points on the defense alone. Could be one of those games. It could be one of the games where they go and they blow them out and they all sit in the fourth quarter, but they're all sitting on the bench after racking up 30 fantasy points apiece to Pollard, Dak, and CeeDee Lamb. Or it could just be one of those games where everyone does a little bit of everything, kind of like what you're referring to now with Detroit, where you could see them playing well, but nobody gets there. Dallas could rout the Giants with Tommy DeVito at quarterback, and still not everybody gets there because the defense does enough to tamp down the production of the offense. I think there's a lot of different ways that game could go, and you might have to play it real specifically to how you see it playing out.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a college football mentality when you have situations like this, but there's going to be touchdowns up for grabs for Dallas. If one guy consolidates them, like any guy on any team, it's over. But if he doesn't, and the game plays to the script, you're probably not tapping into many ceiling performances for anybody on the Cowboys.
Yeah.
But to the flip side, and let's not get crazy, but I know it feels like there's no possible way the game is close, but like there's a lot of ways the game is just like, 31-20, and it's just normal. Like,
or that's not how I think I don't see that personally.
I don't see that either, but it's a 17
no, hold on.
Oh, go ahead.
What I could see though is that the Giants defense doesn't just fall asleep. Like the Giants defense doesn't just cave entirely in a divisional spot, and they don't really allow DeVito to do anything to destroy them. And then it ends up being like a 20-3 game or something like that. If this game doesn't get there and nobody really gets there, to me, I would see it being Giants defense does enough to where it's not an utter embarrassment, and they keep it from completely unraveling. You know what I mean?
Think that's more likely. All I'm saying is that I know it feels like there are no scenarios where the Giants keep it within 17.5, but there are. Like, that's the actual spread on the game. So if they do keep it in there, maybe Dak is pushed. And that's just another point. And I do think it relates to the game that we're supposed to be talking about, because those Cowboys players are direct pivots from most of the skill position players on both the Lions and the Chargers.
Absolutely. OMG Lulz said 3 points, LOL. I was being generous.
That's what everybody thinks.
Yeah.
I have not seen one person that thinks that the Giants can do even remotely anything to keep this even remotely respectable.
Yeah. It's tough.
It's hard to think they can. I get it.
We are at 666 likes. We can't have that on a Sunday morning.
That we can't have.
Can't have that on a Sunday morning, my friends. 3,000 people watching with us. Take a sec. Hit that thumbs up. 1,000 seems unlikely at this point, Ben. Huge plus. This is like Giants winning this football game odds, but can't be sitting on 666. Not on a Sunday morning.
No. We gotta remedy that quickly. And yeah, you never know. The Giants. We're not getting to 1,000, and the Giants aren't winning. I think that's a pretty safe parlay for the day. But the way I've been going, who knows? Anyway.
Yeah, how are you playing the Chargers Detroit stacks and just this game on both sides? Because you have Eckler. Well, first of all, Palmer's on the IR. Obviously, Mike Williams is on the IR. So a little more consolidated there. Facing a good defense, but not as good a defense as the Jets in a primetime game like we saw last week. Favorite spots from both sides of this game?
St. Brown, no question about it. And then it becomes tricky because it's not to say that I don't like the Chargers pieces, but they're all really expensive. You need to make room for an Eckler or a Keenan Allen, and it's not that easy to do that. I keep waiting, and I really debated what to do with Quentin Johnson. He's had such a bad year. If this was like a showdown, and they've been on Showdown recently and whatnot, I would get him. I may look to him as like an anytime touchdown scorer in the betting markets. I don't think I can play him, but at some point I still believe that he's not just going the way of Jalen Reagor, and he's going to be just fine.
Yeah, not giving up hope?
I'm not. I'm really not. I just, at 4,100, he's like the same price as JSN. I couldn't click. I just couldn't do it. I was close, but I couldn't do it.
Yeah, and then Noah Brown with Nico out too.
There's too many other pivots down there to click him.
Quinn said, really, guys? 1,000 seems unlikely when there's 3K people in here. What kind of loyal fan base? Hey, look, we're just being realists. We've done this show long enough to know when our time has come. This isn't negativity, no pessimism. Maybe from Ben, not from me. Just being realistic.
Catch a stray.
You're a consummate pessimist, man. And it shows in your eyes.
Yeah, that's why I wear glasses, not contacts.
That's right.
Mhm.
All right. Atlanta, Arizona. Atlanta, 2.5-point favorites, 43.5-point total here. Jordan, so we ran the Sims. Did you run it for 10,000 contest pool and 30% or 25% payout to first? 25? Okay. I want to see how much we're getting to from both of this game. Do Arizona as team and then add another filter and add Atlanta too. Because as gross as this is, Ben, I don't actually care. I mentioned you on Tuesday. I know Kyler Murray's going to have to shake some rust off. You don't bring this guy back in a lost season where you have nothing to play for and you're starting Clayton Tune. You don't bring him back unless he's 110% healthy. It's that simple. Doesn't mean he's not going to be rusty. I think he'll be healthy, and I think you might be surprised. Wouldn't be surprised to see him run a little bit. James Conner is back. Amari DiMercato is out. I like Conner. I like some Kyler Murray. And yes, I like some Bijan Robinson.
Of course.
This is a 43.5-point total. You can't turn your nose up at a 43.5-point total between two bad teams who are low priced. Like usually when you get these terrible games where the average salary on a team is $5,000 or whatever, you're talking about really, really low scoring, 36, 37, 38-point totals. 43.5-point total with no weather conditions affecting this game. We'd be silly to write this off.
Not writing it off, but I think we all know, and most of us have experienced it, that the Falcons don't rely on logic, and that makes it tough. All jokes aside, like you just because something I struggle with this maybe more than most things, just because I project something should happen, if they don't share that vision, it doesn't really matter. Like if I'm convinced they should play Ritter, well, if they're not going to play him, I can't use him. Bijan has all the talent in the world. I still do think that they're going to get it right and maybe start to utilize him more and more. He grades out well in the tools. The price is reasonable, but it's been frustrating. So I have him. I have some Heineke stacks just like last week. And I do have some Trey McBride, who's just been awesome. I'll continue to play him.
You're right. What we think should happen isn't always what does happen at all. But that's why we're talking about it. That's why we play DFS. Otherwise, there'd be no point of doing this. It's not like these guys are unowned either. All I'm saying is that at the price points, right? That's for me, that's the key, the price points. At all of these respective salaries, I'm willing to to jump in on something like this. Like if you look at the top stack tool, Arizona actually is one of our top 5 rated stacks, not because they have a high top stack probability. It's only 4% on the site that they're the top overall stack, but because the average salary of this team is $5,200. Now, Atlanta's not a stack I'm looking to get to, but Bijan is not expensive. On Arizona, James Conner, forget about a stack. You want to go to Conner, assume he's the bell cow in his return? I think he will be. Again, why bring him back unless he's fully healthy on a team that has nothing to play for? Trey McBride being another one of those guys. Michael Wilson's questionable for what it's worth, but no, I do like this game. I think as bad as both offenses are, the defenses are equally atrocious and they make terrible decisions. And Atlanta has been notorious for letting bad teams back into games and giving up points late.
I hear you. It's another game though that I do think could have some pieces. We had a super chat about Rondell Moore. I'll be honest. I think that's a little too thin for me. I know he's the flat min, but he didn't really factor in. I'm just not sure. You're drawing to the home run play with him. I don't think that's where I'm going, but for me, McBride and then Atlanta, particularly Bijan, once again, here we go again.
And the problem with those home run plays is that Rondell Moore has to get it behind the line of scrimmage and then run 50 yards.
Oh yeah, his A-dot is like -2.
Yeah.
But
also, I think the return of James Conner hurts Rondell Moore. You know what I mean? If you actually have a guy that you trust in the backfield, I don't know how many of those you have to get to Rondell Moore anymore. So, but thanks for the super chat, man. Yeah, Trey McBride, Bijan, sprinkles of Kyle Pitts as well. No real affinity for him this week, but he's 4% owned. 4% owned Kyle Pitts. It's gross, but I'm not totally opposed to it. No, I like this game from both sides. Any other thoughts on this before we keep it moving?
No, decent game. We know that.
Yep, sure is. All right. Giants and Dallas. I'm not playing anyone from the Giants. I can't do
you
it.
shouldn't.
I mean, I get the concept of being different, but I can't do it with the Giants, man.
No, that's actually a waste of time talking about that.
And Barkley's just too expensive. Even if he gets the volume. Maybe he breaks one, but still uphill battle. With Dallas, we broke this down. We don't have to spend a ton of time on Dallas. I'll put it to you this way. I get the Dallas stacks. Obviously, I get the Dallas defense, but I'm going into this one with pretty clear vision. Like, I understand how this could go right, and I totally understand how this could go wrong. At no point at the end of the night or the end of the day when my Dallas stacks end up being terrible, am I going to look back on this and go, man, I thought this was a smash, right? And if I end up not having Dallas and it ends up that I needed them, at no point am I going to be surprised. This isn't really actionable information I'm giving you. I'm just saying that this is one of those weird games. Whenever you have a total as big as this, it's the biggest on the year. It's north of 17. There are going to be there are wrinkles that are unaccounted for or not present in other games that we have on a game like this. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. It's just a unique situation. We had an interesting super chat from this, if I could take it right now, Loughy, because it's about the Cowboys. From Mike, he said, I'm playing one lineup, large field thoughts on a triple stack with Dak, plus the Cowboys defense. Is that too thin? I do think that's too thin. Only because if the Cowboys defense really gets there, it would be not impossible, but it's so difficult to think that Dak and the pass catchers are getting there. Because they run counterintuitive completely to me.
And not just are they counterintuitive, but the stack and the defense are very expensive.
That's what I'm like. The defense reasonably is going to have to score, which is like the worst thing that could happen to your stack.
Exactly. On another slate where it's like a really cheap stack, it doesn't matter as much. But if you were trying to run, I'm just going to assume that he's talking like a Tony Pollard, CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson with Cowboys defense. You're talking now, 5,000 remaining per player, not including a quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, just
hold on. I didn't throw. So Dak in there is 67. That gives you 46 per player remaining. It's tough. It's doable, but it's tough because, like you said, that defense has 2 touchdowns. There's no way your stack's getting there unless they have a Miami Dolphins versus Denver performance, which is like once in a
generation.
Yeah.
And even in that, like the Denver scored 20 points.
Yeah. Right. Like that game was kind of competitive through the first 1.5 quarters.
It was. Yeah. Like yeah, absolutely.
Tony Pollard's a good play. CeeDee Lamb's fine, but I don't have him among the top of the top guys only because of the way that this game looks. Listen, could he have 5 receptions and 3 of them are touchdowns? Yeah, of course he could. Yeah, but I think the path to him getting there is more narrow than Jamar Chase and more narrow than Amon-Ra St. Brown today.
I agree with that. Any love for the Giants defense? The biggest problem is that they probably get put in some really god-awful positions through no fault of their own. That's why I can't play them.
You know, I made a mistake with that early in the year where I played some Jets defense that was close to min salary against the Cowboys. And I really didn't take, and I should have, but didn't take into account as much just that, like, that's basically a war of attrition when you're talking about like the offense versus the Jets defense or even any good defense when your own offense is so bad. Eventually one is going to break the other down, and it's usually that the offense does to the defense because they're on the field for the entirety of the game. And I think that's kind of what you're saying here with the Giants defense.
Yeah, it's really difficult when there will be a couple of short fields in this game, and that's tough.
Right. And not just that, they'll always be on the field.
Yeah, which is good. You want your defense on the field, but not when it's like that. There's a difference.
What are you doing with Dallas to wrap this one up and then close it out with Washington, Seattle? We'll turn it over to Live Before Lock after this.
Yeah, with Dallas, I'm not doing anything special. I think that you should look to their skill position players, and if you have tournament lineups, hope that one of them consolidates multiple touchdowns. I think Pollard's the most likely to do that, followed by Lamb, followed by the stack. The defense, because more values opened up, I think it's more playable than I thought on Tuesday. I still don't think paying that type of price for defense is my favorite thing to do, but they are playable just because of the situation.
Okay. I saw someone mention earlier on the show that they moved to a state where they can only play DFS. We were talking about Odd Shopper and everything. Not true, because all of these pick'em sites are blowing up right now. Absolutely blowing up, man. And Sleeper Picks is one of them, but they've introduced a little wrinkle to their product that makes it more interesting than others. What do you know about dynamic pricing, Ben?
A little more lately, just because I was talking about Sleeper yesterday in the college streets, not just the dynamic pricing, which I know you're going to talk about. They've been giving these free squares out where it's like, okay, the format just got a hell of a lot easier because they're giving you a layup on top of everything. They've got the 100X. But yeah, Sleeper is one of the many apps out there right now that is really exploding. I see it all over my Twitter feed every single day.
$100 first match deposit bonus. But now you can actually, like on other pick'em sites, you can't take anytime touchdowns for a guy unless his odds are close to even money, right? Unless it's like your standard -110 on, or 120 on a prop. Sleeper, it's multipliers. So like, let's say you wanted to take an anytime touchdown play, build it into your lineup. By the way, you can up to 100x these entries. Now you can grab a guy that might be like plus 400 because it's a 4x multiplier on your card. That's huge. Same thing with home runs or double doubles, triple doubles, any of those kind of exotic type props. That I won't even say exotic, but the ones that you couldn't throw into a regular card are now there on Sleeper. You put in $100, you got 200 now. You put in 20, you got 40. Links in the description for Sleeper. It is a really, really cool format. They got the Sunday specials too for today. Christian McCaffrey, rushing yards knocked down from 65.5 to 48.5. CJ Stroud from 253.5 passing yards to 189.5 passing yards. CeeDee Lamb from 77.5 receiving to 58.5 receiving. So some really good discounts going on there today for Sunday's Week 10 slate, man.
Yeah, it's really what we are always talking about is there's money to be made all over the place in all different iterations. And when you see these, like what's on the screen, it's hard to ignore that type of stuff. 99% off. That is one way to put it. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. And some huge free squares that you get over there too, where it's legitimately a free square. All right. Check it out. Link in the description and chat. You want $100 first match deposit bonus, particularly for those of you guys in non-legal betting states. That's a huge way to get this in and play these cards and up to 100 extra money. Washington and Seattle. Where are you at on Seattle? You know, early in the week and throughout the week, I really like this Seattle stack. Little worried about the rain, but the total hasn't really moved all that much. I just have zero faith or confidence whatsoever in Washington's ability to slow down downfield opportunities to the Metcalfs, to the Lockett's, to the JSN, not to mention that you're coming off a horrible loss against Baltimore that was, that was advertised as like the best early wave of games game, and they just got destroyed. They're back home in Seattle. I still like these Seattle stacks today.
Yeah, I do too. I'm not too worried about it. They're used to that. Good buy low spot on them. And you've got targets. You've got Lockett, you've got Metcalf, you've got JSN. Washington is just, their secondary is a mess. Healthy total. What's there to say? Geno Smith and the pass catchers are very, very playable today.
So Geno Smith, pass catchers. What about Mr. Kenneth Walker?
That's where it got a lot trickier. I still believe, but it's kind of a cop-out that you could say that for any talented player that you could put him in a Millie Field tournament. But the problem is there's too many pivots now for me. I liked him to begin the week, and I've softened on that stance because of the Mixons, Aaron Jones, ETN, Pollard, even Derrick Henry, if you want to go a different direction with the Titans. There are just so many other backs, and I was inferring, and I still believe there's pass for Walker to have good volume, but there's also pass for Charbonnet to continue to play a role. Yep. And that just is a lot of questions without not many answers.
It's a mess because 2 weeks ago, Walker came into the game after not practicing almost all week. Maybe he was just limited.
I think he was.
Me too. But then last week they got the shit kicked out of him and they used Charbonnet in the passing game. It's if you're going the Walker, you got some big balls on you, and I love it because there could be a big payoff here. There
really could. And
There
you just
could.
mentioned it, outlier after outlier. Like the Baltimore, that's not a real game.
No,
I don't know.
it's tough. I'll have a little bit of Walker. I want a little bit of Walker exposure, and I might have some lineups. I haven't built them yet, but I might have some lineups where it's like a Walker Metcalf without Geno.
Okay.
Also,
We'll
what
review
if this
that.
rain actually hampers them a little bit and they do go? I'm going to have some Walker and Metcalf without Geno, maybe some Walker and Lockett. I'm just telling you right now, I have a little bit of it.
Okay. We'll look at them on Tuesday during the podcast review.
Yeah, man. We'll do it. Look, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And it's all recorded right here. So we can't hide from shit, brother. Also, we're gonna hit 1,000 likes, which is insane. I did not think we had a single shot.
You ran the show long though. So does that really?
Oh, come on, man. Come on.
No,
When do I
it's
not?
incredible. The people rally for us.
Man,
If
you
only
guys are the best.
my real parlays fought back like this.
Appreciate you for real though, guys. We
Yeah,
do.
that is incredible.
The support, like, I hate sitting here asking. It goes a long way. That's why subscribing and hitting the thumb, all that stuff goes a long way for us.
Look at that.
1K, we just hit it, baby. You're the best. All right, close us out with the Washington Commanders. What are you doing here? Any run backs, any top spots?
Not really. I'll continue to say that McLaurin has opportunities out there. You know, Curtis Samuel being in and out of the lineup, I think that jiggles stuff around. But at the end of the day, McLaurin's still the alpha. I think they'll be trailing. If they can coexist in the weather, then in theory, Washington should be able to throw. So I'm fine with that.
All right. Hey, you can fight. We didn't go that much over. We've done much worse than this.
No, it's just fine.
We have done much worse than this. So let's take this one in stride. Plus, we got the 1K, and I don't think anyone's gonna fault us for going a few minutes over. So that's okay. Anyway, our top plus our highest rated bet on OddsShopper right now for NFL, it's on DraftKings. If they still let you bet props on DraftKings, Rachaad White under 62.5 rushing yards. Smash that. Dude, smash that.
62.5. Oh yeah. Wait, what?
I mean,
Why?
that just seems wrong.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the discrepancy in the. Are you on OddsShopper right now?
I'm looking at 51.5s and 50s out there.
48.5
on Fan.
Well, that's just one of those again. That just prove we're not. You know, if you're interested in learning more about that, over oddshopper.com, you can understand what we're talking about if you think we're speaking a foreign language. But that is where you see the value. How they both can't be right. He can't be balanced for 48 and 62 at the same odds. So obviously one of those is inefficient. Let's pick on the one that's inefficient.
Well, Caesar still lets me bet props. So I'm going to go over there. It's only been up for 2 minutes. My guess is it's gone before I can even get there.
Probably. It's going to move very quickly.
That's oddshopper.com, by the way, if you guys want to check it out. Also, Eric and Matt coming up. By the way, follow Ben at Jaguars DFS. Appreciate you, brother. Great show. Rock the Stokastic Hall of Fame avatar. Get a free month of everything. $200 value if you finish top 3 in a field of 5,000 or more. Just go to stokastic.com/avatar. Use it. Download it. Wherever it is you play. DraftKings, FanDuel, Owner's Box. Finish top 3 in a field of 5,000 or more. And upon doing so, if you finish top 3 in a field of 5,000 or more, it doesn't matter if it's a nickel or a quarter, whatever. Tweet us your wins at Stokastic HOF. Rocking the avatar. You're getting a free month. You want the whole NBA Sims Max package, NFL package, whatever. $200 value. It's yours. And you get inducted into the Hall of Fame every single Sunday. Appreciate you guys being with us. Eric Lindquist, Matt Gajewski, everybody. Goodbye.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to NFL Live Before Lock, presented by Owner's Box. I normally would have the TV behind me. Instead, I have Manhattan. I'm Eric Lindquist. You can go follow me at Eric Lindquist over on the Twitters. Excited to be here talking through this Week 10 slate that is kind of wild, in my opinion. Going to be a really, really fun one. Smash that like button. I know you guys did a phenomenal job a little bit before this show started here. Well, where are we at? Over 1,000 likes here already. We really, really appreciate your support per usual here. We're going to get my buddy Matt Gajewski on here in just about a second, like right about now, at Matt Gajewski, Matthew _ Gajewski over on the Twitters. How you doing, my dude?
Doing good, not paying attention. Clearly, my camera was off.
I
You can
was
see,
aware.
yeah, trying to finish my small field builds. Little behind this morning with CBB and all the sports action. So, Loughy, I appreciate you going long. It helps me build other lineups, and it helps my bladder because this show is a marathon.
That was so flatline. There's nothing better than flatline Gajewski and like a little bit of like a on edge Gajewski.
Dude,
early
if you
in
drink
the morning.
coffee, and like have a protein shake, doing a 90-minute show is unbelievably hard. Like I took a piss 5 minutes ago. I already kind of have to go again.
This is really fun conversation as we start the show today.
Anyway, yeah.
3.1K
Anyway,
people
that's
hanging
what's
out
on
here.
that's what's on my mind. So I usually just tell the people how it is.
Well, anyway, we're going to start the show now. It's going to be very exciting here to talk through all of the tools here at Stokastic, talk a little odd shopper here as well. But before we get started, of course, we want you to finish at the top of these GPPs today. And when you do so, Awesemo Hall of Fame. Yeah, you heard me. Awesemo back in the day. Now Stokastic Hall of Fame. Awesome stuff that you can get. Getting that Stokastic avatar, downloading it, and then tweeting your wins when you finish in the top 3 of any GPP of 5,000 or more entries, $1 or more, you will be entered to be able to get 1 month. Yeah, 1 month of any Sims package that we have here at Stokastic. So Stokastic HOF, tweet your wins over to them over on X. Phenomenal stuff. That's a good way to get your day going for sure. Caffeine will get you. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. Luckily, I'm caffeinated. Also, East Coast. I'm peppy right now. It's 11:45 out here. I'm ready to rock. It's so different living in the future rather than 3 hours out on the West Coast where you wake up at 6 a.m. every Sunday morning and get to work, especially on a day like today where it's like, 9:30 is the Germany lock. That's as good as it gets.
Do you prefer the East Coast time?
I prefer it for NFL. I strongly prefer the West Coast for NBA. Like, having a 7 p.m. lock is the weirdest thing that I've ever experienced in my life. I don't know how you East Coasters do it, because then you're late swapping to 10:30. Get off my lawn with that. That's insanity.
Yeah, I like the earlier the better for me. I don't know if DFS is even legal in Hawaii, but maybe someone in the chat that's from Hawaii can tell me. I think that would be ideal for me. So we have NFL locking at 7 a.m. That would be sick.
Yeah, 7 a.m. action. That would be outrageous. Yeah. And then you're also in Hawaii, which doesn't suck either. But you know what doesn't suck? The fact that we have Jamar Chase playing football today here. The actives and actives just came down. Anything stand out to you? Because I think it's just business as usual.
I did not really build my lineups before inactives, so this will change nothing for me. I'll have all the updated information.
Well, gee, look at you go. Let's get to it then, shall we? We go position by position on the show. Smash the like button as we begin at the quarterback position per usual. At the top, Lamar Jackson, no ownership. Justin Herbert, no ownership. CJ Stroud, no ownership. Joe Burrow, the first guy starting to pull ownership there at 6,800, 6,700 for Dak. We'll start 6,500 and up here because there's 2 guys at the bottom of the range pulling all the ownership, but how am I not playing a 1% Lamar Jackson in tournaments today? Again, I understand the Cleveland defense is phenomenal, but this is a 1% own Lamar Jackson, right, Matt?
I haven't built my Millie Maker stuff yet, but I'll give you my best take on it. I'm surprised it's this low, and I understand the cheap quarterbacks are looking really nice today. And some of the mid-price guys too, like Burrow in that range, looks awesome, but he's still Lamar Jackson. I understand that this is probably just a matchup thing for people. It's definitely by far one of the harder matchups he'll play all year against that Cleveland defensive line who's gotten him previously. And then Justin Herbert, I guess, is kind of in this range too. It's sort of these two up in a little expensive bucket by themselves. He's also in a difficult matchup against a good Detroit defense who has a good pass rush. So those are both 2 studs on teams, I think, that will move the ball. And if they're both going to come in at 2% for Herbert, 1% for Lamar, yeah, in tournaments, I don't know how you don't click them. And I think part of the reason is you're just accessing a ceiling. And if you're making a portfolio of 150, 5%, that's still not a large group of your lineups, and you're still coming in overweight to the field. Plus, a Justin Herbert's incredibly easy to stack now with all the injuries. To me, it's you play Eckler, or you play Keenan Allen, or you can completely punt it off and play one of the other guys. So I actually like the way stacks look with Herbert in particular. And then Lamar, I mean, he accesses the ceiling a lot through rushing, so he's different. I still prefer a Zay Flowers stack with him. But yeah, large field, I like these guys a lot.
Yeah, Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, a combined 1.5% owned together.
That's nuts.
I mean, that's insanity to me. And I understand the data and what people actually end up doing, hand builders, difficult to kind of align with that. I'm assuming it's higher. I think most of us assume that'll be a little bit higher, but nobody wants to play people against the Cleveland defense, and that's understandable. But how many times have we seen Lamar Jackson access a ceiling against anybody? I have to play that. That was the first thing that jumped out to me when pulling up our projections here yesterday and kind of retooling everything after the show on Thursday with Loughy. But Justin Herbert, I love the shout out there. I think stack construction with him. My main thing is, would you play anybody outside of Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler? Because clicking on Gerald Everett or Quentin Johnston just creates like a little acid reflux in my chest.
Yeah, it does the same thing for me. But I mean, at a certain point, the other pass catchers aren't expensive. We'll have some chalk in that range. So it's kind of like what you mentioned with Andrews and Lamar. You do like a cheap Herbert stack. The stack combined might be, I don't know, under 3% owned. It's just a matter of like, can you stomach a Quentin Johnson? Can you stomach a Jalen Guyton? I'm not there yet, but we'll see how this show progresses. I imagine I'll play like a handful of lineups with these guys just because, again, they're under 3% owned. Like if you just came out with one Herbert Guyton stack, like how you might be in a group of people in like a Millie Maker setting. Maybe there's like 10 to 15 lineups that have that construction. I don't know. Like it's going to be so contrarian. Like the rest of your lineup can probably be mostly chalk. And it's not like Justin Herbert's bad. Guyton plays a lot. Quentin Johnson plays a lot. So I don't know. It's a bet I'm probably going to make just because I don't think you need to have a significant allocation in your portfolio to something like that. And you could do the same thing with the other Ravens pass catchers not named Andrews and Flowers.
Let's jump to Joe Burrow here, because I think that this is probably one of the larger talking points here on this entire slate. And by the way, I see my guy Emac there in chat. I'm sorry I couldn't get your DM this morning. I was flying around getting everything done that I possibly could. Definitely Joe Burrow in cash, right? We're on board with that.
Yeah, Joe Burrow in cash. And I'm done with my small field stuff. And I was really curious where I was going to come in on him. Bumped his ownership a little bit, just small field, like condenses a little bit. And I still got 45% of him in the Sims. 45%. Yep. Like this tells me he's under-owned, especially if you're playing smaller field stuff, cash stuff. If you don't come in with him, it's probably a mistake. And I mean, awesome matchup. I think he's easier to stack now with the T. Higgins injury, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. And then Jamar Chase being active, you have that locked-in alpha pass catcher. And now you can double stack. You can use Irwin and a ton of these guys. So it's not only the fact that Joe Burrow projects well by himself, but you have the clear target alpha. And if you need some salary relief, you have the other players that allows you to jam so many other studs on this slate. The Burrow lineups look awesome.
My friend Jordan Klein down there, producer Jordan Klein, best producer in the game named Jordan Klein. I don't think it's close. Wearing a nice little pullover similar to myself this morning. It's weird not seeing you rocking with your guns out this morning, but you know what? That's okay, because you can pull up the lineup generator and make up for everything here. And, the fact that I don't get to see your sexy body this morning. But anyway, we get to definitely fire up the lineup generator. It's under $15 for you guys to try it out. And you're talking about the Sims tool. I think building out some lineups here will really show what we're talking about when it comes down to Joe Burrow. It's one of the most important talking points of this slate, because with no T. Higgins, who just went completely bonkers last week, we know he's on the field an absolute metric ton. You get Jamar Chase, you get Tyler Boyd, you get Trenton Irwin, you get Irv Smith, you get a lot of these pass catchers that create interesting portfolios that I think you can run a ton of Joe Burrow. I'm with you. I'm overweight to him. Let's run some two-man stacks here, Mr. Jordan Klein, mainly because, one-man stacks with Burrow don't make a lot of sense to me for tournaments. Would you agree with that as well? Like, from him to Jamar Chase makes sense as a single, but like so many cheap pass catchers probably go along for the ride if he's putting up 25, 30, right?
Yeah, I do think so. And the other thing is, it's not like you have to run a T. Higgins, Jamar Chase double stack. So the total percentage of the salary you're allocating to a Cincinnati double, it's not like what it normally is. The only thing I could really think of that's like a talking point here is whether we want to include Joe Mixon for a small field. But that seems like we're going a bit beyond the quarterback discussion at this point, especially when we're running these lineups. So yeah, I do really like doubles with Burrow.
Yeah, I really like doubles with Burrow too. And as you pull up the lineup generator here, Mr. Jordan Klein, click on those, save up to 20 of them. Then you can fire up your portfolio directly into 20 max tournaments, into stuff like that. And again, $15, $14.95 for a week of the lineup generator. These are the Sims tools at work for you and giving you the answers to the test. Like, that is what the lineup generator is capable of doing. Now, if you want to have some individual user configuration to it, you can upload those lineups, make a couple of swaps. You can swap them within the lineup generator as well. You can take out certain players, but you can see at the top of it here, we're getting a ton of Joe Mixon. We're getting a ton of Joe Burrow. We're getting a ton of Trenton Irwin, Tyler Boyd. I think he is an extremely important piece to this slate. And why wouldn't he be? Joe Burrow healthy, better calf. Everything's looking great. Everything's coming up roses. They were undervalued against a Bills team that I think is a little bit overrated. I think we all do at this point, but love what we're seeing out of Joe Burrow recently. He's going to be somebody that I am still overweight to here in large field tournaments. But anything else you want to talk about with Burrow before we move along?
I don't think so. I kind of want to talk about Josephus instead of Irwin, but I think that could be more in the receiver
look at
discussion.
you. Oh, I got some grungy individuals at the wide receiver position today. I'm going to take a lot of Arizona darts. I'm just throwing it out there, which leads us into the next batch of quarterbacks where you get under 6,500 to Jared Goff in that game environment that could be luscious against the Chargers. You got Trevor Lawrence, you got Sam Howell, and then Kyler Murray next to Geno Smith. Geno Smith pulling 12% ownership. Kyler Murray feels like the absolute unknown of the universe. Are they going to let him run right away? Are they going to have designed runs for a guy on a one-win football team that, they need to figure out what they have in Kyler Murray before they move on as an organization? I don't think anybody is looking at Kyler Murray as like a foundational, unbelievable piece. But for fantasy, there has always been crazy upside with him. You are now getting him at a price point that's under 6K with an interesting passing configuration of Trey McBride as a phenomenal tight end option, an underpriced Marquise Brown with the connection they had at Oklahoma, as well as some cheap pass catchers that I'm going to be rotating in as well. I am way overweight to Kyler Murray here in 20 max, in 150 max. How are you handling this range of quarterbacks? Is he one of your targets as well?
Yeah, I like Kyler, and you kind of got to walk down Narrative Street to talk yourself into a ceiling because of the injury. But they save a lot of money by not playing him, so obviously they didn't make that decision. They're willing to sink a ton of money into a quarterback that's still somewhat of an unknown. And then this is a bad team. I mean, they're in the number one pick contention. Whether they get it or not, they're probably going to be somewhere in the top 5. And they have a quarterback situation where I don't think the new regime knows if Kyler's the answer. You have the opportunity to pick one of the elite signal callers in this upcoming class. You kind of need to play Murray and decide what he is. Now, he's close to a year removed from an ACL. We've seen players like Javonte Williams return in 6 months. He's been practicing for weeks. I don't think you put him out here and sink all that money into him if he's not fully healthy. You can't actually evaluate him at his full skill set. You know what I mean? Like, if he's limited and you can't use him as a runner, what are you even evaluating? So I do think he runs, maybe not at like a complete normal 100% clip, but I don't think it's going to be a huge decline for him. And then he is a quarterback upgrade to this offense. He's underpriced considering his skill set, if he's even close to 100%, and I tend to think that he is. So I'm going to be overweight to Kyler as well. I like him a lot.
Yep, I like him a lot. And the amount of James Conner I have cannot possibly be understated. I am going to be jamming, and I'm not feeling fantastic about it here at the moment. That's something that the old ROI boost in the Sims tool can help out with. We'll probably revisit the Sims tool here in a little bit as we update things. Yes, Jordan Klein, you already built out your 150 because you're a professional. Look at this guy. He's a professional. I'm kind of a professional, but
I haven't built mine out yet. I built out my small field 150.
Oh, well, let's ride. Do you have any Brock Purdy in that allocation? Because he's somebody you and I are both routinely overweight together with quite a bit. Again, I'm getting to Geno Smith, or not, like a tiny bit of Geno Smith, but I'm underweight to the field. And I'm just kind of spreading that more towards Purdy, more towards Murray in this range. How are you handling a Brock Purdy who has all of his weapons back at his disposal with Deebo Samuel active?
Yeah, I like Brock Purdy. I'm starting my large field now. And what I imagine will happen is it just brings Burrow down and gets a lot of these players up. Again, like in the small field I ran with the Sims, it gave me 45% Burrow, which I don't disagree with. I think he's the best quarterback play on the slate, so that does make sense to me. But in larger field, he is going to be extremely owned, and some of the pairings are going to be owned too. Purdy is one of these guys that I want to target in this range, and He's now playing it's a very good total against Jacksonville. Fully healthy skill position players with Debo back. I think there's a narrative around him that now he's starting to throw interceptions, and people are sort of down on Purdy after a couple negative games where he didn't have a full cast of skill position players around him. So anytime something like this happens, I want to be playing him. He's sort of middling in terms of ownership, which I don't see any problem with. I'll be playing a lot of Purdy in this range. I do like him here.
All right. I love that we're on board together again with that. I think we kind of have been all season long. The last couple of weeks, there's no doubt that the absence of a playmaker, number 19, red 19, the best number in roulette. People don't know that, but Deebo Samuel, for sure. Red 19, getting him back on the field, massive deal for this 49ers football team based on what we've seen the last couple of weeks. He's just too dynamic to not matter here. There's a reason they're road favorites here in Jacksonville against a Jacksonville team that's playing phenomenal football as well. It's kind of my two loves here, San Francisco and Jacksonville facing off. But let's finish this out because, I mean, a little bit of Josh Dobbs love. I kind of have to have it based on the running ability that we've seen, not just in Arizona here, but now he's got better skill position players around him. Hawkinson ends up being active for this one as well. Jordan Addison, of course, is evolving into that number one. We don't get an active Justin Jefferson, but we get Joshua Dobbs and a running ability here at 4.3%. No ownership coming to pretty much anybody else down in this range besides Baker Mayfield, who I was sad to get that he got steamed up as much as he did this week. I was very interested there at like 2-3% on Thursday. Here at like 8-10%, I'm probably okay hitting eject here with how expensive Evans and Godwin are. But anybody else here in the sub 6K range that you're really getting to in your portfolio?
Not really in the sub 6K range. Just a couple guys in the 6K range we kind of glossed over briefly that I am playing more of. The only other player outside of Baker Mayfield that has a lot of interest to me is Will Levis. And that's just based on a pretty decent college profile. He ran a decent amount in college. So I think the floor with him might be a little better than what we have in projections. And he's just one of the hardest players to project right now, given the extremely small sample on him, especially because the volume was poor. The efficiency was really high for him. So you have a lot of tough things to parse through with Levis. And I'm in full agreement with you on Baker. He's a really hard guy to click when he starts approaching 10%. So instead of finding pivots in this range, like Pickett, DeVito, Deshaun Watson in a very tough matchup, I'm just finding myself paying up into that mid 6K range and then up to the studs we already talked about.
Yeah, I think that kind of covers it for you. In tournaments, if you're running one lineup to rule them all and one lineup to find them, like the ring, what are we doing? What are we doing? Who is the guy? What is the stack that we're putting together?
So some of the large field stuff is coming together for me. Obviously, got to make some tweaks and figure this out. But Lawrence, I think he looks pretty good coming in sub 5%. Obviously, the matchup's not going to be easy against Frisco, who had a little bit of juice to their defensive line with Chase Young. So the matchup, I'd say it's middling to difficult, but you can also get a player in Christian Kirk. I think he's a safer option. And Calvin Ridley, getting a lot of him as just an underowned piece with really similar volume to Christian Kirk, and I think a lot of upside and a cheaper price. So that's one stack in quarterback that I am getting a lot of now in my larger field stuff.
For me, it's Kyler Murray. I know it sounds absolutely disgusting, and it's probably, you can go back and run the tape and post it and let me know how stupid I am tomorrow, but or just later tonight, because you could do that too. But Kyler Murray, this is a $5,900 Kyler Murray. I don't know what the running is going to be here. This Atlanta defense, though, giving up the 10th most fantasy points here to quarterback. So they're still a little bit below average. I feel as though Kyler Murray sub 6K, I just have to be firing in one lineup here. He's in my main lineup. I'm going with Brown McBride, and I will live to tell the tale, which is probably going to be a bad tale. I just think he could be a $6,900 quarterback in a week or two. He could be a $7,500 quarterback in a couple weeks as well. This is a bad Arizona defense that's generally good for your quarterback as well. I'm just going to take the shot here. Him, James Conner, a lot of these guys in my portfolio this week. I don't hate the Lamar Jackson or Justin Herbert idea either, considering they're pulling absolutely no ownership. I think Joe Burrow is somebody that is phenomenal to be overweight to here in large field tournaments, but I'm going to not have him in any of my 3 max or 5 max stuff. Maybe I will have one come the end of the show here in like the $33, but as it stands right now, he is not there. Anything else at quarterback that you want to discuss before we move on?
Yeah, just briefly, some other guys that are coming up more in the large field stuff now that I have my life together. CJ Stroud still getting a decent amount. What?
Now that I have my life together, as if you were just like being a degenerate this morning and not actually just grinding college basketball projections like a beast.
Yeah, it's a greasy slate. We got Gardner Webb and some stuff on there. Anyway,
I don't know what the hell you're
football.
talking about. Continue on with NFL, please.
Anyway, in large field stuff, I didn't think I was going to like CJ Stroud. And coming in under 3%, he is expensive. And it's kind of warranted because he's been so good. But you could also make the argument 69 is a lot after just coming off a beast of a game. But it seems like not a lot of people are going to be playing him. And then you have Tank Dell's going to be owned, a lot of his receivers. So I'm kind of interested in stacking the CJ Stroud side and then using the Irwins, the Jamar Chases, the Joe Mixons as a run back, just because Stroud himself is coming in largely under-owned. Dak's the guy we kind of glossed over. You just hope the defense doesn't get a bunch of scores and they kill the Giants too bad, too quickly, because he's been playing well. And then outside of Trevor Lawrence, I do like Goff in that game environment. We touched on him a little bit and getting a decent amount of Geno despite his ownership.
We'll talk a little bit about owner's box as we get over to the wide receiver position. We've got running backs here first, but I do want to do an overlay check-in on our friends over at owner's box. Again, this is one of the reasons you want to be playing over there, is that every single week, you're getting your money in good because of overlay. Period. End of story. It's positive EV to fire up lineups in the Sims tool, carry those over to owner's box, and just fire them up every single week without much thought, purely because, one, you get our data. Two, you also get the opportunity to jump in. What is that number on the screen, Jordan Klein? It is, holy mother of God, 45%. We're less than 50% full here right now on this main iteration, 20K to first, 100K kickoff. It is unbelievable stuff at Owner's Box every single week. So if you're listening to this, again, take advantage of that link. Get your $250 deposit bonus from them. We'll talk about them here in a second, but wanted to check in on that overlay as we head to running back. And oh my God, we have some chalk with Joe Mixon. But I want to start expensive because my highest owned running back, like most weeks when he's available at the running back position, is Christian McCaffrey. He's coming in with 14% ownership. He is not all that difficult to get to now that Cincinnati has everybody available on the cheap end with Boyd, with Irwin, with your guy that we will talk about later. Again, I'm going to save that one all for you. But we have enough cheapies, I think, on this slate. And then Arizona, I'm stacking up a bunch, partly because Christian McCaffrey's so easy to make work in those builds. I can shift it around and have some late swappability here also with 4 games in that afternoon slate. Hey, we went like 20 minutes without talking about late swap on a show of mine. So there you go. Cash the over for once with that. Christian McCaffrey, 9,200. Give me all of that you got in a bag of potato chips. How do you feel about McCaffrey on the expensive end, my friend?
Yeah, it's hard to feel bad about him. I mean, it just comes down to construction for me. Do you want to play 2 elite receivers? The mid-price running backs are pretty strong this week. So for cash, I think he's still on the outside looking in for me. For reference in my small field builds, got a fair amount of him. He ended up being the 5th most owned running back for me behind Mixon, Bijan, who's terrifying. I understand why you might not want to play him, Rachaad White, and Pollard. So not a lot of differences in them in terms of exposure. There's kind of like Mixon and then a cliff for small field. He's right in that conversation. So I think it kind of comes down to your construction you choose for small fields. In large fields, he's an excellent play. Just anytime you can get him where he's not like 30% owned, I have a ton of interest.
So one of my favorite things to do when it comes to trying to go out and project some of these players, or when I'm toying with things on my own, whether it's getting ready for Lindy's Leans, Likes, and Locks on the Odd Shopper channel, or whether it's building out my own DFS lineups, is I like to use the props that exist over at Odd Shopper, and I like to inform my decision-making at the running back position. And that's where I kind of have to talk about Rachaad White here and just kind of go to the chalkier guys that we have here. Mixon is crazy popular at 6,200. We kind of felt that coming. Tony Pollard, expensive, but 7,300. They're 17-point favorites, nearly a 28 team total here, going up against a Giants team that probably couldn't beat. Well, that's silly to say. I hate when people say like, oh, pro team beating a college team, but like, do you at least think Georgia could be competitive against them?
Dude, I watch a lot of college football. Tommy DeVito might have been the 12th best quarterback in the Big Ten last year. I can't fathom that they couldn't call an undrafted free agent from a better college team and play them. Like, Malik Cunningham was an undrafted free agent this year. Tommy DeVito was absolutely atrocious in the Big Ten West playing for Illinois. Like, We couldn't even play him in college DFS. That's how bad he was. Like, I can't believe that this guy's on an NFL team. He couldn't play on the New Jersey Generals.
The New Jersey Generals.
He couldn't play on an XFL team. He's so bad.
That's what I'm getting at.
This isn't like, normally I have some hot takes. Like, this take's not hot. He's terrible.
Terrible, horrible, no good, very bad at football. Is that where we're getting down to? Okay.
Yeah. What was the original question? Like, what were we trying to say?
I don't even know. I just loved the rant so much that I mean, we should send this to Tommy DeVito. He lives at home. Did you hear that yesterday? He just has his mom doing his laundry. And
I'm happy he got some money. Like,
yeah.
Congrats to him for that, but he doesn't deserve it.
XFL washout eventually. Yeah, no, it's not pretty there. But anyway, after eviscerating his life, just wanted to point out that Dallas, I see Tony Pollard, he's popular and everything as well. But Rachaad White, 5,800 against Tennessee. What I was getting at is Odd Shopper. I used him for my decision making and seeing that we love the over there. Again, it's a market-based approach. It doesn't have to do with anything in terms of projecting out the player. But when you upload that and you basically say Rachaad White, 25.5 receiving yards, and that's what I'm going to be cheering for in my portfolio. Well, I think that's a pretty good passing game allotment relative to a lot of these running backs. One of the higher passing allotments, him, McCaffrey. Those are the two guys sitting at the top of the board there. There's a chasm in terms of salary between the two of them, but I feel so much more confident in Rachaad White than I do Bijan Robinson. And I know it's a $200 difference, but Arthur Smith sucks. I can't stand this dude as a human at this point in time, let alone knowing what Bijan Robinson's going to be projected for in terms of goal line work, which, I mean, he's had like none of the last couple of weeks. So I like Rachaad White at 5,800 exponentially more, especially if the field's going to be identical on both of them. How do you kind of feel the Bijan Robinson, Rachaad White situation playing out for you?
Yeah, I don't actually have much to add. You broke it down well. Comes down to projectable volume for me. One guy has it, one guy doesn't. So for safety, it makes a lot of sense. And then when you factor in the ownership on these two players, it's kind of surprising to me that people want to continue playing Bijan after the roller coaster that's been his usage all year. But I kind of get it. He's the new shiny toy. Rachaad White's the exact opposite, a non-explosive, slam into the back of your O-line 20 times type grinder. But he's going to do that. Bijan might not play. I mean, we don't know. Arthur Smith literally did that in a game.
Yep, he literally did that. And I mean, he was sick, but Bijan Robinson, just for whatever reason, Arthur Smith doesn't apply to regular conventions. And I loved watching my Minnesota team beat them, even though I had the Atlanta ticket in my hand because I didn't see how that was going to go well with Hall there. Dobbs, of course, comes in. The rocket scientist just smashes. It was insane to watch. Hopefully we get some of that again, but hopefully we get it at the running back position here, because my second highest owned running back behind Christian McCaffrey this week is Alexander Mattison at 5,500. He is 6.3% owned. I am 5x the field. Again, these are the kind of stands that if it works out one time for you over the course of a season, you're getting such major leverage, but I just don't understand this ownership. We've seen multiple times throughout his career, and I get he has not been good or efficient or any of those things this season. But with absence of Dalvin Cook 2 years ago, multiple times, Alexander Mattison saw a massive volume, and not just in the running game, but in the receiving game as well. 5,500, Ty Chandler, CJ Ham behind him. I don't see how I'm not pulling the trigger on 5,500, even against a difficult New Orleans team. Hey, they're giving up middle of the road, 16th against the position at the running back position. 5,500 for Alexander Mattison. If it burns me, it burns me. I'll live to tell the tale, but with no Cam Akers there for the season, give me Mattison early. How do you feel about him? Am I crazy?
No, I like Mattison. He's another guy that has projectable volume in this range when there's very few players that do. And I understand it. Like, he's not going to, if you're playing cash or something, like, please just find the salary to get to Mixon. That's going to make the most sense. But once you get below Mixon, and we just did the whole Bijan debate, I think Mattison has more projectable volume than Bijan right now. And a lot of it just comes down to lack of alternatives. You mentioned the fullbacks that they might actually be using beyond him. But in this range, I mean, you could get to Rachaad White. I think the volume is going to be similar between the two. If you go to Mattison over White, you shave off about 10% ownership. James Conner's in this range. We don't know what his volume is going to be if you project him for his old role. Madison has similar volume. You play Madison instead of Connor, you shave off about 7% ownership. So he's just the lowest owned player in this range, middling matchup, but the projectable volume is so good. So for a tournament play, it makes a ton of sense. Like who else would they use in the goal line? They flat out don't have anybody.
CJ Ham is the only guy that I would be worried about getting like a 1 or a 2 yard goal line touch. Augustana college great legend CJ Ham.
Yeah, my brother played with him there. I know CJ Ham very
Did he
well.
really? Oh, did your brother play at Augie?
Yes.
That's where both my parents went. So that's cool.
Yeah, it's a sick school. CJ Ham is a wagon.
Yeah, and you want to know what else is a wagon? Their hockey team. They just went D1, created a hockey team out of thin air here for the course of this season. They went to overtime against Denver in an exhibition. They're just doing some ridiculous stuff there with the Augustana hockey team. So shout out Sioux Falls, South Dakota. They're putting them on the map. So very excited about that hockey program for sure. But let's get ourselves back to football here in the running back position. I understand the risk with the Alexander Madison play, but I'm going to embrace it here because in tournaments, there are spots you want to embrace it. Aaron Jones has gotten steamed up. He's sitting at 13% here now. I'm okay being below the field, whereas if you were going to be 3 or 4% like he was the last couple of weeks, you and I have been pretty strong advocates of Aaron Jones here in recent weeks. Other popular plays, you're getting Devin Singletary again. I thought everybody was going to be completely off of him coming off last week, but it would appear that his volume has come back. And then the guy that I'm just going to be getting tons of because the Sims tool got tons of him on Thursday after I already liked him. I like Najee Harris. I can stand Najee Harris. He's 4,900 against Green Bay, who couldn't stop a lot of people running a football at them. I think that's a decent enough price tag where I have to get to it. Who are some of the other chalkier builds that are, or chalkier backs 10% and above that you're still going to be overweight to?
Man, Najee is one of the guys that I have a lot of trouble clicking. And why aren't you considering like Jaylen Warren then? If you love
I am
Najee,
considering Jaylen Warren. I'm
Okay.
playing some Jaylen Warren too.
Then I guess it makes a little more sense. But I mean, it's a strict timeshare. I don't think Green Bay's defense is good. I also don't think they're bad. And are they good enough to stop an inept Pittsburgh offense? I think the answer might be yes. So, I mean, you got two bads facing off against each other. Which one wins? Your guess is as good as mine. But what it really comes down to is Najee's 12.5% owned. Like, what are we doing with this Najee owner? He's not under-owned. Like, if you told me he was 5%, like Jaylen Warren, I would have a lot more interest in him. But Najee coming in north, like double digits, man. I'll just take Jaylen Warren.
Eric, who's your Christian Wood of the night? You bite your tongue, sir. You bite your tongue. We don't talk about Christian Wood or my NBA takes on this NFL show. Stop it. What, Jordan Klein? It's mean. It's not very nice. Christian Wood, he sucked. But I got second in the $4 the next day, so I don't really give a shit. Anything else here? Let's continue on our way further down the board, shall we? Because there are some under-owned running backs, and I just want to throw out one thing. One guy, and I want to get your take. $4,200 Zach Charbonnet. What if Kenneth Walker is lower on the totem pole than before? I understand he's coming off of a bunch of injuries. He was dinged up here. He was dinged up there. He was dinged up everywhere. But Zach Charbonnet's played the number one role now the last 2 weeks. He is 4,200. Nobody's clicking on him against a Washington team that got rid of Sweat. They got rid of Chase Young, which seems illegal that you can get rid of those two and really get nothing back. But hey, such is life. How do you feel about this running attack here? Because I know Lofty was pretty firmly on Kenneth Walker on Thursday. Not sure what his take was here today on him necessarily, but I will take the price discount and take shots on Zach Charbonnet there. If you're going to have him at 2-3%, that does a lot for my builds. I just want to get your take on Seattle here.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad play. He's going to be in a timeshare to some degree, maybe like a 65-35, 60-40 split, something like that. But he plays a lot. And the matchup's definitely not hard now that the entire defensive line for Washington's gone. I think you'd probably just need to run hot with a touchdown, and then you're looking pretty good with him at this price tag. He's essentially free.
DFS cheap. Never trust Eric's plays, he says. I don't care. I'm doing what the data tells me. Data wins, and our data wins because, again, it's been winning. Hashtag winning. I know people don't like hashtags anymore. I don't like hashtags anymore. But yeah, talk to me about your favorite contrarian running backs. Anybody that we have not discussed yet? Matt Gajewski.
Yeah, I guess just looking down the board, the expensive range doesn't really intrigue me too much outside of the popular plays, like McCaffrey, Eckler. But once you get down to Pollard and ETN, I'm surprised almost that Pollard is driving more ownership than ETN. The role is better for ETN. I understand it's probably just a matchup thing. Pollard projected to slaughter this New York Giants defense, whereas ETN's in a more difficult spot. But the volume's so good with ETN. It's not like you're getting like, I don't know, a huge discount or something. But I think he's a very good play in the upper 7 or low 7s, upper 6K range. Otherwise, as far as contrarian options go, we kind of already hit on them. I'm kind of just going down to that low 6, upper 5K range for pivots outside of the ETN and just the chalk up top.
Joe Mixon, stance on him before we get out of here, because he's just too cheap, right?
Flat out too cheap. He's the best running back play on the board. He should be in your cash lineup.
He should be in your cash lineup. I'm slightly underweight in tournaments because I'm an idiot. So that's it. That's all I got for you. Owner's Box is fantastic, though. They are smart because they are giving you guys tons of opportunity to be able to check out their product at a very low entry point here. Basically, here's how it works. You, over there, you, the viewer, you have an opportunity to get $250 put into your account from Owner's Box if you put $250 in. Now, you could start with a minimum of $10 on your first deposit, and you could get 10 back. So amazing, though, to know that you're going to get whatever you put in matched up to $250. That's more than $100 that most DFS sites, that's basically the most that they're ever going to give you here in terms of a deposit bonus. So up to $250. But I brought it up earlier. I'll bring it up again. They also are giving you massive overlay. They know that these tournaments are too big to fill. They completely are aware of that. And yet, every single week, they continue to roll out a 100K prize pool, 20K to first, because they want you to check out their product. So again, $250 deposit bonus along with overlay. We got a tournament that just hit 50% filled. Only 50% filled with 42 minutes left. This is an amazing opportunity to build your bankroll, sustain your bankroll, and get your money in good at a site that not a lot of people have figured out yet, because you still got to you've got the super flex element to it. So a better element that I enjoy, you don't have to worry about defenses, kickers, any of that BS. You get an opportunity to full game stack lineups in a spot. Atlanta probably on the other side, not my favorite game stack to run back with it on that side from Kyler Murray, but you have the Chargers, Detroit. How many pieces do we want from that one at the wide receiver position? I'll say a lot. I can throw those kind of lineups together and then throw some of the cheaper running backs in with Madison, with Devin Singletary, and have some pretty cool positive EV lineups over at Owner's Box, purely because overlay. And then you also have the Sims tool that works directly with Owner's Box. So it's in the link. Click on it. You've got plenty of time here, 40 minutes until lock, to be able to sign up over there and try out a new site. If it hasn't been working for you on DraftKings, on FanDuel, some of the major sites, well, get in where it hasn't been figured out, where there aren't a million tools made and curated directly for Owner's Box, because that's what we have going here at Stokastic with that Sims tool. So utilize those lineups, take advantage of the overlay, and get yourself winning some money over at Owner's Box this Sunday. Beautiful stuff. You also get a $5 lineup. You get a $5 contest ticket. So there's a couple of extra lovely little bonuses waiting in the wings when you deposit $10 and more over at Owner's Box. So, hey, take advantage of it. Thank you so much to them for their sponsorship of our little show here in the YouTube woods. To the wide receiver position we go. But first, we got to check in on some super chats, because otherwise Jordan Klein will be upset. So fan funding, there we are. Look at that. I know how to group things now. I'm an adult. D-Buff, $4.99. DK question. I see Madison listed already. $5,500 Madison or $5,600 Ridley. Good luck to everyone. Obviously, that'd be a flex question because they're different positions. But if it's Madison and somebody else, just understand I'm probably just going to be saying Madison. How do you feel about that 1v1 Matt Gajewski?
I like Ridley a lot. I think he's also going under owned.
I do too.
So I'm going to say him. It's close for me, but I'll prefer Ridley. That's just a game environment I'm getting more of.
All right. Race Fan $22, $1.99. Thank you so much, guys, for the super chats. Race Fan, thoughts on James Conner on DK? Any info on him? He is going to be activated. This was kind of always the plan, I think, to have him and Kyler Murray come in together, because you want to see Kyler Murray with all of his skill position players, or mainly Marquise Brown, James Conner, and be able to assess Kyler Murray with the best that they have to offer on that football team, hopefully getting him an alpha wide receiver sometime in the near future next season. But how do you feel about James Conner? Because I'm obviously going to be a little bit overweight.
Yeah, I like James Conner for the same reasons you do. The offense might get a boost with Kyler playing under center. If he's anywhere near his full role, he's underpriced.
Awesome, guys. Well, let's get to the wild, wild west for the wagons of the week here with my guy, Matt Gajewski. He's not battling dysentery, but as he said before, maybe a little bit of a bladder issue there in the old wagon. But I want to know, in the expensive range of wide receiver, because there are some options. We get Jamar Chase officially active for this football game. I don't know how to judge whether he's limited or not. The ownership is kind of straddling it there, 19.3%. CeeDee Lamb has been eviscerating slates last week, called him, quote, the easiest play in the history of DFS. He went out and annihilated. It felt good. You know, maybe I'm not stupid all the time. Keenan Allen, I'm going to be underweight to him, so that might make me stupid. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown, 8,300 here at the wide receiver position. We have 4 8K wide receivers. Who is your wagon of the week here in the expensive end of wide receiver?
Well, Chase is the best play of them all, assuming he's fully healthy. Just volume is going to be absurd for him. Matchup's very solid. Total's good. Burrow's awesome. I think the interesting conversations when you talk about large field tournaments, because I think Chase has the safest path to volume, but any number of these guys, Keenan, CD, Amon-Ra, could experience a ceiling that you need in tournaments as well. So I do like pivoting away from Chase towards these players and coming in slightly underweight to the stud Bengal. But he's not a guy I'm going to fade by any means. I still want him in the portfolio. Small field stuff, he's the guy I want out of this group. But once you get larger and larger, I want to be targeting more Keenan Allen, CeeDee Lamb, and Amon-Ra. And I don't have a strong preference between them. That's a really good game environment between Detroit and LA. And then CD, I mean, he's going to be leveraged off a pretty decently owned Pollard. So it's kind of how you think Dallas scores the touchdowns. Could come in any number of ways against this horrific New York Giants team. But I would rather to kind of rank them, I think I would go Jamar Chase 1, Keenan 2, Amon-Ra 3, CD 4, if that helps. Maybe that's just the best way to talk about it.
Yep, I think that's a really good way of talking about it because they're all pulling pretty comparable ownership, 15 to 19%. I'm with you. Jamar Chase 1, number 4, CeeDee Lamb. I would flip Amon-Ra and Keenan Allen purely for the $500 discount. Amon-Ra St. Brown, a pretty elite target share week in, week out. Keenan Allen, I mean, same thing can be said to a certain extent, but I mean, has anybody looked at just from a target? I mean, 19 targets, 15 targets. We're talking about such an absurd upside here. They add Donovan Peoples-Jones to try to be a deep threat, to try to do something because Jameson Williams just hasn't been the guy, whether that's because of injuries or whatever, what have you. They brought in Donovan Peoples-Jones to try to be some kind of a deep threat. Didn't necessarily work out in Cleveland this season either, but Josh Reynolds, you have Sam Laporta, who I think is an interesting play at the tight end position, and we'll get there. But I do think Amon-Ra, I like a little bit more than Keenan Allen. The Chargers with Austin Eckler, again, somebody that we didn't even really talk about at the wide receiver position. These guys are so expensive. I mean, it's just an expensive team to be stacking up. Of course, the upside's there, but I got to get down to Amon-Ra St. Brown a little bit more. I feel like the Goff stacks, if I'm trying to capture the upside of that game with a run back of either Keenan Allen or Eckler, make a lot more sense just with the overall construction, unless you're just playing a bunch of Zach Charbonnet. I'm playing a little bit. No, I didn't mean to like bring him up as like a cornerstone piece at 4,200, but somebody that I'm going to have like 6-7% of. And some of those builds do have Chargers thrown together with it. So let's go down a little bit cheaper though, into this 6-7K range, which feels a little bit underrated. I mean, normally this has been the range that's getting peppered week in, week out, but because of Cincinnati and just what showed up here in the absence of Higgins, you're getting a range that's completely forgotten about. And I do have a bet with Loughy that DK Metcalf will remain under 10% owned. I hope he does. I understand there's rain. I understand it might be a weather situation. It's a Washington secondary. It's a Washington pass rush that got exponentially worse without Sweat and without Young there. I have to be playing DK Metcalf over the field if I call myself a tournament player. Otherwise, I should probably just pick up my things and go home. But I don't want to. I love New York. Talk to me about DK Metcalf and the rest of this range.
I like this range too. And the funny thing is a lot of them are attached to own QBs. So it's weird to me that, you know, DK is slightly under-owned. Chris Godwin's pretty under-owned. You can go down to Lockett and you can include Mike Evans in here as well. Like Geno and Baker are going to be played. So you can stack them and honestly not feel too bad about your lineup ownership wise and play some chalk around these guys. And you should feel pretty good about them talent wise. DK Metcalf is electric. The Washington secondary is horrific. There's now no pass rush. I don't know if you know this, Eric, or if the chat knows this. It rains in Seattle a lot. Today is not. They play in rainy games like 50% or more of their home games. It's not the first time these Seattle players have experienced rain. We should be worried about wind, really cold temperatures. Neither of those were occurring in Seattle. So I'm not scared by the weather at all. And then Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, I think sometimes they just cannibalize each other because people don't know who to pick, which honestly, if you pick either one of them, that could be a positive for you because they're both pretty underowned.
Yeah, it's gonna be one of those things. I'm more worried because Washington's gonna have to deal with actual fans in the stands, whereas when they play at home, they don't have to deal with that. So I think that might be a little bit difficult for them to get adjusted to. It's kind of loud there in Seattle from time to time, from what I hear. So that's that. I have worries that Washington won't be able to necessarily keep up with them the way that I need that game environment to. But it's easy to run back Jahan Dotson. It's easy to run back Terry McLaurin. It's easy to run back with Bijan Robinson. It's just, do I need to? Do I have to? I'm not sure yet here. I'm kind of still making some final decisions, but Lockett, DK Metcalf, those are two pieces that I am definitely going to be overweight to. Again, it just is too good of a spot. Washington giving up the most plays of 20 plus yards downfield this season to wide receivers and tight ends alike. So I have to be getting there for sure. Rest of the range is kind of dead to me, and it's kind of dead to the field. I do have a little bit of Amari Cooper, considering he's 0.8% owned here. He is a run back with some of that Lamar Jackson at 1% owned. Nobody wants to play that football game because divisional rivals, everybody else is getting attention. And then I'll just talk about it. Deebo Samuel is completely healthy and 5% owned. If you get a completely 100% healthy Deebo Samuel, which is what they've always done with him, I say this time and time again when Deebo Samuel gets activated and he's healthy, you just play him. He is so dynamic and does so many things, not just in the passing game, but in the rushing attack too. We'll get a couple of carries here and there. He's too damn good at 6,200 to be 5% owned here in a game environment that could be decent. Obviously, two good defenses so far this season on both sides. San Francisco giving up a little bit more passing yardage than one might think. But how do you feel about Deebo in these lower 6K plays?
Yeah, I actually boosted him. I like Deebo quite a bit.
Look at you.
Target volume should be good. Game environment's awesome. Using Purdy quite a bit. No issues with Deebo. We just haven't seen him in a while.
That makes me happy to not have seen him in a while, because then people forget about Dre. It's nowadays everybody want to talk. Like, they got something to say. Does Eminem count as a rapper?
Yeah, Eminem's a rapper.
Still holding tight to Nelly's not a rapper, are you?
That's not a hot take.
You disappoint me sometimes. It's really hard to... 5K range, everybody. We've got some interesting ones. Tank Dell getting steamed. Calvin Ridley getting steamed a little bit. Interesting 5K range. Deontay Johnson. This has been a crazy phenomenon here in the Sims tool. And I would like to pull up the Sims tool here, Jordan Klein, and take a look. Because I think Deontay Johnson, when you save out 150 over in the old Sims tool, that is a guy that you will get quite a bit of. And I think it makes all the sense in all the land. If he's catching footballs, because he's been known to have greasy fingers from time to time, not like the Greasy Bandits, Home Alone 2 kind of way. Two turtle lounge for those who care. But Deontay Johnson, 5,400 for a guy coming off of 14 and 9 targets, seems to be the alpha pick and sitting pretty far behind for me. I think this is a pretty good chance to be overweight to a chalk piece in your builds in Deontay Johnson. Love him for tournaments today as well. Tank Dell, I'm going to be a tiny bit under, but that was always going to happen. How are you feeling about the 5K range in some of these chalkier pieces?
It's not a range I'm in love with. I kind of like the Washington guys just because they drop back and throw the ball so much. And again, I'm not worried about rain in Seattle. And that game environment should be pretty good. Seattle's defense has played better lately. But I mean, Washington treats Sam Howell like he's Patrick Mahomes. I don't know why, but it leads to a lot of output for their receivers. It's kind of hard to predict who it'll be, but I think you could use like a McLaurin just fine. And Dotson's in that 5K range, so I have no problem with either of them. I like Ridley a lot. We already talked about him quite a bit, so I won't belabor that point. Another game environment I'm getting a lot of. I understand the ownership to Tank Dell. Honestly, I thought it would be higher. Like seeing Deontay Johnson coming with higher ownership than Tank Dell surprises me a little bit. Obviously, some of this injury related with Dell, no Nico Collins, expecting a pretty good timeshare in an up and down game. The targets are there for Deontay Johnson, but man, that game environment's terrible. It's two quarterbacks that are just absolutely atrocious facing each other. Scoring output's going to be really low. I honestly have no problem fading Deontay Johnson. I'm surprised he's coming in as owned as he is.
A. Olsen, 72178. Of course, it was the Wet Bandits. It was the Wet Bandits in Home Alone 1. In Home Alone 2, they become the Sticky Bandits because he puts his hand at the whole coin thing and he pulls it up at the toy store. He like goes into the Salvation Army thing and has the quarters. Anybody? Bueller?
Dude, I don't know. You watch too much movies.
You watch no movies because you are just a savage. You're just an insane person. You sit out there grinding projections day in, day out. No awareness for anything else in the world. But you know what? We love you for it. And how was college football yesterday?
It was okay. Not bad. It was fun. Missouri is really good, but lost some money. So that's never good.
Yeah. Well, that is bad. That would be bad. But
losing money happens. It's part of the game.
It is part of the game. You're going to lose more than you win, but when you win, you want to win big. And that is what we're here to do here. Again, that's the Sims tool. That's the beauty of it. We are in it to win it. All he needs is 1 week, one damn week, and it can change your life. That's the beautiful thing of why we're here every single day. And that's the beautiful thing of Marquise Brown, who is the one massively chalky piece that we have here from the Arizona side. We've seen Trey McBride come down a little bit, 16, 15% here, but at the wide receiver position, Marquise Brown, I mean, this is just a dude that if you're playing cash, I think you have to click on Marquise Brown. He's probably the one piece I couldn't live without in cash at the wide receiver position. I know Amon-Ra St. Brown is somebody that a lot of people are going to. I'd be more inclined to go to Jamar Chase up at the upper 8K range out of wide receivers. But how do you feel about Marquise Brown in this situation?
Yeah, I'm surprised that Deontay Johnson's even approaching him in ownership. I think he's a far better play. You get the quarterback upgrade and the targets, like all year he's had an awesome target share. The problem has been the catchability of those targets. Kyler Murray has to be better than the combination of Dobbs and Clayton Tune. Just like flat out has to be. Atlanta's defense is okay. I'm not really scared of them, but it's also not like a matchup I'm targeting. But yeah, it's just target volume at this price tag for Marquise Brown. I think it's up there with Deontay Johnson, and efficiency should be better.
Okay. Well, there we go. Sub 5K. Should we talk Cincinnati? Because that's what everybody wants to hear about. Tyler Boyd, 4,600. What are you doing with him in tournaments?
I'll be playing some of Tyler Boyd. He's owned. He's not quite as cheap as like a Trenton Irwin. And he's been in this spot before and failed a lot of times. So with the ownership, I think you can make pivots. It's a range that's okay. There's not like locked in studs around him. But the way I look at it is I kind of either want to get up to this 5K range we talked about or go down cheaper than lock in like a 4,600 Tyler Boyd. Or the alternatives, we're talking Michael Thomas, Rashid Shaheed, Brandon Cooks, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Quentin Johnston, none of whom I have a ton of interest in. So this is a range I just don't find myself landing in a lot. Boyd is the player I have the most of, but I'm going to be looking to come in underweight to him.
The guy I have the most of is Rondale Moore. I need help. Please get me off of this reef.
I mean, he's the stone minimum. He doesn't have to do anything and he's still fine.
No, I have 32% of him. I should not.
We're big Rondale fans today, I guess.
Oh God, I'm going to be so broke.
Go Rondale.
God. Purdue legend Rondale Moore.
He was a legend there.
He was outrageously good because he just did everything. He's like, what, 5'6", 5'7", just a little dude out there running, but son of a
Ohio
biscuit.
State that year.
Oh, yeah. He was outrageous. He was outrageous in the old college football streets, that's for sure. We got a super chat here. Mason, $5. Matty G, he doesn't care about me. That's just fine by me. Matty G, are you playing Burrow with 2 pass catchers and Mixon, or just throw Geno in for DK cash? I won't answer. I'll let you go, Matt, because it was questioned towards you.
For a cash, I think you can. That's a tough decision, but they all project well. It's Burrow, Mixon, and Chase for sure. And then I think it's whether you want to include Irwin.
All right. And I love this question from Dustin Simpson. $5. Love the Stokastic avatar he has next to his name. Matt, we overlooked Cade Klubnik yesterday. I don't know who that is.
He's the Clemson quarterback. I actually don't know his box score, so I can't really comment on it, but it sounds like he did good. I'm a known Cade Klubnik hater, so if he played well, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, I mean, we've got the transfer to Oregon State. He's just playing phenomenal football over there, so that was an oopsie by Clemson. I don't know. That's how I feel about that. Top stack for a single entry, $50 to $100 with 4K entries. This is why I love this question. because we have the top stacks tool. I think that that's going to help inform a lot of things, but a lot of what we do is built for the largest field GPPs, for the Millie Maker, for the $9 slant, for things of that nature. And you have to kind of look at things through a different lens when you're talking about a small field tournament here. My assumption is that Joe Burrow ends up getting to like the 25-30% range. And I think I would be okay with that still in some of these small field type tournaments. I don't think you need to take the Kyler Murray shot even though, but I go to the top stacks tool. Jordan Klein, pull that up here quick. We have Cincinnati with a 15.1% chance of finishing as the top stack on DK. Detroit is number 2 and Dallas is number 3. I feel like Dallas is one team that just nobody is playing here whatsoever today. And that makes very little sense to me because they should score a bunch of touchdowns. CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, pretty easy double you can put together there. Tony Pollard, another piece that's interesting. But I think for like a small field tournament, if we're talking about just a 3% difference in top stack potential for Cincinnati compared to Detroit or Dallas, I would be inclined in those small field tournaments to recommend to you Jared Goff or the guy that I'm a known hater of, but Dak Prescott. How do you feel about a small field tournament? Who would you be firing up for your stack?
Yeah, I'm still getting a lot of Joe Burrow in the small fields. So if you're not playing Joe Burrow and you just want to gain a lot of leverage there, my 2 favorites would be Geno or Trevor Lawrence. I like the stacks you can make with both electric game environments. And both of them are cheap enough where you can still get some of the Cincinnati pieces. Like it shouldn't be too hard to build a Trevor Lawrence stack with Kirk or Ridley and still get Jamar in your lineup. So if you don't want to play the Burrow side, those are the top 2 I'd look to.
All right, let's finish out the sub 5K position here, but great questions. I think that those both, I love the timeliness too, when we're talking about the wide receiver position and the stacks. Michael Thomas, Rashid Shaheed, I think you can take shots on the car double, but I don't really want to be doing that without Olave, without Kamara. So, I mean, they're both kind of just so difficult for me to figure out who I would want to be clicking on against Minnesota secondary. Defense has been playing better week in, week out here. Some of that is because you face teams like Atlanta that are starting Taylor Heineke. You're going to look good from time to time, but Jackson Smith and Jigba, Quentin Johnston, I don't think as necessary on a slate like this. I thought I would have some Jackson Smith and Jigba, and then everything happened with Arizona for me, and all is lost. Last guy I think we really got to talk about is Noah Brown here. Houston, he's been on the field an absolute ton in the absence of Robert Woods. And then now you have Nico Collins. So you're basically just switching that out where Robert Woods comes back. Does this affect the role for Noah Brown having Robert Woods in as opposed to Nico Collins? If so, how are we handling him around 10% ownership?
I don't think it matters a lot. If anything, it might be a positive because Robert Woods is washed at this point. But honestly, I'm just trying to play a lot of Tank Dell because I don't have a lot of confidence in Noah Brown or Robert Woods individually. But as far as pricing goes, Noah Brown's definitely at a spot where you'd like to target him. He plays in the slot a ton. So there are positives to his game. I am playing him sort of like a sprinkling in large field sets, but individually I have a lot of question with the talent. It's just, can CJ Stroud elevate him? And he's been able to thus far. So that's at least worth noting.
All right, friends, smash the like button. Please, please, please. We got 20 minutes left. We got 3.5K people hanging out on a beautiful Sunday here in the football streets. Can't thank you enough for spending your mornings with us, hanging out here, talking a little bit of pigskin, kicking it. Don't think they're made out of pigskin anymore, but that's beside the point. We got to get to tight end here. We also got to check in on overlay. Again, Owner's Box, you got 20 minutes to be able to sign up, get some stuff going here in the Sims tool, and be able to make some positive EV lineups there. I mean, just outrageous. This is just outrageous. Every single week this happens where it's just like, I can't believe the overlay that I am staring at there on the screen. 54%. 54%. That's absurd. That is as good of overlay as you're going to find in this industry, period, bar none. Check out Owner's Box. As we head to tight end, I don't even think we really want to start on the expensive side. I think we just kind of talk about the chalk here first and what exists. We've got TJ Hawkinson, again, inexplicably the highest owned tight end with a lot of uncertainty, although he's basically out there just running routes, living his life because he got to know 12 targets last time. Trey McBride, really, really popular, 3,500. I'm obviously overweight to him with Kyler Murray. And then Dalton Schultz coming along for the ride. No Nico Collins, no problem. Dalton Schultz is there to save the day. 11 targets, 10 catches, 130 and a tutty last week. Ceiling, beyond ceiling game. He scored in 4 of his last 5. That's nifty as well. Out of these chalky tight ends, anybody just standing out to you as your favorite?
Yeah, man, missed the days where he was 3,200 and no one was playing him. Dalton Schultz, that is. Now he's 49 and everyone's playing him. Look how far we've come. But he's a talented tight end attached to CJ Stroud. I still think he's fine in this range. Part of the reason we're parked in this mid-4 to mid-5K range is Andrews in an exceedingly difficult matchup. Kittle now has to contend with Ayuk and Debo being back, which just leads to a lot of volatility. And then the other expensive tight ends are like Taysom Hill, who's probably the hardest player to project in fantasy football, and Laporta, who I think is fine in a tough matchup. So you put like the most owned designation on Hawkinson, that's 18%. He's really not that difficult or different, I should say, than Schultz, Ferguson, Engram, or Laporta. They're kind of all spread. So if you end up on TJ Hawkinson, I don't really have a big problem with that, just because the gaps between him and those other 5 tight ends are not vast. So, you know, if you made the pivot down to Ferguson, for example, do you really gain that much leverage off Hawkinson? I don't think the answer is yes. So I'm just trying to spread my ownership across all these guys, stacking these tight ends when it makes sense, because I think they're very clearly the 5 best, and they're all in the better game environments or with the better target shares. A lot of this comes down to who I'm playing at quarterback. Is this part of a game stack or not, honestly?
Yep. That's very true. I think tight end, that's been what it's been all season long. That's why I'm surprised to see TJ Hawkinson sitting up there as the highest owned at 18%, because I don't think people are running to the window to play Josh Dobbs against one New Orleans Saints defense that has been more than serviceable. So
he's my lowest in this range.
Agreed. That's what I was kind of getting at, is Trey McBride showing up an absolute metric ton for me. Dalton Schultz, I think, is a good play. Evan Ingram, I think, is a good play. But then Sam Laporta kind of gets forgotten about. He's sitting at 5,700, so he's a little bit cheaper than Andrews and Kittle. I have virtually no Kittle interest with Deebo Samuel back. It's a known thing. And then I have zero interest in the guys in Taysom Hill and TJ Hawkinson sitting right below Sam Laporta, kind of on an island there, 12.5% owned, but it gives me a tight end position that has exposure to the late window. And I have enough Trey McBride that doesn't necessarily matter, but he's 5,700 with salary to move around, to be able to have some of that late swap ability. I like being a little bit overweight to him compared to a TJ Hawkinson in the early window. Obviously, if somebody goes for 20, you're going to want them no matter what, but I love the late swap game for this specific slate with 4 games in the late window. I think you should too. How do you feel about Sam Laporta there against the Chargers?
Yeah, I think he's fine. Great game environment. I think he's going to be a little underowned. The real question is, do you want to, save the $1,000 by going down to one of these other guys? That's really the only big difference between him and Schultz, Ferguson, Engram. You have to pay $1,000 more, roughly, depending on which one you're going up from. So I still would rather get to the Schultz, Ferguson, Engram tier over Laporta. But if he ends up being in your game stack, I have no problem. That's mainly where I'm playing him, is in those Detroit, LA lineups. But I would rather get down to the other 3.
We got one question here. People haven't been talking FanDuel this time. I have a couple FanDuel lineups here. FanDuel GPP, Pollard, Henry, or Bijan Eckler for you?
I'm not playing FanDuel, so I don't know the context of the slate.
Yeah, I would actually be looking more towards Bijan Eckler, Pollard, Henry. I mean, Henry, we know by now, if they are up, it's going to be a lot of Henry. If they are down, it's going to not be a lot of Henry. That is always difficult. You are trying to target touchdowns there, though, like the Pollard play, but probably more inclined to be going Bijan Eckler, even though Bijan, somebody that is not going to be in my lineups today. I have zero interest in Henry, I think is what it's coming down to. Nick Thompson, member for 18 months. Eric, tiers, awesome. We'll do that. Then we'll talk about the cheapies at tight end, maybe some flyers. Some Irv Smith to maybe wet your beak, 2,700. There's like 3 tight ends that are in play. Tanner Hudson from Cincinnati as well. Somebody at 2,500 that I'm trying to get different with. But let's go through the tiers here for my friend, mainly because he always asks about tiers on the DK show or for the NBA show as well. Want to be able to get him the good info here. Tier 1 for me. I'm just going to go straight off of Stokastic projections. We got Joe Burrow, tier 1. Tier 2, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Tier 3, Austin Eckler. Tier 4, we've got Travis Etienne, which is a name we haven't really thrown out there. Think he's a little sneaky, but going to be tough for me to get to on this slate. Dak Prescott, tier 5. Tier 6, Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones. Tier 7, Rachaad White. And tier 8, Deontay Johnson. Thank you so much for the super chat, for all of the great stuff. And again, 18 months. That's lovely. Jeff Williams, $4.99. Please rank for DK Cash priorities. Ooh, these are my kind of questions. I am playing DK Cash a little bit today. Burrow, Mixon, Chase, St. Brown, Marquise Brown. All right. In terms of priority, Joe Burrow was always going to be my quarterback. So that's number one. Number two, you have to play Joe Mixon in cash. There's just no way around it. I think then it gets interesting because I prioritize Marquise Brown at 5,200. And then Chase and St. Brown, I guess they would kind of be in the 4 or 5 hole. Who do you prefer between those two again?
I prefer Chase.
Okay, you're preferring Chase. I'm with you. I prefer Chase. I like Amon-Ra St. Brown for tournaments. There's no doubt about it. Phenomenal upside. Nobody is going to bat an eye at Amon-Ra St. Brown. But in cash, I think I'm more inclined to be clicking on Chase. That is my personal take on that one. And then, yeah, Marquise Brown, I think, is like a priority for cash as well. But a really good sense of the builds there. We got my guy Min in chat there as well. Hi, Eric. Good morning. Good morning to you all as well. It's a beautiful time. 13 minutes to go. Let's round out the tight end position. Talked about some Cincinnati pieces that could be interesting. Any cheapies that you're finding in your lineups that are, obviously probably correlated with your quarterbacks, but anybody who's taking precedent for you?
Logan Thomas, I think, is interesting in that game environment versus Seattle. He's mainly a correlation piece, like you mentioned, but the volume's really good for him. If you ended up with him as a one-off, I don't hate it just because the targets are solid. You probably question the upside, but again, Washington's going to drop back so many times. Cade Otton, he's coming off the big game, so I don't think he's going to sneak up on anybody anymore for Tampa Bay. Not as interested in that game environment, especially with Baker coming up in ownership, so I'm a little lower on Otton, but he's at least worth mentioning because he plays a ton down here. Then you get to Chigokonkwo. There's so much volatility just based on the quarterback change. He's awesome individually, really athletic, and he's cheap, so I have no problem with Okonkwo. But once we get below that, I don't have a lot of interest in really any of these guys. You mentioned Irv Smith. He's kind of a hold your nose play. He's not out there for a full route share, so that's a little difficult for me. But you got to at least mention it.
Yep, you got to at least throw it out there for the people. Just like we have to cover defense because it is a requirement that you roster somebody on DraftKings or FanDuel for some ungodforeseen reason. We are still talking about defense, so let's have some fun with it, shall we? The Cowboys are 4,400. They are crazy expensive, but they get to face the 12th best quarterback, according to Matt Gajewski, in 2022 in the Big Ten, Tommy DeVito. Holy mother of God, 4,400. Am I crazy? Because again, defense, there's a lot of volatility to it here. And, there's a chance of failure, but they're the most popular defense. We never see this ever, where the two most popular teams at defense are the two most expensive here, or I guess one's a little bit lower there, Seahawks at 4,100. But the Cowboys and Ravens are pulling so much ownership. I still can't get away from the Cowboys in tournaments. How about you?
I can't either. It's pretty nice for your defense when you're playing 10 on 11 for an entire game. And that's what they're going to be doing. So huge advantage. They're not expensive enough. They still could fail, though. Like, a lot of this might just come down to they have an awesome game, but do they score a touchdown? You know what I mean? And someone's going to score a defensive touchdown today. The problem is picking who it's going to be. But if you wanted to, blindly fade Dallas and then just spray your defenses across the board, I don't think that's a terrible approach because of how owned they are. The Sims gave me more Tampa Bay than anyone, which was really interesting to me. And honestly, I don't have, a great reason why that might be. But they came up a lot. I'm sure some of that just has to do with pricing. The Ravens were the third most owned defense for me. I think facing Deshaun Watson is going to be a very nice play for them. But yeah, maybe the Tampa Bay thing is just facing, a rookie signal caller, but they were my most owned defense. I was a little surprised by it.
I guess I'm not. I mean, we got to assume there's going to be some growing pains for Will Levis, like there are for most rookie quarterbacks, but because he looked so dynamic against Atlanta 2 weeks ago, it was one of those things where you feel as though he's kind of already pretty polished. Pittsburgh defense last week, I thought he looked pretty good relative to how good Pittsburgh defense is. So it is what it is. But those are only 2 games. It's a 2-game sample size on a rookie quarterback here. I don't completely hate that idea. Tampa Bay has had some shootouts with CJ Stroud. They've also clamped down on some teams like the Minnesota Vikings in week 1 and Minnesota with Kirk Cousins. They still had an offense that was hitting at a pretty high clip there until his injury. So it's going to be one that I think makes sense from the Sims tool here. So I'm with you where it was something that was a little surprising to me, but I'm rolling with it because the data has been awesome in the NBA streets. It's been awesome in the NFL streets all season long. So check out all of the great Sims packages that we have here at Stokastic and get yourself a little bit of an edge on the competition. Not even a little bit, a huge edge on the competition by checking out all of our Sims products because they are the best in the industry. And I feel pretty confident in saying that, not just because I've been winning with them, but seeing the avatars at the top of tournaments. It's been awesome to see. Again, don't forget Awesemo, HOF, or Stokastic HOF. I always go back to that. Stokastic HOF friends. Jordan Klein is just going to shake his head in shame every single time I do. But here's the thing is that I'm so used to that being the Hall of Fame. But Stokastic standing into Hall of Fame. Check it out, friends. Get yourself that free month of the Stokastic Sims tool if you finish in the top 3 of any tournament there, 5,000 or more entries, $1 or more. Good stuff. All right. Any other defenses on the cheap that you might be looking at? Because I have a little bit of Cincinnati exposure here. It's purely a leverage thing, a little bit of Texans exposure. That's a huge leverage thing. If somehow, some way Joe Burrow doesn't have a ceiling game, would love that for some of those Houston lineups. But any other contrarian takes that you have for defense?
You got some Arizona just facing Atlanta's inept offense. They don't throw the ball a ton, but they're live. I got some of the Lions, and I think that's partially just because LA drops back so much and Detroit does have a good pass rush. But really cheap is hard to come by. Like, I'm not playing the Giants. The Jaguars are facing San Francisco. It's kind of the Cardinals or going up a little bit from there. Who are your cheap ones?
I said Houston, I think is interesting just because of how insanely popular Cincinnati's going to be. And they should be. Cincinnati stacks. They should be. But Houston is like the insane leverage point where if you want to bypass a lot of people, if you have no Cincinnati pieces in your lineup and you somehow, some way have the Texans be the team that scores the pick 6, you are vaulting to the top of the leaderboard. And so, yeah, in my 5 big lineups that I build out every week on DK, they are the defense in one of them. So that'll be fun. Holy Mother of God, Big Money NJ. We got some super chats that we're going to round out the show with 7 minutes to go. Smash the like button. Big Money New Jersey. I know you over on the Twitters, my guy. Really appreciate $50 super chat. Winning is best when shared with those who create value. Matt and Eric create tremendous value. Thank you guys and good luck today. Dude, we appreciate you. We're happy to be here. And obviously, Matt and I both love what we do. Matt is the best at college sports, period. End of story, full stop. I am okay at the professional sports, the old betting and the old DFS, but just trying to keep up with Matt here because he is the absolute GOAT. But we appreciate you, Big Money, New Jersey. Slick Spoon, $4. Curtis Samuels, question mark? A question mark is appropriate for Curtis Samuels there.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's fine. You worry about the role, I guess, a little bit coming off the injury, but yeah, no problem with Curtis Samuel.
All right. Let me finish this out and make sure that I have the right guy in the right place. There we are. Okay. Now we can revamp our lives right here. Click and set. Okay. I got all my lineups uploaded. That's beautiful stuff. Fantasy Guru 76, $10. Sleeper quarterback FanDuel and best tight end. Looking at the FanDuel board, sleeper, again, Kyler Murray. The rushing upside, maybe you get a goal line touch for him, although I bet James Conner is still going to be the guy there, but we've seen it before. It could happen again. He is completely unowned over on FanDuel. So Kyler Murray, and then best tight end. I think relative to price over on FanDuel, it's still going to be Trey McBride for me personally, but Evan Ingram's pretty darn cheap over there as well. Think that that's somebody to maybe fire up. A little bit better play on FanDuel than he is on DK, although he's a good play on both sites. Let's get ourselves. Oh, did we get the final tally? Is Nelly a rapper or not? Nelly's a rapper. 63% of people are correct and can go on living their lives knowing that they're not sad, pathetic, little hot dog guzzlers like my guy Matt Gajewski over there, just down in coffee, followed by tuna, followed by just a disgusting lifestyle. It is what it is. 62%. You are so genius, people.
Congrats, Eric.
Nothing to say. Thank you. I feel good about
welcome.
that. I did something with my day. Defended the honor that is for one Nelly. Going down, baby. No street in a Range Rover. Street sweeper, baby. Cock. Ready to let it go.
Now you can go find your D-list outdoor venue, and he'll be there on Wednesday night this week, more than likely.
Take it back. Take it back.
We have this one show in Milwaukee called Summerfest. Every summer, Nelly's there. Fills out some random Tuesday night, 6 p.m. show. you can bet money on it. He's there every summer. Cash and
It
checks.
makes me so happy that he's there every summer. Oh, man. It is what it is. Eric's my favorite. You're my favorite, Quinn. You're my favorite, too. 4 minutes to go. Make sure you get your lineups in. I did. Anything that stood out to you? Because you obviously were building while we were on this show because, you were too busy trying to give people usable data in the college basketball streets like a good human being. But anything that stood out to you in your final builds?
I think it was mainly just the takeaways in the small field stuff, which sometimes the Sims I think are really, really helpful with, because I come in with these notions like I don't want to play the high owned guys. And then there's a point where they're under owned. So for me, it was seeing Burrow come in 45% of my lineups in small field tournaments. I'm talking about 2,000 to 5,000 people, and then me getting 45% of them in lineups. Same thing with Mixon, was still getting a fair amount of him. And sometimes they were together. And, in small fields, you don't have to win the Millie Maker. Like, you don't have to get the stone nuts in your lineup. Sometimes it's just getting the team that scores a lot of points and having decent amount of pieces from it to win those small tournaments. It's kind of a lesson I've learned. And I think today was a really good example of that when I went and ran the Sims in my small field stuff.
Don't be afraid to play two pass catchers without Burrow. They're all popular for a reason. There are going to be a lot of times you could run into a cheaper quarterback and have them go for that ceiling game. I have a lot of Mixon, Tyler Boyd without Joe Burrow. I just want to throw that out there because some people don't have an affinity for doing that, especially in something like the 3-point stance, the 5 entry max that I love so much. Those are the things that I'm trying to do to find ways to get different without being stupid. Making sure that I have my lineups kind of all working together. That's what the Sims tool does such a good job of. And I think that that's probably the most under talked about situation with it is like, it's not just giving you the best data where 10,000 different iterations of this tournament, firing it up to the top, but like it's giving you constructions that as you go through them, you get very, very in-depth with the data. And you see that a lot of these QB2s don't have run backs. QB1s don't have run backs. Those are my 2 highest simulated ROIs. Now, I've done some small boosts, obviously, to get a little bit more Arizona that I wasn't getting before, but I find it very interesting to see no run backs in some of those. And then a lot of those with Boyd and, Chase or Boyd and Mixon that don't have Burrow along for the ride. So thought I'd point it out here. Who is going to be the stack that wins you $1 million here, Gajewski? 100 yards and a touchdown as well. We got 100 yards and 2 touchdowns for some people, but what's going to be the stack that wins it for you? And who is your 100 yards and a touchdown call today?
Yeah, it's going to be Trevor Lawrence, and the 100 yards and a touchdown is going to be Calvin Ridley. Takes on the Millie today.
Ooh, Calvin Ridley. I'll go to the other side of that game there for Deebo Samuel. Nobody wants to click on Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk. I love both of them for tournaments today. Gonna be playing them a little bit more than the average bear. God, I want to click on Jordan Addison too and say that we haven't talked about him throughout this program, and that's somebody I was a little bit higher on here, it would seem, than the field, but I will keep that one to myself. Yeah, that pretty much does it for us here. We should get ourselves the heck up out of here. Don't forget about NFL Live Before Lock for the evening game. I believe the Jets are playing. That should be fun, huh? Enjoy that one. That's for sure. Oh, Zach Wilson season. Zach Wilson is trash. Brrr. Real ones know. Do you know what that's from? Jessica?
He's the best quarterback in New York right now. Actually, I guess Buffalo's in New York. Sometimes I forget that. Yeah. In New York City, the Jets versus the Giants. Zach Wilson over Tommy DeVito every day of the week.
Probably with you. Guys, let's get out of here, friends. We are officially at lock. Get out of here. Enjoy that NFL Live Before Lock here coming up later in the evening. I'm going to get myself out of here, watch a little football, go walk down Central Park, live my life because I got to know how to do it one more time. We'll see you guys later. Thank you, Jordan Klein.